wizards of Hogwarts who registered in Middle-earth. Greetings, fellow multiversal adventurers. It's an honor to have you back in the saga that has us all hooked. Official channel statement: this story is 100% epic fiction. So please don't attempt real magic, the results aren't guaranteed and insurance won't cover it. The rights to this masterpiece belong entirely to its brilliant original author. We are just a barge sharing it with you. Do you want to keep being part of this amazing community? Join our ninja army of subscribers on YouTube and give this content a like. And for true fans, our Patreon has exclusive ninjutsu waiting for you. Chapter 101: The Dragon Smog. After leaving the Chamber of Secrets, Bilbo tiptoed to the treasury. It was a vast hall, filled with mountains of gold, silver, and jewels, gleaming with a coveted brilliance in the dim light. Bilbo was stunned by the sheer volume of the treasure, but then a wave of distress descended upon him. This mountain of treasure stretched as far as the eye could see. Finding a fist-sized arkenstone amidst all this treasure was like searching for a needle in a haystack. Not to mention, there was a dragon guarding the place. Speaking of dragons, Bilbo glanced around, but there was no sign of them. Where had the dragon gone? A wave of unease gripped Bilbo. Had it hidden itself? However, his own invisibility, combined with the protective spells cast by Dewey, reassured him. Then, tiptoeing over the gold coins, he searched for any trace of the arkenstone. Because of the hobbit's silent large paws, and aided by Dewey's spell, Bilbo's steps seemed weightless, and even the gold coins he stepped on made no sound. This, in turn, didn't alert the hidden dragon. Finding a single gem amidst a mountain of treasure was like finding gold in the sand, no easy task at all. Perhaps it was Bilbo's luck, but after searching for a long time, he finally found it atop the highest mountain of gold. Before his arrival, Bilbo had asked Thorin about the arkenstone. Thorin didn't explain, simply telling him that it was unlike other gems and could be identified at first sight. Bilbo didn't understand at first, but upon seeing the gem, he knew for sure it was the arkenstone. A pure, flawless white gem, it shone with a radiant light, as if containing galaxies. Its extraordinary nature was immediately apparent. The arkenstone, also known as the Heart of the Mountain, was dug from the depths of the lonely mountain. The dwarves, with great effort, forged it into a gleaming gem and set it atop the throne, becoming a symbol of their sovereignty in the kingdom beneath the mountain. Bilbo was overjoyed upon seeing the arkenstone and immediately set out to climb the mountain of gold to get it. But just as he finally reached the summit and was about to bend over to grab the gem, the mountain of gold beneath his feet suddenly shook. The mountain of gold slid down like a landslide, and even the arkenstone disappeared into the golden river. A gigantic figure emerged from beneath the mountain of gold. Bilbo's eyes widened in horror, for he was now standing atop a dragon. Bilbo took a deep breath, immediately leaped off the dragon's head, rolled down onto the mountain of gold, and quickly ran away. The dragon opened its eyes, its huge, vertical pupils fixed on Bilbo's ethereal, blurry figure. "Little thief, you don't have the aura of a dwarf or a human. What are you? And what kind of magic has been cast on you that I can't see you?" The dragon's long tail swung around Bilbo, encircling him and blocking all escape routes. "But I smell your scent, hear your breath, sense your presence. You have nowhere to hide." Bilbo swallowed hard, taking in the dragon's massive form and the terrifying aura it emanated. He tried to calm his pounding heart, met the dragon's gaze, and spoke carefully. "Smog of unlimited wealth, I'm a hobbit. I've stumbled upon this place by mistake. I'm sorry, but I'm leaving now." "By mistake?" The dragon's eyes shone with sarcasm. "Tisk tisk, you lying thief. I've seen countless people covet dragon treasures, each one overestimating their own capabilities. When caught, they resort to all sorts of flattering tricks, hoping to get me to spare their lives. But do you know what their ultimate fate is?" The dragon's cunning eyes were filled with amusement and malice. What? Bilbo, sensing a bad premonition, slipped a hand into his pocket. "I burned them to ashes with my dragonfire." A scorching heat surged from the dragon's chest, and flames threatened to burst from its mouth. Seeing the situation was dire, Bilbo immediately pulled a ring from his pocket and put it on his finger, instantly fading into the dark realm. The dragon could not find Bilbo at all. "Where are you, little thief? Come out, don't be shy, come out into the light. I sense something unusual about you. It's something you have, made of gold, but far more precious than that treasure. It looks like something from an old friend of mine, and it holds extraordinary magical power." The dragon's words carried a hypnotic, bewitching power. By the time Bilbo realized what was happening, he had already removed the ring and reappeared in the dragon's sight. Aha! So you're here. The dragon's eyes lit up, as if it had caught its prey. Seeing Smaug's expression, as if he had caught him, Bilbo's breath quickened. He quickly pulled the mandrake from his enchanted pocket and threw it at the dragon. A soul-stirring cry erupted from the treasure vault, echoing through the empty room with a deadly power. The dragon's face flashed with agony, as if struck hard. The mandrake's cries couldn't kill him, but they agonized him, like sharp needles piercing his ears and even his brain. The dragon desperately shook his head, trying to distance himself from the agonizing sound. But the entire vault echoed with the sound, so where could he hide? In agony, Smaug writhed frantically, emitting a series of agonized dragon roars. Only after he buried the mandrake amidst the gold coins, successfully silencing the sound, did the dragon finally escape. The dragon's heart lingered, and then it was filled with endless rage and hatred. Thief! I want revenge. I will kill you. And your people too. I will find them all and destroy them all with dragon fire. Bilbo had already taken the opportunity to flee, but upon hearing the dragon's vow of vengeance, panic and regret welled up in his heart. No, you can't do that. The other hobbits are innocent. They know nothing of this. Bilbo couldn't imagine the sight of the Shire being retaliated by the dragon and engulfed in flames because of him. The dragon quickly locked onto Bilbo's direction, as if it had found his weak spot, its eyes filled with the joy and triumph of revenge. They will be consumed by dragon fire for your offense against the dragon. And you can't stop them. Bilbo was uneasy at the dragon's words. He gritted his teeth, his eyes determined. He must not let the dragon leave the lonely mountain. Otherwise, the Shire would be doomed. With this thought, he immediately took out a gold coin Dui had given him and tapped it with his fingers. I've got you. The dragon suddenly appeared before Bilbo, its huge, vertical eyes fixed on him with a ferocious, evil grin. Bilbo watched in horror as its maw opened towards him, about to burst forth with flames. Shatter to pieces, a dazzling spell instantly struck the dragon. Dui! Bilbo exclaimed in delight, as if he had found his savior. Dui, riding his broomstick, rushed towards Bilbo, picked him up and threw him behind him, avoiding the dragon's flames. Dui looked at the unharmed dragon with a serious expression. The dragon's defense was so strong that even the most powerful spells could not break through its scales and cause damage. Wizard, the dragon Smaug stopped attacking and looked at Dui in surprise. Who are you? Where are you from? Chapter 102, Battle with the Dragon. Dewey didn't answer the dragon Smaug's question. The dragon's words held a magical power, like a spirit's words, capable of hypnotizing and bewitching the mind, compelling it to obey. Even Smaug's gaze could exert direct mental control, creating illusions and manipulating its victims through words and gaze. Ordinary humans and dwarves were completely defenseless, and could be manipulated once they came into contact with his gaze. Even treasures that the dragon had frequently touched could possess a magical power, driving people to obsession and madness. The dragon disease inherited by Thorin's bloodline stemmed from this. Dragons are creatures with virtually no weaknesses. They possess not only exceptional intelligence and extraordinary perception, but also the power of dragon spells and mind control, the ability to breathe blazing dragon fire, and exceptionally high physical and magical defenses. They are a powerful and perfect creature created by the Dark Morgoth. And now, facing Smaug, the only active dragon in Middle-earth, Dewey immediately unleashed his most powerful attack. Avada Kedavra, a dazzling green light emanated from Dewey's wand, instantly striking the dragon Smaug. The dragon Smaug let out a shrill cry and collapsed into the treasure, the light in his eyes instantly extinguished. Is he dead? Bilbo, sitting behind Dewey, asked with wide eyes. Dewey was also filled with doubt and uncertainty. Could he have killed the dragon just like that? So easily? But before he could investigate, he heard the sound of hurried footsteps. It was Gandalf and the dwarves, hurrying over. Seeing the dragon lying lifeless atop the treasure, the dwarves were stunned at first, then erupted in wild cheers and celebration. Thorin Oakenshield, in particular, was especially ecstatic. His nightmare had died. His treasure, his kingdom, was his again. Gandalf was startled at the sight of Smaug's body, but then his expression changed. He shouted, "Get out of the way. The dragon isn't dead yet." Before he could finish his words, the dragon's eyes blazed again, filled with endless hatred and malice. He opened his maw and spewed blazing flames towards them. Super armor, Dewey reacted quickly, deploying his strongest defenses. The next second, The scorching dragon flames collided with the armor, unleashing a violent reaction. The flames were so intense that gold melted instantly wherever they touched them, and even Dewey's magical barrier was shattered by the flames. Even though they blocked the direct attack of the dragon's flames, the scorching heat still made everyone feel incredibly uncomfortable. Even more terrifying, the dragon Smaug, breathing fire furiously, swung his powerful tail like a battering ram, bringing down the group. Gandalf made a decisive move: retreat to the hall. Don't stay here. Upon hearing this, the dwarves retreated swiftly, using the massive stone pillars as cover as they ran towards the hall. Gandalf followed closely behind. Dewey and Bilbo, the last remaining, dodged on their broomsticks a second before the barrier shattered. Revenge. Vengeance. Wizards, dwarves, hobbits, I will destroy you all with dragonfire, the dragon roared furiously. Dewey and Bilbo rode on their broomsticks, dodging giant stone pillars and caves, dodging the dragon's flames and pursuit. Smaug used his massive body to smash through the thick stone walls, his tail like a giant hammer to shatter pillars, attempting to bury them alive. By this point, Smaug's hatred for Dewey far surpassed that of the others, and he pursued him madly. Dewey's Avada Kedavra didn't kill Smaug, but it made him feel the threat of death for the first time. If his soul hadn't been strong and resilient, the killing curse would have nearly shattered it. Smaug had never been so terrified and enraged. He could sense that the curse had the power to kill him. If it allowed the young wizard to become even stronger, he would be the one to die. Ah! Doyle, the dragon's coming. Bilbo, sitting behind Oil, turned and saw the dragon Smaug flapping its wings and taking flight, and screamed in terror. Doyle swerved sharply, dodging Smaug's flames. Seeing the dragon's relentless pursuit, Doyle suddenly remembered a spell used against fire dragons in the magical world. He swung towards Smaug, aiming his wand at the dragon's eyes and unleashing the Eye Blight curse. Smaug was caught off guard, or perhaps overconfident in his own magical resistance. In the next moment, his vision was enveloped in darkness, and he lost his bearings and crashed headfirst into the mountain. Clearly, despite Smaug's formidable body, his eyes were still vulnerable. He had no idea how long the Eye Blight curse would last, but seeing the dragon spitting fire wildly in all directions, he could only avoid it. Temporarily free of the dragon's pursuit, Doyle quickly mounted his broom and flew Bilbo towards the hall. Upon arriving, Gandalf, Thorin, and the others were already waiting. "Bilbo, have you retrieved the Arkenstone?" Thorin asked immediately upon meeting them. Bilbo shook his head. "I'm sorry, Smaug spotted me before I could get it." Thorin's face darkened, and he sneered. Clearly our thief hasn't completed his mission and is only trying to escape. Bilbo felt deeply guilty and lowered his head. "I'm sorry." Dewey pulled Bilbo behind him, gave Thorin a cold look, and sneered. "Now that we've attracted the dragon, you might be able to secretly search the vault for your Arkenstone. But you'd better pray that the stone is strong enough and hasn't been destroyed by the dragon's flames, otherwise you might not be king under the mountain anymore." Thorin's face darkened and he grew even more restless after hearing Dewey's words. The other dwarves exchanged bewildered glances. The dragon's flames were extraordinary, ordinary metals melted upon contact. Even 4 of the 7 rings of the dwarves were destroyed by the dragon's flames, demonstrating just how intensely hot they were. If the Arkenstone in the treasury were to encounter it, it would surely be destroyed. "Alright, the most urgent task is to deal with the dragon Smaug," Gandalf warned. "If we don't eliminate him, not only will we suffer heavy losses, but even the inhabitants of Lake Town will be implicated." With the exception of Thorin, who remained obsessed with finding the Arkenstone, the other dwarves offered suggestions. Balin, the elder dwarf, suggested, "Perhaps we could lure Smaug into the furnace and attack him with the molten lava." Balin's brother, Dwalin, also suggested, "I know of a pool of acid that corrodes even metal. Perhaps that could eat away at the dragon's tough scales. Also, we could use explosives. Even if we can't kill Smaug, it could attract his attention," Philly said. After a flurry of discussion, everyone quickly divided up the work. Dewey's attention was also drawn by the system prompt, Hogwarts sign-in system, locating Lonely Mountain. "Do you want to sign in? Sign in. Sign in successful. Congratulations on receiving the Book of Abraham." The Book of Abraham? Dewey was a little confused. He flipped open the first page and took a look. His pupils shrank and his breathing quickened. Chapter 103 Sign in at the Magic Stone. The Book of Abraham, originally known as the Jewish Book of Abraham, has a story steeped in legend and myth. It's said to have been given by an angel, containing the secret to immortality. Nicholas Flamel used the Book of Abraham to create the Philosopher's Stone, also known as the Sorcerer's Stone. The stone can not only turn stones into gold and create panaceas, but also the elixir of life. Nicholas Flamel lived for over 600 years, ultimately choosing to destroy the stone and abandon his immortality. Now possessing the secret to creating the stone, Dui was thrilled. Immortality. Although still young, he already felt a sense of urgency about his lifespan. Middle-earth is home to numerous immortals, including the elves, who possess eternal life, and Gandalf, who appears old but remains unchanged for thousands of years. Even dwarves can live for centuries, such as Thorin Oakenshield, who appears youthful but is 195 years old. There's also the unique Donatane race among humans, whose average lifespan is over 200 years, 3 times that of the average human. Even hobbits live longer than the average person, not to mention Bilbo, who possesses the One Ring. While the ring can corrupt the soul, it can also slow aging. Gollum, for example, lived to be over 500 years old. On Bilbo's 111th birthday, his appearance remained unchanged for decades, arousing Gandalf's suspicion. He then determined that the ring was in his possession, and embarked on the Fellowship of the Ring. The current year is 2941 of the Third Age, and the War of the Ring is 3018, a gap of 77 years. Dui, after traveling back in time and adding his age from his previous life, is less than 30 years old. However, if he had lived to the beginning of the War of the Ring, he would have been a centenarian. Although, as a wizard, he should be able to live until the end of the War of the Ring, he did not want to live in a state of decline. The appearance of the Philosopher's Stone offered him hope for immortality. Although, in his memory, the immortality granted by Nicholas Flamel's Philosopher's Stone had its drawbacks. It only granted immortality, not agelessness. It was still a form of immortality, and the only one currently accessible to him. While delighted by the discovery of the stone's crafting method, it wasn't the time to focus on it. Dui put away his book and, along with the others, prepared to confront the dragon Smaug. Dui's Eyeblight spell didn't hold Smaug back for long. Once Smaug regained consciousness, he stormed through the stone wall in even greater rage, continuing his pursuit of Dui and the others. However, this time, Smaug was more cautious, his eyes covered in a translucent keratin membrane. When Dui used the Eyeblight spell again, it had no effect on the dragon. Dui, riding his broom, dodged Smaug's attacks and led him into the pool of acid prepared by the dwarves. However, the acid, which could easily corrode metal ores, failed to break through the dragon's hard scales, instead bathing him in it. As for the explosives the dwarves had prepared, they were even less powerful than Dui's thunderbolt, barely enough to tickle the dragon. Seeing this, Dui continued to lead Smaug into the furnace. Gandalf smashed the furnace with his staff, releasing the molten lava within. The lava surged towards Smaug like a tidal wave, burying him. Did it work? The dwarf Balin asked hopefully, gazing at the bottomless molten lava below. I'm afraid I'll disappoint you, Mr. Balin. The dragon itself can spit scorching flames. This lava won't kill him. Dui paused mid-air on his broom, his gaze lowered as he shook his head. But this also offers a chance to trap Smaug. Dui pointed his wand at the molten lava below. Freeze the earth. From the tip of his wand, a burst of frigid air rapidly cooled and solidified the molten lava below. The air around them plummeted, and everyone's breath turned to frost. The molten gold itself had quickly solidified on the ground, transforming into a solid wall of gold, trapping the dragon Smaug within. There's no escape now, is there? Balin asked uncertainly, shivering with cold as he watched the golden ground covered in a layer of frost. Dui paused his spellcasting, staring down with a frown. He sensed no movement from the dragon, but he didn't believe it had ceased its struggles. Gandalf, what do you think? Gandalf, his brow furrowed, observed carefully, then shook his head. We must not let our guard down. We have no idea what the dragon might be up to, but Thorin, now restless, could no longer sit still. Now that the dragon is trapped, let's find the Arkenstone. Only with the Arkenstone will the 7 dwarf clans heed my call, and only then can I regain all I have lost, and exact my revenge. With that, he set out to cross the golden ground and search the vault for the Arkenstone he longed for. Hold still, Thorin. Gandalf suddenly seemed to sense something, his face changing as he shouted to stop Thorin's advance. But Thorin ignored him, intent on reaching the vault. The next moment, the once solid gold ground rapidly radiated heat. becoming increasingly red. The next second, the ground expanded and swelled like a volcanic eruption, spewing molten gold and scorching flames. The scorching gold splattered everywhere, and Thorin, who was closest, was the first to be drenched. "Duir, save him," Gandalf cried urgently. Duir waved his hand, and Thorin flew backward, avoiding the molten liquid. He slammed heavily against the stone wall and fainted. Smaug's dragon head burst from the molten gold, emitting scorching flames that melted the surrounding gold. He emerged from the molten gold like a giant golden dragon, flapping his massive wings and charging towards the main gate. "Revenge. I'll show you what revenge means. I'll set the whole land ablaze with dragon flame, bringing death and destruction to everyone. And all this is your fault." Gandalf's face darkened upon seeing this. "Doyle, stop him. Don't let him get away." Doyle swiftly pursued the dragon on his broomstick. As the dragon shattered the mountain wall, he unleashed a spell with all his might. Crucio, the spell instantly struck the dragon's back. The dragon froze in its tracks, a deep, soul-deep agony surging through its body, as if its bones were being drilled through, its entrails ripped out, its very soul pierced. The sheer agony of both body and mind caused the dragon to let out a piercing roar. The roar was so loud that even thousands of miles away, in Lake Town and Mirkwood, the dragon's tormented roar could be heard. The residents of Lake Town fled their homes in terror, gazing towards the lonely mountain. The Elf King in the dense forest had an even more solemn expression, and his sharp eyes seemed to be able to penetrate the forest and see the scene on the lonely mountain. Chapter 104 Heart-wrenching. The Cruciatus Curse, one of the 3 unforgivable curses, differs from the Avada Kedavra, which was designed to kill. It is essentially the most vicious of dark magic spells, created for torture. This torture inflicts not only physical pain but also spiritual suffering, rendering even the strongest of wills unable to withstand it. Prolonged torture can even lead to a mental breakdown, transforming one into a living dead. To Dui's surprise, the Cruciatus Curse proved even more potent against the dragon Smaug than the Kedavra itself. Tormented by the Cruciatus Curse, Smaug could not even lift himself, writhing on the ground in agony, uttering agonizing screams and groans. "Have mercy. Wizard, have mercy on me. I surrender." Smaug, finally unable to bear it, began to wail and beg for mercy. Everyone watched in shock as the dragon pleaded for mercy before Dui, unable to recover for a long time. The dwarves were particularly shocked and confused. Smaug, the dragon who had caused the dwarves so much loss and left them destitute, had actually surrendered to Dui's torture? Dui wasn't fooled by Smaug's sweet talk. While the Cruciatus Curse inflicted excruciating pain on the dragon, it wasn't fatal. If the curse was paused, allowing it a moment to breathe, it would instantly resurrect, becoming even more formidable. Therefore, he concentrated all his malice and increased his magical output. Crucio, the dragon screamed in agony, writhing and thrashing, shattering the surrounding mountain. Smaug was tortured to the point of agonizing agony, but he remained conscious. Gathering his last burst of energy, he hurled his tail like a battering ram, striking the massive stone pillars that supported the tower. The pillars instantly shattered under the crushing blow. Without support, the main gate collapsed rapidly, sending countless boulders cascading down. Facing the onslaught of boulders, Dui was forced to cast a spell to protect himself. Seizing Dui's moment of distraction, the dragon Smaug seized the opportunity, swiftly spreading his wings and soaring into the distance. "I will remember this day's humiliation, wizard. I will exact my revenge. I will reduce everything you care about trash." As he departed, the dragon Smaug continued his fierce words. His gaze fell upon the brightly lit lake town in the distance, his eyes filled with venomous rage. "You will be the first targets of my vengeance. You will bear my endless wrath." Watching the dragon soar towards Lake Town, Gandalf looked anxious and worried. "Smaug is going to destroy Lake Town. We must stop him. I'll go after him." Dui grabbed his broom and started to give chase, but Gandalf stopped him. "I'll go with you." Time was running out, and Dui and Gandalf didn't have time to speak to Bilbo or the dwarves. They immediately mounted their brooms and chased the dragon at top speed. As for the lonely mountain, without the dragon, their safety was completely secure. The dragon was incredibly fast, and by the time Dui and Gandalf caught up, it had already begun spewing flames over Lake Town. Below, Lake Town was plunged into chaos and panic. The mayor attempted to flee with a shipload of gold, silver, and jewels, but the sheer volume and weight of his cargo reduced him and his cargo to ash in the dragon's flames. Bard, a descendant of Jirian, Lord of Dale, drew his ancestral black arrow and ascended the highest tower, aiming for a chance to strike the dragon high above. Seeing this, Dui and Gandalf rushed towards the dragon without hesitation. Dui, take me to the dragon's head and stop Smaug's madness, Gandalf shouted. Dui, without a word, raised his broom high and shot straight up at a 90-degree angle. The broom carried them both directly above Smaug's head. Without waiting for Dui to react, Gandalf leaped from his broom and landed heavily on Smaug's back, thrusting his smiting sword high into the dragon's back. The dragon's scales were so tough that even a smiting sword would only penetrate halfway before becoming lodged. For the massive Smaug, this was like a toothpick piercing flesh, painful but not fatal. Finding Gandalf on his back, Smaug tumbled through the air, trying to shake him off. But no matter how hard he tried, Gandalf clung to the smiting sword stuck in the dragon's back, like a cockroach, infuriating Smaug. He no longer cared to continue spitting fire at Lake Town below, but turned to blast Gandalf on his back. Crucia, Dui's attack followed. The dragon froze, letting out a scream of pain, and plummeted downwards. Just as it was about to hit the lake, it spread its wings again and took flight. The cunning dragon used the distance it failed to avoid the Cruciatus curse, denying Dui a chance to close in. As the dragon engaged in guerrilla warfare with him, Dui noticed Bard on the tower below, aiming a black arrow at the dragon. He realized Bard probably didn't know the dragon's weakness yet, so he quickly flew over. Bard, there's a scale chip on the dragon's chest. Your ancestor Jirian shot it off with a black arrow. Try aiming there. Bard's eyes lit up at Dui's words, and he immediately searched for the weak spot on the dragon's chest. Dui, on his broomstick, continued chasing Smaug, hoping to force him to Bard's side and allow him to slay the dragon once more. The dragon proved too formidable, and Dui simply relied on fate's inertia to see if he could defeat Smaug. Smaug, still reeling from Dui's Cruciatus curse, saw him approach again and sped up to create enough distance. But Dui wasn't the only one causing trouble. Gandalf, perched on his back, struck him hard with his staff. The immense force of the staff instantly sent the dragon reeling as if struck by a ton of weight. It stumbled and fell, nearly slamming into the ground. Dui caught up, immediately casting a Cruciatus curse. The dragon, in a moment of desperate suspense, fled in Bard's direction, oblivious to the black arrow aimed directly at it. For Lake Town, for Riverdale, Bard roared, unleashing the black arrow with all his might. It sailed directly for the gap in the dragon's chest scales. Just as everyone thought the arrow was about to hit, it was snatched up by a massive claw. The dragon seized the incoming arrow, its eyes gleaming with scorn. Do you think I'll fall for it again after suffering once? Then, it tossed the arrow high into the air, raising its head and unleashing a fiery dragon flame that quickly melted it into a pool of molten lava. The molten lava then smeared the gap in the scales, patching it up. This scene devastated Bard. Dui was even more shocked. He had assumed Bard would succeed in slaying the dragon, as fate would have it. But he hadn't expected such a dramatic change. On closer inspection, though, it made sense. In the original storyline, Bard's ability to kill Smaug was a combination of luck and happenstance. Most importantly, the dragon had no rivals at the time. Even after leaving Lonely Mountain, it was only after learning of Lake Town's collaboration with the dwarves that it sought revenge on its humans. Therefore, Smaug's death was largely due to hubris and carelessness. But this time, Smaug was severely injured by Dui and his men, forced to flee the Lonely Mountain. His mindset had changed drastically, becoming extremely cautious. Naturally, the chances of killing him with a black arrow were much lower. Chapter 105 The Dragon Falls. The black arrow failed to kill Smaug and was even melted by his drug on fire. This result disappointed all who had hoped for it. Bard, there's still a chance, Dui shouted at the dejected Bard. Bard looked up, smiled wryly, and shook his head. But the only black arrow that can kill the dragon is gone. What else can we do? Dui pulled a magnificent spear gleaming with silver from his empty space bag. This is the divine spear Igris, the weapon of Gil-galad, High King of the Noldor. It once pierced the armor of Sauron the Dark Lord and wounded him. It possesses unbreakable piercing power. It's about the same length as the black arrow. Use it to strike the dragon once more. Dui tossed the silver spear to Bard and said. Bard was astonished upon receiving the spear. He still had some discerning eyes and could tell that it was extremely powerful, far more precious and sharper than his own black arrow. But he added a note of concern, but the dragon is already on guard, and he's already patched the gaps in his scales with molten lava. I'm afraid we won't even have the chance to hit his weak spot. Dui shook his head, his face radiating confidence. This time, we won't shoot at the gaps in his chest, not the gap, yes, not there. Instead, aim for his wings. I need you to shoot one of the dragon's wings off, completely rendering it unable to fly, Dui said with a serious expression. I'll give you one chance later. You only have one chance. Shoot him down. Can you do it? I can, Bard nodded firmly. Dui gave Bard a deep look, hoping that fate would favor him this time. He then turned his broom and chased after the dragon Smaug. Meanwhile, Gandalf, perched on the dragon's back, was also busy. One hand tightly grasped the smiting sword embedded in the dragon's back, the other holding a staff, casting a holy light spell that blinded the dragon, forcing it to fly around. This gave Dui the opportunity to catch up. Another Cruciatus curse blasted, slowing the dragon's speed and reflexes. Dui and Gandalf worked in perfect harmony, intentionally or unintentionally driving the dragon back toward Bard. Seeing the dragon within Bard's range, Dui cast his full strength again. Soul Reborn, the Imperious Curse's power struck the dragon Smaug. For the first time, Dui clearly felt the power of the dragon's soul. No wonder his killing curse hadn't killed Smaug. The Imperious Curse's effect on the dragon's soul was like trying to move a giant countless times heavier than himself, a tremendous effort. Even so, it still managed to cause the dragon to lose consciousness for a few seconds, slowing its movements. Now, Bard, Dui shouted, his veins bulging, his teeth clenched. Bard positioned his divine spear, Egress, on his crossbow. As Dui's voice rang out, he instantly unleashed the spear, already aiming at the dragon. The divine spear transformed into a flash of silver light, piercing the air with a sharp sound. It instantly shattered the dragon's scales and pierced the dragon's body where its wings met. With a mighty wail, the dragon, like a bird with broken wings, plummeted to the ground under the force of gravity and acceleration, carrying Gandalf on its back. With a resounding roar, the dragon slammed heavily into the lake, sending up a massive wave. The dragon's massive body left half of its body exposed even after it crashed into the water. Gandalf remained on the dragon's back, unharmed. He swung his staff and repeatedly struck at the dragon, unleashing shockwaves and holy light spells, plunging it back into the lake. Smaug struggled to fly again, but his wings, wounded by the divine spear of Egress, were no longer able to support him, and he fell back into the water in a disastrous tumble. No. This isn't the way it should be. I won't lose like this, the dragon struggled, wailing. Freeze the earth and the sky, Dui unleashed a chilling force of cold upon the lake surrounding the dragon. The surface quickly froze, attempting to enclose the dragon within. The dragon, realizing Dui's intentions, struggled even more fiercely. Don't try to trap me. Destroy me, Smaug roared frantically, then unleashed a scorching fire that set the lake ablaze, even blasting it towards himself to prevent the water from freezing. Smaug's frantic actions forced Gandalf to leap off his back to avoid being burned. The dragon's flames were incredibly difficult to extinguish. Even within the lake, they continued to burn on the surface and spread to the surrounding area, gradually threatening the nearby lake town. Dui, we must find a way to stop his fire, or Lake Town will be destroyed, Gandalf shouted. Dui, realizing the gravity of the situation, immediately waved his wand. Water prison, as magical power surged, a massive vortex appeared on the lake's surface, forming a giant, swirling ball of water that trapped the dragon, swirling endlessly within it and engulfing the flames it spewed. This was the advanced water spell Water Prison. Dumbledore had used it to trap Voldemort during Harry Potter's 5th year at the Department of Mysteries at the Ministry of Magic. Dui had seen this spell in his spellbook and was deeply impressed, so he learned it. Creating a water prison strong enough to trap a dragon was no easy task, but thanks to their advantageous location, they had an inexhaustible supply of lake water nearby. The dragon thrashed back and forth like a washing machine, its mouth open, and the lake water poured directly into its throat, leaving it no chance to spit fire. Dui concentrated, constantly channeling his magical power. He had no idea whether a creature like the dragon would drown, so he persevered, sweat gradually forming on his forehead. While he wasn't completely exhausted, channeling his magical power was still exhausting and tiring. Just as Dui's mental strength began to falter, a surge of warm energy surged into him, instantly relieving his fatigue and energizing him. It was Gandalf who intervened. The ring of fire, Naya, shone brightly in his hand, channeling its energy into Dui's body. With the ring's power, Dui's spell intensified. More and more water gathered, enveloping the dragon tightly, preventing him from escaping. Time passed, and after an indefinite amount of time, Smaug within the water globe ceased struggling, remaining motionless as if dead. But Dui and Gandalf remained cautious. The dragon's vitality was immense. If it had drowned so easily, it wouldn't have become the embodiment of the calamity feared by the people of Middle-earth. As expected, seeing that Dui and Gandalf hadn't been fooled, Smaug within the water globe once again opened his cunning eyes, filled with resentment and anger. Chapter 106 Surrender. Seeing the dragon still alive in the water ball, Dui frowned slightly and cast his strongest transfiguration spell with his wand. The water ball quickly transformed into a giant python larger than Smaug, wrapping itself tightly around him and eventually transforming into a massive chain that bound the dragon tightly. Dui couldn't help but gasp, his face turning slightly pale. Transfiguring such a massive creature was too much for him now. If it weren't for Gandalf's ring of fire, he wouldn't have dared to try. "Are you all right?" Gandalf asked concernedly. Dui shook his head. "I'm fine. The most important thing now is to get rid of this dragon." The dragon was now bound by massive chains, its limbs and mouth tightly bound, temporarily unable to move. They had to seize this opportunity to quickly eliminate it. Otherwise, if the dragon recovered and broke free, it would be difficult to deal with. The two quickly reached the dragon. With a chain bound around its mouth, they didn't have to worry about the dragon suddenly spewing flames. Gandalf stood atop the dragon and forcefully yanked the smiting sword from its back. Dui also reached the dragon's injured wing, grasped the divine spear, Egress, with both hands, and with great effort, yanked it free. A stream of blood, hot as molten lava, flowed from the wound. The dragon groaned in pain. Dui waved his wand, rolling the dragon onto its back, exposing its chest. The two men gazed at the gap in the dragon's chest scales, now covered with a molten liquid from the dragon's black arrow. The black arrow was incredibly strong, and now covering the gap, it offered just as much defense as the original dragon scales. It seemed the dragon was now completely free of any vulnerability. But that was only for the rest of the dragon's body. Dui tapped the black iron in the gap with his wand, and it slowly deformed, transforming into a massive nail that pierced its flesh. Feeling the threat to its life, the dragon struggled violently, its eyes filled with terror. "No, don't kill me. I surrender. If you let me go, I promise not to retaliate against you. I'll even give you all my treasure." The silenced Smaug telepathically begged for mercy. Seeing Dui pause, Gandalf assumed he had been bewitched by the dragon and warned him, "Dui, don't trust the dragon's words. Dragons are cunning. Words are their magic. They are adept at sowing discord and deceiving people." Seeing Gandalf's concern, Dui smiled and shook his head. "Don't worry, Gandalf, I'm not going to be bewitched by a dragon. I just thought of a better way than killing it, so I thought I'd give it a try." Gandalf remained concerned. He believed that such an evil creature as the dragon should be utterly slain. However, Dui had trapped the dragon, so the decision on how to deal with it rested with Dui. "Duier, what can you do? I have a magical contract here. It requires both parties to sign it willingly, and with a witness, it becomes an absolute binding agreement, guaranteeing that no one can violate it," Dui explained. "I'd like Gandalf to be my witness, and then I'll sign a contract with Smaug, making him my servant." Hearing Dui's words, Gandalf frowned, a look of worry on his face. "Will it really work? Let's try." Dui shrugged, his face radiating confidence. He turned to look at the dragon, his eyes cold. "Smaug, you heard it too. Tell me, are you willing to swear an oath of submission to me? If not, I will kill you right now." The divine spear, Egress, radiated a sharp edge and pressed directly against the dragon's forehead, causing a faint sting. Hearing the chance of survival, the dragon Smaug was overjoyed, a cunning glint in his eyes, and he nodded immediately. "Yes, I do." Seeing him agree so quickly, Dui sneered inwardly. He was only asking, and it didn't matter whether Smaug was genuine or not. Once the contract was concluded, it would be useless for the other party to retract it. So Dui cast a soundproofing spell on himself and Gandalf, blurring the image, and handed the unbreakable vow charm to Gandalf. Gandalf's eyes lit up as he listened, his worried expression gradually softening. His face was filled with surprise and admiration for Dui. "Dui, You've got another surprise for me, Smaug, watching the two men's conversation from behind the soundproofing spell, could not hear a single word. Gandalf's change of attitude also gave him a vague sense of unease. Dewey didn't wait long before removing the soundproofing spell. Smaug, from now on you will do as I say, without even a hint of resistance. If you hesitate even a moment, I'll make the nail in your chest continue to grow until it pierces your heart and kills you. Do you hear me? Dewey's voice turned stern and cold. Smaug grew increasingly uneasy, but seeing the undisguised murderous intent in Dewey's eyes and the iron nails stirring in his heart, he quickly nodded. I hear you, I obey you. Time was running out, so Dewey didn't waste any more words with Smaug. He simply placed a hand on the dragon's forehead and began to chant an incantation. Gandalf, as a witness, drew out the wand Dewey had made for him and placed it on Dewey's hand, which was now in contact with the dragon. Dragon Smaug, do you swear to serve me from now on? Dewey asked. Smaug could already sense an invisible magical force enveloping him and Dewey. If he accepted, that power would descend upon him, forming an unbreakable spiritual bond. Understanding the situation, Smaug felt a sudden sense of unease. He had been so confident that even if they had signed some magical contract, he could break it. Then, taking advantage of Dewey's unpreparedness, he would exact a brutal revenge, avenging the humiliation he had brought upon himself. He hadn't expected such a contract magic, one he had never heard of, to bind directly to the soul. Without giving Smaug time to hesitate, the giant iron spike from his chest grew rapidly, piercing through his flesh and swiftly piercing his heart. Smaug's soul was instantly shaken out of him. He could clearly feel the tip of the spike touching his heart, poised to pierce through in an instant. I promise. I promise, Smaug cried out in terror. As soon as he finished speaking, a thin, dazzling tongue of fire erupted from the tip of Gandalf's wand. Like a red-hot wire, it coiled around Dewey's hand and the dragon's neck. Then, it merged into the dragon, transforming into a golden red line. Dragon Smaug, from this moment on, do you promise never to betray me, never to harm me, until the end of your days? This time, without waiting for Dewey's threats, Smaug quickly replied, I do. Another tongue of fire erupted from the tip of his wand, marking a tattoo on Dewey's right hand and Smaug's neck. Great Dragon Smaug, from this moment on, will you forever obey my commands and never disobey them? I do. With a wise Gandalf present, he added his reminder. Dewey made a dozen oaths, meticulously ensuring that his oaths could not be circumvented or used as a trap. Finally, golden red lines appeared on Dewey's arms, creating a mysterious and striking effect. Having fulfilled his oaths, Dewey waved his hand and untied Smaug's chains. Bound by the oath, the great dragon Smaug had resigned himself to his fate. He dared not even harbor a trace of ill will towards Dewey. If he bared even a little, the golden red lines on his neck would come alive, transforming into red-hot wires that tightened, strangling him to death. His soul would be consumed by agony, comparable to the power of the Crusader's curse. If Dewey dared to retaliate, he would be instantly killed before he could even injure him. Master, Smaug called humbly, his head bowed. Chapter 107 Dragon Knight. Dewey was overjoyed at the dragon Smaug's submission. Gandalf, standing by, was equally delighted. Congratulations, Dewey. From now on, you are the only one in Middle-earth who can wield dragons. This is an unprecedented achievement. The dragons, powerful creatures created by the Dark Lord Morgoth, once wreaked havoc across Middle-earth, bringing terror and destruction to its people. Although creatures of darkness, their power and terror were undeniable. The Dark Lord Sauron had attempted to subjugate the dragons to his service, but to no avail. The dragons were greedy for gold, silver, and jewels, but had no interest in ruling Middle-earth. This, in turn, engendered a millennial-long feud between the greedy dragons and the money-grubbing dwarves. Thorin's ancestors originally dwelt in the Grey Mountains north of the Lonely Mountain. Their wealth attracted the dragons, who attacked and killed the then-dwarf King Dana and his son Faral. Only the eldest son, Thor, survived, leading a small group of his people to the Lonely Mountain and establishing the kingdom beneath the mountain. However, the kingdom's treasures attracted an even more ferocious dragon, Smaug, who invaded, ultimately forcing Thorin and the other dwarves of the Lonely Mountain into a life of displacement. Now, the dragon had been tamed by Dewey, becoming his ally. Dewey's power dramatically increased, and he became one of the most formidable figures in Middle-earth. After taming the dragon, Dewey and Gandalf rode on its back and set out to escape. After all, they were still in the lake. Smaug, suffering a wing injury and unable to fly, had to walk, carrying the two on his back, towards Lake Town. Thanks to Dewey and Gandalf's timely intervention, Lake Town suffered few casualties. However, the flames from the houses engulfed by the dragon's flames continued to spread, making them difficult to extinguish with water. As the residents of Lake Town mourned the flames, they saw the dragon approaching from the lake in the distance, a wave of fear and despair erupting in their hearts. Bard, startled, aimed his bow and arrow at the dragon. Although he knew this would have no effect on the dragon, he didn't want to sit still and wait for death. However, his sharp eyes quickly spotted the figures of Dewey and Gandalf on the dragon's back, and he was startled. His cleverness made him realize that things didn't seem quite as he expected. Bard took a deep breath, and amid the residents' exclamations and concerns, he quickly reached the edge of the dock, only a few meters away from the approaching dragon Smaug. Although he was mentally prepared, the dragon's might and pressure still made his heart beat faster. If the dragon suddenly opened its mouth and breathed fire, or bit him, he would have no chance of escape. Dewey, Gandalf, what's going on? Bard asked in confusion. Dewey said nothing, simply waving his wand, repeatedly extinguishing the surrounding flames to prevent them from spreading. Gandalf, slithering down the dragon's neck and head, leaped directly onto the dock. With a smile, he explained to Bard and the others, the dragon has been tamed by Derweel. He now obeys Derweel's orders and will pose no further danger to you. Hearing Gandalf's words, and looking at the unattackable dragon Smaug, everyone was filled with disbelief. As descendants of the Dale, the residents of Lake Town were well aware of the terror and danger of the dragon Smaug. When Dale was destroyed by the dragon, their ancestors were forced to abandon their homeland and migrate downstream, establishing a new home within the lake to escape Smaug's persecution. They never imagined that the dragon that had once plagued them would one day be tamed. Everyone looked in awe at the man on a broom, wielding his wand to put out the fire. Dewey quickly extinguished the fire in Lake Town. However, the burned buildings were caused by dragon fire, and even Derweel's repair spells could not restore them to their original state. Looking at the residents left homeless by the burning of their homes, Dewey felt a pang of guilt. After all, it was all the dragon's fault. Now that the dragon had been tamed and become one with him, it seemed as if the destruction it had caused was his responsibility. Dewey pulled a bag from his space bag and handed it to Bard. This contains some gold coins and jewelry. Please distribute them to the affected residents. Bard looked at the small purse in his hand with a hint of surprise. But when he opened the bag and looked inside, he saw a space about 2 meters wide, filled with countless gold coins and precious jewels. This amount of treasure was worth more than even the wealthiest mayor in town. Even if it were distributed among every resident, it would be enough for everyone to live a prosperous life. Bard was stunned by the amount of treasure, but he didn't give in to greed. Instead, he nodded gratefully to Dewey. Thank you for your generosity, Dewey. I'll accept it on behalf of the residents. Don't worry, I'll distribute the treasure to the residents so they can survive the winter. He also knew that Dewey was helping him gain prestige. The mayor had previously abandoned the residents of Lake Town, fleeing with only a boatload of treasure. He was the first to be noticed by a dragon, who instantly killed him with a burst of dragon fire. Now leaderless, Bard, a descendant of Darion, Lord of Dale, naturally became the leader of the Lake Town residents. What are you going to do, Bard? Gandalf asked. Bard looked at the destroyed buildings around him, and a desire welled up in his heart. He said, we were forced to live in the Lake Town. Now that the dragon is no longer a threat, I want to lead the people and rebuild Dale, and if the dwarves hadn't insisted on going to the Lonely Mountain and rousing the dragon, it wouldn't have come out. So I need the dwarves to share a portion of the Lonely Mountain's treasure to compensate the residents and rebuild Dale. After all, when the dragon attacked the Lonely Mountain in Dale, it looted Dale's treasure and took it to the Lonely Mountain. As a descendant of Darion, Lord of Dale, I have a right to share some of that treasure. Neither Dewey nor Gandalf objected. After all, this was a matter between Bard and Thorin Oakenshield. After a brief discussion with Bard, Dewey and Gandalf did not stay in Lake Town, but rode the dragon Smaug towards the Lonely Mountain. Although the residents of Lake Town knew the dragon would no longer harm them, they breathed a sigh of relief as they watched it depart. Their fear of dragons was ingrained in their bones, and it was impossible not to be terrified. Smaug's wing was pierced by the divine spear Egress, rendering him unable to fly for a short time. He had to move along the ground with Dewey and Gandalf. Even on the ground, the dragon was incredibly fast. Sitting on the dragon's back, Gandalf beamed with wonder, Thanks to you. I never thought I'd get the chance to ride a dragon. How wonderful. Dui was also excited. He had never imagined he'd ever get the chance to ride a dragon. His only regret was that the dragon couldn't fly yet, missing out on the experience. Smog, when will your wing heal? Dui asked. Master, it was your divine spear that pierced my wing. It holds immense power, and it will prevent my wound from healing. Without a miraculous remedy, I'm afraid I won't be able to fly for a long time. Smog's voice was filled with resentment and grievance. Bound by the unbreakable curse, he dared not complain to Dui, and could only lament his own misfortune, encountering Dui as his nemesis. Upon hearing this, Dui grew anxious for the dragon. After all, a dragon's greatest strength was its ability to fly, exerting pressure from the air. If it were confined to ground movement, the dragon's combat effectiveness and threat would be greatly reduced. Gandalf, standing by, noticed Dui's frown and smiled, reassuringly saying, "It's not a big deal. Once this mission is complete, we can go to Rivendell and seek the help of Lord Elrond. He's the foremost healer in all of Middle-earth, capable of healing even the most mortal wounds." Smog's wound would likely be a piece of cake for him. Gandalf had long worried that the dragon Smog would ally with the orcs, so he had organized an expedition to the Lonely Mountain, hoping to leverage their power to slay the dragon and eliminate the threat. But now that the dragon had been tamed by Dui and had become a force for good, Gandalf sincerely hoped the dragon would recover quickly, strengthening his forces and ultimately defeating the forces of darkness. Soon, the two men and the dragon returned to the Lonely Mountain. Upon reaching the main gate, they saw it was blocked. "What's going on?" Gandalf frowned, puzzled. "It hadn't been like this when we left, so why was it blocked off as soon as we returned? Could it be that something happened here since we left?" Dui, looking at the tightly blocked gate, had a guess in mind. He sneered, "Perhaps someone inside doesn't welcome us back." Gandalf's brow furrowed even further at this, and thinking of Thorin's experience before, he leaned towards Dui's suspicions. The dragon Smog took the initiative, eager to speak. "Master, let me do it. These walls won't stop me. I'll charge straight in, slay all the dwarves inside, and then all of Lonely Mountain and its treasures will be ours." Seeing Gandalf's disapproving expression, Dui's face darkened. Shut up. Even though this fellow had been forced into submission, he still couldn't change his greed for treasure, and even tried to trick him into stealing it. Seeing Dui's anger, Smog immediately shut up. Yet, his two dragon eyes flickered with restlessness, still refusing to give up on the treasures of Lonely Mountain. After all, in his view, these treasures were plundered, and now that he had submitted to Dui, they should belong to him. In this way, the master's things were his, and the master's treasures were his, without affecting his continued possession of these treasures. Even after the master took possession of these treasures, he could apply to protect them for the master. He was guaranteed not to lose a single coin. Chapter 108, Crazy Thorin. "Duir, you and Smog stay here while I speak with Thorin, okay?" Gandalf was loath to see Duir and the dwarves clash. Duir was already a formidable opponent for the dwarves, and now with a dragon in his wake, even Durin's clan in their prime might not be a match for him, let alone the 13 dwarves of the Lonely Mountain. Duir didn't care. He had no desire for the mountain's treasures, nor did he intend to attack the dwarves. "Please do as you please, but I think you'll be disappointed, Gandalf. Thorin's dragon sickness must have fully broken out by now. Without his sanity driven to madness, he won't accept your offer." Gandalf sighed. "We must give it a try." He dismounted the dragon and strode to the gate, thundering, "Thorin Oakenshield, come out and see me." After a moment, there was no response from behind the blocked gate. Gandalf's brow furrowed, his voice commanding without anger, "Thorin Oakenshield, come out and see me." Again, no response. Anger etched across Gandalf's face. He raised his staff, ready to strike down the massive stone blocking the gate. Just then, a small figure poked its head out from the wall and waved rapidly. "Gandalf, I'm here." Gandalf looked up, surprised. "Bilbo, why are you here? Where are Thorin and the other dwarves?" Seeing Gandalf, Bilbo felt a glimmer of hope, and he quickly explained, "Thorin's gone mad. After you left with the dragon, he had Buffer and the others use explosives to blow the gate down, completely blocking it off. Now he's having everyone searching the treasury for the Arkenstone." "Oh my god, what is that?" Bilbo hadn't finished his words when he caught sight of the dragon Smog in the distance. His eyes widened in disbelief. "Gandalf, how come the dragon came back with you?" Gandalf smiled and said, "The dragon has been tamed by Dwar, and he's now Dwar's mount. Is this true?" Bilbo was stunned, rubbing his eyes in disbelief, trying to make sure he wasn't dreaming. How could he have been away for only a short while, and the dragon had suddenly become Dwar's mount? "Alright, Bilbo, go get Thorin. I need to speak to him," Gandalf said. Bilbo, still in shock at the dragon's taming, nodded dumbly and turned to call Thorin. Time passed slowly. Gandalf's patience was almost exhausted when Thorin slowly appeared on the city wall. But before he could speak arrogantly, he caught sight of the dragon behind Gandalf. His pupils shrank, and his body instinctively stepped back. "Gandalf, what does this mean? Why did the dragon follow you back? Are you in league with the dragon, seeking to steal my treasure?" Thorin demanded sharply, his eyes filled with a frantic obsession and unease over the treasure. Gandalf rolled his eyes, helpless at Thorin's frantic talk of treasure. Thorin was clearly terminally ill, his eyes filled only with greed and a desire to monopolize the treasure. "Thorin, son of Thrain, you have reclaimed the Lonely Mountain, and we rejoice for you," Gandalf demanded. "But why does the king under the mountain remain within his walls, like a robber in his own stronghold?" Thorin regarded Gandalf below the city walls, and Dewey and the dragon in the distance with wary suspicion. "The reason, of course, is that I have robbers on my doorstep, intent on stealing my treasure, and I'm not yet the king under the mountain. The Arkenstone, our heirloom, remains unfinded. I will block all access until it's found." Gandalf's heart ached at Thorin's words. "My valor. Thorin Oakenshield, no one here would covet your treasure. It's of no consequence. Your duty now isn't to guard your treasure, to imprison yourself. Instead, you should actively contact the other dwarves and form an alliance with the men of Lake Town. Build defenses, forge weapons, and together we will resist the impending danger." "Danger? I see no danger except the danger you bring with you, the dragon," Thorin said coldly. "Thorin Oakenshield, wake up. We are not your enemy. The dragon Smaug has been tamed by Dwyer, and he's on our side." Gandalf's voice carried a terrifying force. "The threat of the Lonely Mountain isn't over yet. The goblin army could appear at any moment. We must mobilize more forces to meet it." Thorin's eyes flickered with a hint of struggle, as if he were persuaded. But ultimately, his possessive desire for treasure took over, and his gaze returned to a cold stare. "Gandalf, you are not welcome here. Please leave." Gandalf's beard trembled at Thorin's unrelenting words. "What about me, Thorin Oakenshield?" Dewey's voice came, and he rode up to Thorin on his broomstick, looking down at him coldly. "You promised me that once I helped you recapture the Lonely Mountain, 1/10 of its treasure would belong to me. Now that I've solved the dragon problem for you and allowed you to recapture the mountain, when will you pay me?" Thorin watched Dewey fly toward him, his pupils constricting, his expression growing wary. The dragon Smaug, hovering in the distance, let out a deafening roar, his eyes fixed on him. The fear of the dragon at this moment made Thorin instinctively regain some rationality, making him swallow his words of refusal in time. He looked at Dewey, who was holding the wand in front of him, and then at the dragon in the distance. His face was extremely gloomy and ugly. His heart felt like it was bleeding and his flesh was being cut. After a long while of struggling, he gritted his teeth and said, "I promise to give you 1/10 of the treasure after I find the Arkenstone." But Dewey was not easy to fool. He narrowed his eyes and said, "But if you don't find the Arkenstone, or if you find it but don't tell me, are you not going to give it to me?" Thorin's face turned even uglier. "Of course not, but you promised me to recapture the Lonely Mountain. If you want a share of the treasure, you must help me find the Arkenstone first." Dewey chuckled and shook his head. With a flick of his finger, the contract flew out of his pocket and floated in front of Thorin. "I think you've misremembered it, Thorin Oakenshield. The contract only requires me to help you recapture the Lonely Mountain, not to find the Arkenstone. That's outside the contract, and I haven't agreed to it. Besides, Smaug unleashed so much dragon fire in the vault earlier. Who knows if the Arkenstone would have been reduced to ash. I've fulfilled the contract. Now it's time for you to fulfill your promise." Faced with Dewey's assertive attitude, Thorin's face darkened as if ink were dripping from it. "Give me a month. In a month, I'll place your share of the treasure before you, not a penny less." Dewey gave him a meaningful look. "I hope you'll keep your word." Then he turned his broom and turned to Bilbo, who was not far away, and asked, "Bilbo, are you leaving with Gandalf and me?" Bilbo glanced at Thorin, whose face was gloomy, then at Dewey, who was beaming with joy. After a moment's hesitation, he nodded. Dewey landed his broom upon hearing this and reached out to pull Bilbo onto it. "You're not allowed to leave," Thorin's voice suddenly rang out. Dewey paused, turned to look at Thorin, his expression cold. "You have a problem?" Bilbo looked at Thorin in astonishment. "You can leave, but you must prove that you haven't taken anything from the Lonely Mountain," Thorin said, looking at Bilbo with suspicion. A magical pressure erupted from Dewey. "Thorin Oakenshield, am I being too generous to you? To have you suspect my friend?" Thorin felt the air around him suddenly freeze, even his breath becoming suffocated. Even so, he gritted his teeth and said, "If he didn't hide it, why didn't he dare let me check? Is the Arkenstone hidden on his person?" Dewey drew his wand, ready to teach him a lesson. But Bilbo stopped him. Bilbo stopped Dewey's wand, his face calm, and his head slightly shaken. "Dwar, it's all right. Since he suspects me, let him examine me and prove my innocence." Seeing Bilbo speak, Dwar snorted coldly and let Thorin go. Thorin breathed hard to relieve the suffocation, but the look he gave Dwar showed him was even more fearful, even a hint of dread. Under Thorin's gaze, Bilbo opened each pocket to confirm that nothing was hidden. "Wait, and that purse? I know it's enchanted and can hold a lot of things." Bilbo, completely disappointed with Thorin, nodded expressionlessly, then opened the purse and dumped it on the ground. Instantly, all kinds of gold, silver, and jewels tumbled out, quickly piling up on the ground. These were all treasures Dwar had previously plundered from the Goblin Cave. Thorin's eyes flashed with greed as he gazed at the treasure before him. In his dragon sickness, he wanted to pocket every bit of treasure he saw. However, he still had a shred of reason. Looking at Dwar and the dragon watching them intently, he suppressed his greed. Dewey naturally noticed the change in Thorin's expression. He sneered, pointed at the pile of treasure on the ground, and said, "Now, search among these treasures for anything that belongs to your Lonely Mountain. If you don't find anything, please put them back into your purse, one by one, and return them to Bilbo." Thorin naturally failed to find the Arkenstone he sought. Under Dewey's threat, he reluctantly returned the treasure to his purse and gave it to Bilbo. Dewey then led Bilbo away from the wall and flew towards Gandalf. "Welcome back, Bilbo," Gandalf said with a smile. He had witnessed what had happened on the wall and was disappointed with Thorin's behavior. Thorin had lost his former rationality and conscience, remaining only paranoid and obsessed with treasure. He also felt a sense of guilt. If he hadn't organized this expedition, would Thorin have been safe? Fortunately, Dewey didn't know Gandalf's thoughts, otherwise he would have just thought it was too much. Reclaiming the Lonely Mountain was Thorin Oakenshield's obsession. Even without Gandalf, he would have likely set out for it. And without Gandalf's care, he would have either perished at the hands of the orcs, like his father, King Thrain, or, even if he reached the Lonely Mountain, he would have been consumed by dragonfire. The three of them left the Lonely Mountain's gates and headed for Dale. Bilbo experienced dragon riding for the first time, his face flushed with excitement, completely forgetting the unpleasant experience on the city wall. "By the way, Dwar, I couldn't find the mandrake you lent me. Even after searching the entire treasure vault. Could it have been consumed by dragonfire?" Atop the dragon's back, Bilbo suddenly thought and said apologetically to Dwar. Dwar smiled and shook his head. "I forgot to tell you, I actually got the mandrake back a long time ago. After all, a spell of flying can solve it." Bilbo finally breathed a sigh of relief. "That's good. I thought I lost your mandrake." If you are listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means it was downloaded and re-uploaded without effort. We warmly invite you to visit our channel, Fanfic World. There you will find the original version of this story and many other novels of various genres. We look forward to seeing you dive into a world of incredible novels. Chapter 109 Transformation. After leaving the Lonely Mountain, Dewey and his companions settled temporarily in Dale. The dragon smog was so enormous that Dewey left him to hunt alone in the wilderness near the Lonely Mountain, awaiting his call. Many of Dale's buildings had been destroyed by Smaug's dragonfire, and even if Dewey had wanted to restore them, he could not. The three of them settled directly into their former home, where the hearth still connected to Rivendell, unbroken by Dewey. Gandalf, a busy man, had just rested for a moment when he was about to find Bard and ask him to lead the residents of Lake Town to Dale. Dale was easily defended and difficult to attack, with its back against a lonely mountain. If the orcs made any move, they could quickly unite with the dwarves of the Lonely Mountain, forming a force capable of resisting the orcs and preventing them from being overwhelmed one by one. However, the area surrounding Lake Town was vast and without any barriers. If the orc army attacked, it would be impossible to stop the orcs' destruction. For the safety of the residents of Lake Town, Gandalf must evacuate them to Dale before the orc army arrives. If possible, Gandalf also hopes to persuade the Elf King Thranduil to join the alliance against the orcs. After the dragon Smaug was subdued, Thranduil and Gandalf approached him about collaborating with the orcs. Smaug, naturally, did not hesitate to conceal the truth. He claimed that the orcs had contacted him before Azog's death, attempting to persuade him to cooperate. However, Smaug, solely focused on protecting his treasure, had no interest in ruling and conquering Middle-earth. Therefore, he refused Azog's offer. Until recently, Azog's son, Borg, contacted him, informing him of Thorin Oakenshield's intention to retake the Lonely Mountain. Using this as an excuse, Smaug struck a deal with Smaug. Smaug allowed Borg's orc army to enter the Lonely Mountain and march north to reclaim the kingdom of Angmar. The orcs acknowledged the dragon Smaug's right to rule the Lonely Mountain and promised to give him half of the treasures plundered by the orcs. Now that the dragon had been subdued, as news spread, the Borg would undoubtedly be restless and likely launch a massive attack on the Lonely Mountain, aiming to capture this crucial northern stronghold. While Gandalf anxiously prepared for the impending war, Dui also experienced a significant event. That morning, at sunrise, Dui, as usual, pointed the tip of his wand to his heart and chanted the incantation, Amador, Animod, Animidau, Animagus. As the incantation finished, it felt as if a second heart had emerged within his chest. The faint beat echoed with the original heartbeat, like a duet, a curious phenomenon. Dui was delighted to discover this, believing it was a sign of the Animagus's success. He then took out the palantir to check the weather conditions at the high pass of the Misty Mountains. Seeing the dark clouds rolling in and thunder blazing over the high pass, Dui set off immediately. Leaving Bilbo behind in Dale, he teleported to Rivendell via the Hearth and then rode his broomstick straight towards the Misty Mountains. The high pass was pounding with rain and thunder. Dui dared not fly too high on his broomstick, fearing he would be struck by lightning. He reached the spot where he had buried the crystal vial and dug it out. The mixture within had now turned blood red. Seeing the potion inside, Dui's eyes lit up, and without stopping, he quickly headed back towards Rivendell. He was now only one step away from his Animagus transformation. Upon returning to Rivendell, Dui did not immediately return to Dale through the Hearth, but remained in Rivendell for a while. Transfiguration requires a spacious and safe area, ensuring it won't be disturbed or put in danger. Duel, did you have a smooth journey? Elrond, who had already returned to Rivendell from Lorien, asked with a smile. Dui nodded and pleaded with Elrond for help. Lord Elrond, could you please find me a private chamber where no one will disturb me? I want to ensure that nothing goes wrong during my transformation. Elrond naturally wouldn't refuse, and he was curious about Dui's Animagus transformation. Until now, only the skin changers had been able to transform into animals. Now that there was a wizard like Dui who mastered the art of human transformation, he wanted to see what kind of animal Dui would transform into. Elrond led Dui into a spacious hall. There were no tables, only 2 fireplaces, each between 2 pillars, each blazing with a roaring fire. Though the fires burned without wood, they burned constantly, providing warmth and light. Mysterious elven runes were carved into the marble floor. As Dui entered, he felt his spirits lift, his mind clearing. This is the Hall of Flames. I spend time here when I need peace, contemplation, and meditation, Elrond introduced. You can transform here. No one will disturb you. Dui hadn't expected such a wonderful place in Rivendell. He felt that practicing magic here would be several times more efficient than usual. His confidence in his Animagus transformation instantly grew stronger. After sincerely thanking Elrond, Dui focused his full attention on the transformation. He once again placed his wand against his heart and chanted the incantation one last time, Amado, Animado, Animagus. Then he opened the crystal bottle and drank the red liquid in one gulp. The next second, 2 violent heartbeats echoed from his chest, the loud thumping audible even in the empty hall. This was followed by an intense pain, as if his entire body were being reshaped, no less pain-free than the Cruciatus curse. Meanwhile, the image of an animal gradually emerged in Dui's mind, becoming clearer and clearer. Dui remained resolute, trying not to resist the transformation. His body began to shrink rapidly, his clothes and jewelry melting into his skin, transforming into hair. Finally, only a single, enormous owl remained in the hall. An eagle owl, to be precise. Its round head bore the signature ear tufts, its coat a mixture of yellow and black. Its large, golden eyes shone with a sharp, cold gleam. Its beak was hooked, and its sturdy talons concealed blades. Eagle owls are among the largest of the owls, and the one I had transformed into was even larger, standing a full meter tall and boasting a wingspan exceeding 3 meters. I was somewhat bewildered by his initial transformation. He lowered his head and caught sight of his reflection on the polished floor. So my animagus, like my patronus, is an owl? I was surprised, yet also quite expectant. While not the handsome raptor he desired, like the eagle, an owl was still acceptable. Owls possess not only excellent flight abilities but also night vision and hearing, allowing them to roam freely at night and making them ideal for stealth. But just because he had become an owl didn't mean he could fly. I flapped his wings, attempting to soar through the hall, stumbling and falling countless times, his feathers flying. Finally, after countless attempts, he succeeded. Although he had experienced flying on a broom, flying on his own was something else entirely. Immersed in the thrill of flight, I felt the hall wasn't big enough, so he quickly drifted out the window, circling and dancing over Rivendell, taking in the entire landscape. From the observation deck below, Elrond looked up at the sky and smiled. After flying enough, I flew directly towards Elrond, returning to his human form as soon as he landed. "Thank you for your help, Lord Elrond. Otherwise, I wouldn't have been able to transform so quickly." I thanked him gratefully. Elrond shook his head. "This is your own effort. I'm merely providing a training ground for you." Then he asked, "By the way, how did your mission go?" Dewey briefly recounted the events of the Lonely Mountain. Even the knowledgeable Elrond was astonished to hear that Dewey had subdued the dragon Smaug. Since the dragons were created by Morgoth, no one besides Morgoth had ever been able to subdue them. Not even Sorin was an exception. Unexpectedly, Dewey's actions had changed. Initially, Elrond worried that this was a trick of Smaug, but after learning the true nature of the unbreakable curse and that the pact had been signed under Gandalf's witness, Elrond finally felt reassured. He trusted Gandalf's wisdom and that he would not act without purpose. So, when Dewey requested that he treat the dragon's wounds, Elrond readily agreed. Dewey did not remain in Rivendell long, returning to Dale once again. This time, however, he chose not to return through the fireplace. Instead, he transformed himself into an owl and prepared to cross the Misty Mountains to familiarize himself with his animagus. Although he had successfully mastered the animagus transformation, it was still only at the rudiments, requiring him to rely on his wand. Transfiguration masters like Professor McGonagall could perform the animagus transformation without a wand, even integrating their wands into their bodies, becoming a part of them. Therefore, even after mastering the animagus, Dewey needed constant practice until it became second nature. The Misty Mountains towered high into the clouds, and Dewey soared through the mountains, spotting traces of trolls, orcs, and wargs. He didn't stop, however, flying eastward until he had crossed the mountains and reached the eastern side of the Misty Mountains. There, he encountered a clan of giant eagles. The eagles had spotted him as well and swooped down. Startled, Dewey wondered if they had mistaken him for prey. He was about to transform back into human form when a voice reached his ears. "What are you? Although you look like an owl, you don't have the smell of an owl. Instead, you have the breath of a human." A giant eagle circled around Dewey, looking at him curiously and asking questions. Chapter 110 Giant Eagle Delivers Its Cub. Dewey breathed a sigh of relief when he saw the eagle had no intention of attacking him. But then he realized something and was even more surprised. "You can speak?" "No, I can understand you." A curious look crossed the eagle's sharp eyes. "I am the messenger of Manwë, king of the Valar. As the king of birds, I can naturally communicate with all birds, but what are you? Why do you look like an owl, but smell like a human?" "I'm not a thing." "Ugh, I'm a thing." Dewey, feeling his brain shrink after turning into a bird, hurriedly introduced himself. "I'm the wizard Wheel. You gave us a ride when we crossed the Misty Mountains with Gandalf and his companions. Do you remember?" The eagle suddenly realized. "I remember you, the wizard who was with Gandalf. You killed Azog, king of the orcs." "Yes, that's me." Dewey nodded. "Then how did you become a bird?" "I remember you were human before." "Well, it's a magical transfiguration that allows me to transform into an animal. Sounds similar to a skin changer." Meeting Dewey, a wizard who could transform into a bird and even communicate with them. The giant eagle took great interest in him and invited him to its lair. At the eagle's invitation, Dui arrived at their dwelling, a cliff top not far from High Pass and Goblin Town. There was a wide, shelf-like rock platform. Atop it lay giant nests, stacked layer upon layer of thick branches, lined with thinner branches, feathers, and even whole warg skins. Landing on a nest, Dui felt like he had arrived in a land of giants, surrounded by giant eagles who gazed at him with interest and curiosity. The Eagle King welcomed him. The giant eagles were intelligent and understood the languages of elves and humans, but they could not communicate directly. The giant eagles were also quite surprised to meet Dui, a wizard who could transform into an owl and communicate with him. They brought him fruit grown in the Misty Mountains and even captured a half-dead warg. Their hospitality overwhelmed Dui. In the eagle's nest, there were some newly born eaglets, some even larger than Dui, chirping and twittering lively. However, Dui noticed a lone eaglet. Compared to its siblings, it was very thin and its cry was weak. It seemed to be born weak, unable to compete with the others and eating the least. Their parents seemed indifferent and showed no intention of taking any special care of them. Dui frowned slightly. He knew that nature was a world of survival of the fittest, and that ordinary eagles would abandon or even eat sick eaglets. But the giant eagles were an intelligent species. Would they do the same? However, this was a private matter between the giant eagles, and he was not in a position to speak up. As if knowing what Dui was thinking, the Eagle King sighed and said, "We, the great eagles, live in the Misty Mountains. Every day, we battle the wargs, orcs, and even more dangerous creatures. Only the strongest survive these mountains. The weak are destined to be eliminated. Perhaps returning to man was embraced as soon as possible is the best outcome for them, but if you, Wizard Duel, have compassion, you can take this poor child away and provide him with a place to rest. This could be a new beginning for him. I take him away." Dui was incredulous. How could such a thing as giving a child away be possible? The Eagle King nodded. The eagle's parents had no objections either. Dui looked at the skinny and pitiful eaglet, at a loss for words. "Little one, will you come with me?" Dui transformed back into human form, pulled some dried meat from his pocket, and offered it to the eaglet, who was said to be less than 3 years old. The great eagles have a long growth period, and their infancy and childhood are longer than those of other tribes. Even under 3, the eaglet was old enough to understand Dui's words. The long-starved young eagle's eyes flared at the sight of the dried meat. When his brothers tried to snatch it up, he quickly devoured it. He then looked at the well-intentioned birdman before him, then at his parents with cold eyes, and at his brothers scrambling frantically for the food. Finally, he nodded. Dui took the young eagle with him. To do so, he used a traceless extension spell to expand the space inside a purse to a diameter of 10 meters. This was the maximum he could currently cast, but it was still large enough for the young eagle to live in. Along with the young eagle was a gift from the Eagle King, a nest built of fragrant wood, said to be the same one where the Eagle King had once hatched and grown. Dui also received feathers, warg pelts, and some eggshells left by the young eagles. The giant eagle feathers could be used to make wandcores, and the eggshells could be used to make potions. As for the warg pelts, they could be used as cushions. After bidding farewell to the giant eagles, Dewey transformed himself into an eagle owl once again, grabbed the purse containing the eaglet in its nest, and continued his flight eastward. The eaglet, nestled within the purse, was now devouring the entire supply of food stored within Dewey's space. For a young eaglet who hadn't had a full meal since hatching, nothing was more important than food. Thus, the little creature, undeterred by the thought of abandonment, focused solely on feeding. Dewey soared over the Misty Mountains, but instead of heading directly for the Lonely Mountain, he circled briefly over Bjarn's house before descending. "Who's that?" Bjarn, noticing the unusual flight from the sky, remained vigilant. Seeing it was an eagle owl, he remained alert. However, once the eagle owl landed and transformed into a humanoid form, Bjarn's vigilance instantly vanished. "Bjarn, long time no see," Dewey greeted with a smile. Seeing Dewey, Bjarn's face lit up with joy. "So it's you, Duel, was that your animal form just now? If we skin changers didn't all transform into giant bears, I'd have thought you were one of my kind." Duel smiled and nodded. "I just happened to be passing by, so I came down to visit. This is the animagus transformation I just mastered, but it only transforms me into ordinary animals, nothing compared to yours." Bjarn disagreed, instead saying enviously, I'd really like to transform into a flying animal. That's much cooler than a clumsy bear that can only run on the ground. Well, please come in and have a seat. I haven't heard from you since you left here. Tell me what's happened." Duel naturally wouldn't refuse his master's invitation. Besides, he came here to ask Bjorn for advice. He wanted to see if he could gain some inspiration from the skin changer's bear transformation to upgrade his animagus. Duel wasn't satisfied with just transforming into an owl. He wanted to possess more powerful magical animagus forms, such as a phoenix, thunderbird, dragon, unicorn, and so on. Of course, since his animagus was now an owl, he had to first rule out irrelevant creatures like dragons and unicorns. After all, no matter how much an owl evolved, it couldn't possibly become a dragon or a unicorn. On the other hand, powerful avian magical creatures like the phoenix and thunderbird might offer a glimmer of hope. After all, there's a saying that goes, "A sparrow can turn into a phoenix," so perhaps an owl could do the same? While it's a highly unlikely idea, if it succeeds, the rewards would be immense. The phoenix possesses immortality. Upon aging or death, even if struck by Avada Kedavra, it will rise from its ashes. This power is truly a dream come true. Then there's the Thunderbird, which possesses the power to alter the heavens, summoning lightning and storms, and even foreseeing danger. In Bjorn's hut, Dewey recounted everything that had happened recently. Upon hearing that Thorn had lost his mind due to dragon sickness, Bjorn snorted coldly. These dwarves are always so greedy and blind. Even if the treasure tainted with dragon magic was the trigger, wasn't it also his own fault? Bjorn had always disliked the dwarves. He had taken them in because they shared a common enemy. Thorn's madness was, in Bjorn's view, his own fault. However, Bjorn wasn't particularly interested in the dwarves' plight. Instead, he was more focused on another matter. "Did you really tame the dragon?" Bjorn asked, his eyes wide with disbelief. Dewey, accustomed to such expressions, smiled and nodded. "This is truly unheard of, truly astonishing," Bjorn exclaimed, looking at him with admiration. "Being able to tame the evil dragon, your name will soon be known throughout Middle-earth. I imagine you'll soon have a very honorable title, perhaps Dragonbinder? Or Lord of Smog, but I think Dragon Rider would be the most suitable, since you're the only one in Middle-earth who can ride a dragon." Bjorn was already excitedly thinking of future titles for Dewey. Seeing Bjorn half-joking about his title, Dewey took the opportunity to ask him about the principle behind the Skin Changer's transformation. Bjorn shook his head. "We Skin Changers' ability to shape-shift stems from our ancestral bloodline. Legend has it that our ancestors were humans who lived in the Misty Mountains and were blessed by the spirits of nature, thus possessing the ability to transform into bears. I'm unsure of the truth of this rumor, for transforming into a giant bear is a natural process for us, awakened at a certain age. So, I don't know much." Dewey had been prepared for this and wasn't overly disappointed. However, he still asked Bjorn for a favor, allowing him to transform on the spot to see if he could find anything. Bjorn accepted. However, before transforming, he had to remove his clothes. Bjorn's transformation, unlike Dewey's animagus, melted his clothes into his skin, so once transformed, they would be torn apart. Dewey tried his best to ignore the naked man before him, silently remarking to himself that this was all for research. "Oh, damn. My eyes are going to get sty," Dewey wailed inwardly. After Bjorn prepared himself, he began to control his emotions. As if his anger was rising, veins bulged on his forehead and his muscles twitched. He gasped and clenched his fists. His body expanded rapidly, and his skin grew thick, long, black hair. Finally, a huge black bear as big as a house stood before Dewey. Chapter 111 Magic Cycle. As Bjorn transformed into a giant bear, an overwhelming sense of savagery and ferocity overwhelmed him. Even though he knew the bear before him was Bjorn, he still felt the urge to retreat. "Bjorn, don't resist for a moment. Let me check the circulation of your magic, okay?" The bear nodded, signaling him to proceed. Seeing Bjorn's agreement, Dewey immediately placed his hand on the bear's skin and slowly injected magic into it, sensing the workings of magic within it. The reason animagus cannot transform into magical creatures is because the magic of wizards and magical creatures operates in fundamentally different ways. Forcibly disrupting this magical process can easily lead to unpredictable and serious consequences. For example, the quintuplets in the magical world are said to be transformed by wizards. However, because the process of transformation alters the way magic operates within the body, Once transformed into a quintuplets, it can never be transformed back again, thus introducing a new species of creature into the magical world. In the magical world, few wizards practice animagus cultivation, and even fewer succeed. Throughout the 20th century, there were only 7 registered animaguses, and even if you include those who secretly practiced and remained unregistered, the total number is still a handful. The lack of successful transformations of magical creatures, coupled with the dire consequences of those that did, meant wizards in the magical world rarely ventured into the animagus form of magical animals. However, Dui's situation was different. Although Bjorn was a skin changer, his ability to transform into a giant bear made him a valuable reference. If he could unlock Bjorn's transformation secrets and incorporate them into his own animagus, perhaps he could achieve a more powerful animagus. Dui carefully sensed the workings of the bear's magic, sensing the difference between his and his own magical circulation. Bjorn also possessed magic, and considerable power. This was the reason he could transform into a giant bear. However, as Dui continued to perceive the bear's magical system, his expression grew increasingly solemn, and he finally withdrew his hand with a sigh. "Thank you, Bjorn, you can change back," the giant bear growled at this, its massive body rapidly shrinking, eventually returning to human form. Bjorn put his clothes back on and asked, "Did you learn anything?" Dui nodded. "A lot. The way your magic circulates is unique. If I could replicate it completely, perhaps I could unlock the secrets of the skin changer's transformation, but your magic circulation system is incredibly complex. Memorizing it all would be a monumental undertaking, taking years, if not longer. The circulation of magic is similar to the energies circulating through the meridians in martial arts novels, forming a complete and complex system within the body. However, a wizard's magic circulation and operation differ from those of a magical creature. If a wizard forcibly transforms into a magical creature, the internal magic cycle is disrupted. At best, the magic loses balance, becomes disordered, and becomes a squib. At worst, the wizard is permanently transformed into a magical creature, his soul trapped in the body of a beast, even worse than a blood-cursed orc. After all, it's impossible for a single person to simultaneously maintain 2 magic circulation systems. But Bjorn was different. Dui discovered that when in human form, Bjorn operated in one magical cycle, but when transformed into a giant bear, it operated in a different system. Bjorn could switch between these 2 systems freely, allowing him to transform back and forth between human and bear forms. If he could find the transition point between the 2, Dui might be able to find a way to transform an animagus into a magical creature. But this was still too far-fetched for Dui at the moment. Recording Bjorn's complex magical cycle alone would take a long time. And there couldn't be even a single deviation or omission. Otherwise, it would be a serious magical accident. Bjorn, however, waved his hand readily, saying, "What's the big deal? If you want to study, you can always come to me, or even live here permanently. I'm alone here year-round, and you're more than welcome to visit." Dui was deeply grateful to Bjorn. He had already prepared himself for rejection, even hostility. After all, the ability to shapeshift was the very foundation of the skin changer's strength. If outsiders could crack it or find a way to control it, it would be like handing over the power of life and death to the skin changers. Bjorn allowed Dui to study him, a sign of great trust. Dui, having accepted the favor, naturally wanted to repay it. He thought, since Bjorn possessed magic, he decided to make him a wand. He was delighted to hear Dui would make him a wand. "Is that possible? I'm just a skin changer, can I really cast spells with a wand?" Dui nodded affirmatively. "You have magic within you. With a wand, you can cast spells. If you don't believe me, try mine." Dui handed Bjorn his wand and taught him the basics of the luminescence charm. Dui's wand was certainly not suitable for Bjorn, but it was easy to cast a simple luminescence charm. As the tip of the wand lit up with a faint glow, Bjorn beamed with joy, as if he had seen something truly new. He immediately pleaded with Dui, "Dui, please make me a wand." "This is amazing," Dui smiled and nodded. "Of course, that's what I was going to do." To craft a wand for Bjorn, the first step was naturally to find a suitable shaft and core. He had Galadriel's hair and a giant eagle's feather as suitable cores. However, neither suited Bjorn. It wasn't until Bjorn brought out a warg he had killed the day before that Dui found the perfect core for his wand, the warg's heart. As for the shaft, Mirkwood also boasted many magical trees. Dui rode his broom into the woods and found a suitable shaft for Bjorn, a core cut from a very ancient oak tree. After gathering the materials, Dewey began crafting Beorn's wand. However, Dewey didn't intend to do it here. The wand-making process was complex and time-consuming. He had been away from Dale for some time and had no idea whether the orc army had arrived. Especially the dragon, he wondered if it had behaved well in his absence. Beorn, would you like to experience flue powder teleportation? Dewey asked him with a smile. Gandalf was busy preparing for the orc army, and he couldn't just sit there and do nothing. He decided to invite Beorn to Dale to join the fight against the orcs. He remembered that in his original destiny, Beorn had fought in the Battle of Five Armies, inflicting heavy losses on the orcs and even killing Bolg, son of Azog. Hearing about fighting against the orcs, Beorn agreed without a second thought. His entire clan had perished at the hands of the orcs, and his hatred for them ran deep. He would agree without hesitation to anything that meant killing them. After arranging the livestock, the two used flue powder to teleport through the fireplace to Dale. A flash of green fire flashed from the hearth in Dale, and Dewey emerged first. A moment later, the towering figure of Beorn appeared, coughing awkwardly after accidentally inhaling a puff of cigarette ash. He hunched over as he emerged from the fireplace. Seeing this, Dewey waved his hand to clear the soot from his body and asked with amusement, "Beorn, are you alright?" Beorn, coughing until tears came out, waved his hands, his face inconsolable. "Ahem. I'm fine." Bilbo heard the commotion and walked in from outside. Seeing the two men, his eyes lit up and he ran over. "Dewey, and Mr. Beorn, why are you here together? Long time no see, Mr. Baggins," Beorn greeted politely. He had a good impression of the halfling. Dewey also smiled and explained, "Beorn is my guest. He will join us in the fight against the orcs. By the way, where's Gandalf? Hasn't he returned yet?" Bilbo shook his head. "Bard and the people of Lake Town have moved here, but Gandalf hasn't returned yet. Bard said he went to Mirwood, trying to convince the elves, humans, and dwarves to unite." Dewey shook his head. Gandalf's journey was likely not going well. Thranduil wasn't an elf like Elrond, who cared about the world. He was solely responsible for the elves of the Woodland Kingdom. He didn't even think about forming an alliance with the dwarves. Putting that aside, he asked, "What are Bard and the others doing now?" "Bard and the others are building defenses, preparing to patch up a gap in the city wall to resist an orc attack," Bilbo said. "Then let's go and see," Dewey said. The three of them headed for Bard's location. Along the way, Dewey frowned as he saw the residents of Lake Town, who were constructing leak-proof tents on the rubble of the ruins. It was the transition between autumn and winter, and the temperature in Dale, deep in the north, was beginning to grow cold. Such simple living conditions could be fatal. The three of them reached the city gate. Bard and the men were moving stones, piling them one by one across the gap in the wall. After moving a large stone, Bard breathed a sigh of relief. Seeing Dewey and the others, he was instantly surprised and delighted. "Dewey, Bilbo told me you were away. I didn't expect you to be back so soon. Are you mending the walls?" Dewey asked. Bard nodded. "Although the walls of Dale are badly damaged, they're still serviceable. I want to repair them as soon as possible before the orc army arrives. This will also prevent the orcs from entering the city and harming the residents. If that's the case, then I'll help you too," Dewey said, drawing his wand. He then waved it at the damaged wall. Restore it to its original state the next second. Time seemed to flow backwards. Except for the areas burned by the dragon's flames, the walls were constantly repairing, and the scattered rubble was reversed, filling the damaged gaps. Chapter 112 Elf Army. Seeing the wall largely repaired in an instant, everyone present was stunned and astonished. Only Bilbo, who had witnessed Dewey's abilities, looked proud, clearly pleased with the crowd's reaction. Dewey continued his pace, waving his wand. Wherever he went, buildings began to repair. This miraculous sight had the thousands of residents watching him in awe. When the repairs were almost complete, Dewey finally stopped and breathed a deep sigh. Finally, it's habitable, though dilapidated. The Dale before them had regained some semblance of a city. Some houses that hadn't been destroyed by the dragon's flames had been restored and could be lived in, instead of having to resort to making do with the scavenged tents they had been living in before. Bard, overwhelmed with excitement and joy, bowed to Dewey with gratitude. "I don't know how to express my gratitude. Dewey's kindness has helped us so much." Dewey waved his hand. "I'm glad I could help, but my magic can't repair those breaches. I'm afraid you'll have to mend them yourselves." Bard shook his head. "That's enough," Perhaps I can help, Bjarn said. Who is this? Bard asked, puzzled. This is Bjarn, who lives west of Mirkwood, near the Andun River. He's the one I've invited to help me in this fight against the orcs, Duil introduced. Bjarn then took off his coat and swiftly transformed into a giant bear as tall as the city wall. His immense size and imposing presence frightened the residents. But when the bear didn't attack them, they relaxed and gazed at him in awe. Bard was also astonished. Sure enough, anyone invited by the wizard Duil must be no mortal. Then, Bjarn, in his bear form, easily lifted huge stones and piled them across the breach in the wall. Bard was delighted to see this and quickly organized everyone to work with the bear to repair the wall. This time, Dewey didn't help out again. Instead, he returned to his house and began crafting the wand. Bilbo, on the other hand, stayed put and lent his hand as much as he could. Time flew by, and Dewey soon finished Bjarn's wand. Wargheart, oak shaft, 16 inches long. This is the longest wand I've ever made, almost as long as my own staff. Dewey handed the wand to Bjarn, his face filled with anticipation. Try it, Bjarn, also a little excited and nervous, eagerly took the wand and waved it carefully. In the next second, the wand rapidly sprouted branches, blossomed, and bore fruit, finally producing a ripe acorn. Bjarn delightedly plucked the acorn, feeling its rich vitality. He lovingly stored it away, intending to plant it in his garden upon his return. Dewey was delighted to see this. Congratulations. It seems you found the perfect partner. He finally understood Ollivander's feelings. The satisfaction of seeing a wand he had crafted find its destined recipient was hard to describe. Baby Bjarn stroked his wand and thanked Dewey. Thank you, Dewey, thank you for making this wand for me. Dewey smiled and waved. We're friends, aren't we? Yes, we are. Dewey then taught Bjarn some basic spells. Watching Bjarn successfully unleash blazing flames and clear springs of water, Dewey felt a sense of accomplishment in teaching a student. He thought that if he were at Hogwarts, he might even be a professor. After teaching Bjarn, Dewey turned his attention to something else. He opened his purse, revealing the giant eagle chick that lived inside. Is this a giant eagle? Bjarn and Bilbo stared at the giant chick before them, their eyes widening. Did you steal it? How could that be possible? The Eagle King entrusted it to my care, Dewey said, speechless. That's good, Bjarn breathed a sigh of relief. The giant eagles are the overlords of the skies. Few can harm them. I was really afraid you'd kidnap one of their children and be hunted by them, but he looks a little stunted. Is he born weak? Otherwise, why would they let me take him? Dewey shrugged, then examined both the giant eagle chick and the chick with his wand. The results made Dewey frown. It was no wonder the giant eagles abandoned this chick. It was stunted and frail even when it was incubating in the eggshell. Furthermore, after hatching, it couldn't compete with its brethren, and without a full meal, it grew weaker. If Dewey hadn't taken him, he would have died of starvation or exhaustion soon. Poor little creature, don't worry. I'll find a way to ensure your health and well-being, so that you can soar like the other giant eagles, Dewey said sympathetically. The chick, as if understanding Dewey's words, responded with a few tender, clear chirps. Given the eaglet's situation, the most appropriate treatment for its healthy growth was potion. Dewey searched through another special bag and pulled out the last remaining bottle of soothing potion. Here, little one, drink this and you'll feel better. The eaglet was incredibly intelligent. Less than 3 years old, he could already understand human speech. Coupled with his previous experiences, he was incredibly well-behaved and sensible. He obediently opened his mouth and downed the bitter potion without a single protest, knowing it was good for him. The potion's effects were swift. The once frail eaglet now felt a surge of life, even its feathers brightening. The eaglet chirped joyfully, its voice even more powerful than before. He looked at Dewey with a warm, affectionate gaze, as if he were a family member. Bjarn and the others naturally noticed the change and remarked happily, it seems he's accepted you, Dewey. You have a giant eagle companion. Dewey couldn't help but smile. It seemed he would need to brew some more potions. While the palliatives were effective, they couldn't cure the eaglet's inherent weakness. He would then have to make healing potions like blood tonifying and restorative potions. However, some of the ingredients in these potions were only found in another world, so he would need to find alternatives. He could consult Daragist, the herbalist from Middle-earth, about this. By the way, Dewey, have you named this little one yet? Bilbo asked curiously, gazing at the eaglet, taller than himself. Dewey thought for a moment and said, Thoronder. I hope he will inherit the name of his ancestors and become a great eagle that soars across the heavens. Thoronder, Bjarne was surprised to hear this. He hadn't expected Duir to have such high hopes for this eaglet. Thoronder was the name of the first great eagle in the world, and the ancestor of all the other great eagles. He had led the great eagles in the First Age's war against Morgoth, aiding the Valar and the elves in defeating the forces of darkness and destroying Morgoth's fortress, Angband. He also rescued the elf leader, Turgon, from Morgoth's captivity during the War of Wrath. His military exploits were truly remarkable, and his reputation spread far and wide. Thus, a frail young eagle was given a resounding name. The young eagle, fearless as a newborn calf, accepted the name without a second thought. Fearing that Thoronder might become suffocated, Dewey released him and entrusted him to Bilbo's care. Bilbo, evidently, was deeply interested in caring for a young eagle, even though the chick was larger than he was. He even used his gold coins to buy Thoronder ample amounts of meat from the inhabitants of Lake Town, feeding him. He was even more responsible than his master, Dewey. After leaving the young eagle's care to Bilbo, Dewey began studying the Book of Abraham on his own. The Book of Abraham contains numerous alchemical runes and lore, most importantly the information on crafting the Philosopher's Stone. The book's contents are so profound that even with Nicholas Flamel's annotations, it still gave Dewey a headache. Naturally, Dewey was most interested in the method for crafting the Philosopher's Stone. However, he had barely begun alchemy, let alone understand the most profound chapters on the Philosopher's Stone. Dewey had no choice but to begin with the most basic and simple alchemical knowledge. Fortunately, he had been continuously studying runes since signing in to obtain the Dictionary of Runes. Runes are the prerequisite and foundation for learning alchemy. This allowed him to understand the alchemical runes and lore in the Book of Abraham. However, before Dewey could complete his basic alchemical knowledge, Gandalf returned, accompanied by the elf king Thranduil and his army of elves. Gazing at the golden-armored, commanding elves outside Dale, with Thranduil at their head, riding a giant stag, Bard turned to Gandalf. "Gandalf, have you succeeded in persuading Thranduil?" Gandalf smiled wryly and shook his head. "No, Thranduil is just as stubborn as the dwarves. He's come to ask Thorin for a necklace of white gems he once commissioned the dwarves to forge. He's bringing an army just for a necklace." Bard was incredulous. It was a relic of his late wife, and it means a lot to him, Gandalf could only explain. But the only good news is that Thranduil is willing to ally with the men of Lake Town and has brought enough food for the winter. Hearing this good news, Bard's worries turned to joy. He had been worried about the residents of Lake Town's lack of winter supplies, but Thranduil's food was a timely relief. Bard led his men out of the city to welcome Thranduil. "Your Majesty, Thranduil, I didn't expect you to come." Thranduil, riding atop a massive deer with enormous horns, stood tall and imposing, his demeanor unwavering. "I heard you needed aid, so I brought some supplies." With a wave of his hand, elves arrived with carts laden with grain, vegetables, and meat. Bard was overwhelmed by the abundance of supplies. This was more than just a small amount, it was more than enough to keep them fed and clothed for the entire winter. "You saved us. I don't know how to thank you enough." "No need to express your gratitude. I'm not here for you," Thranduil said. "I'm here to reclaim what belongs to me, something the dwarves have hidden away." Bard made no comment, but instead extended a warm welcome to Thranduil and the elves, inviting them into the city of Dale to rest. Thranduil accepted, and Bard entered the city with a group of guards. He looked around, a look of surprise on his face. This Dale was once destroyed by a dragon. "When did you find skilled craftsmen who could rebuild the walls in just a few days?" Bard proudly explained. "This is all thanks to the wizard Duir. His magic was miraculous, repairing the damaged buildings in an instant. And Mr. Br transformed into a giant bear to carry the huge stones for us. That's how we have such a solid wall today." Thranduil suddenly understood, but his astonishment only deepened. Just ahead, Duir and his companions were waiting. "Your Majesty, Thranduil, it's a pleasure to see you again," Duir said with a smile. "I'm also surprised. Dragonslayer, Smaug's master, the Black Wizard Duir, your name is now known throughout Mirkwood." Thranduil dismounted from the giant deer, his eyes filled with undisguised admiration. Chapter 113 Confrontation. In response to Thranduil's praise, Duil smiled modestly. "Your Majesty, you are too kind. This is not all my own achievement. Oh, by the way, where's Lord Legolas? Why haven't I seen him?" Hearing Duil ask about his proudest son, Thranduil's smile widened. He has discovered some orcs and is pursuing them. Speaking of orcs, Gandalf's expression suddenly sharpened, his brow furrowed slightly. Your Majesty, do you know where these orcs have appeared? Thranduil said casually. They appeared north of Mirkwood, seemingly coming from the northern Misty Mountains. Legolas was worried, so he followed them. He should be back in a few days. Aside from matters concerning the Woodland Kingdom, Thranduil showed little interest in the outside world. He had come this time to retrieve the white gem necklace he had commissioned for his deceased wife. As for the war between the dwarves and the orcs, he had not aided the dragons that attacked the Lonely Mountain, and he had no intention of intervening this time either. However, his son Legolas disagreed. Legolas possessed a more compassionate heart. He believed that while the dwarves of the Lonely Mountain held grudges against them, they were still inextricably linked. Now faced with a formidable enemy, the orcs, they needed to put aside their past grudges and unite against the enemy, rather than passively retreat into Mirkwood. Therefore, he proactively pursued the Orcish host, attempting to locate their stronghold. Thranduil did not remain in Dale for long. After allowing the elven army to regroup, he continued his march toward the Lonely Mountain. Seeing this, Gandalf attempted to persuade him again. Your Majesty, the orcs could attack at any moment. A conflict between you and Thorin would only give them an opportunity. Thranduil raised a hand to stop Gandalf's continued persuasion, unwaveringly declaring, "This is not my decision. If Thorin Oakenshield hands over the things that belonged to my late wife, I will turn my army back without a moment's delay." A hint of sarcasm crossed his face. But do you think Thorin Oakenshield would agree? Madness runs in their family's blood. I saw his grandfather's madness firsthand, and I'm afraid Thorin is no less mad now. The white gem necklace Thranduil desired, while not as valuable as the Arkenstone, was nonetheless priceless. Thorin's grandfather, Thor, was afflicted by the dragon sickness. After the necklace was crafted, he became greedy and possessive, refusing to return it to Thranduil. This led to a feud between the dwarves of Lonely Mountain and the elves of the Woodland Kingdom. It also caused the Woodland Kingdom to stand idly by when the dragon Smaug attacked Lonely Mountain. Gandalf sighed helplessly as he thought of Thorin's current madness, driven by dragon sickness. No doubt, given Thorin's current mental state, he wouldn't even share a single gold coin, let alone the white gem necklace. Adding to Gandalf's headache, not only did Thranduil demand the necklace from Thorin. Even Bard followed Thranduil to demand compensation from Thorin for the damage done to Lake Town and, as a descendant of Girion, his right to reclaim his share of the treasure. After all, when the dragon Smaug destroyed Dale, he also took all of its treasure to the Lonely Mountain. Therefore, the mountain's treasures contained not only those of the dwarves but also those of the men of Dale. However, Bard did not want to see a war between the elves, men, and dwarves. So he asked Thranduil to let him negotiate with Thorin first. Thranduil was skeptical, but he didn't refuse Bard's request. He didn't need the time, after all. However, he prepared the elven army, waiting for Bard's negotiation to fail, to march directly to the Lonely Mountain and reclaim the jewel necklace. While Bard was going to negotiate, Gandalf, uneasy, chose to go along, hoping to persuade Thorin and avoid war. Knowing the outcome, Thranduil did not follow. He retrieved the Palantir and first determined the location of the dragon Smaug. I've neglected this creature for days, and who knows where he's been? In the barren wastes north of the Lonely Mountain, Smaug killed a bison with a single bite, then roasted it with a searing fire. When it was nearly cooked, he began to feast. Dragons have voracious appetites, and a bison is only enough for one meal. But they are also incredibly resistant to starvation, able to go for decades without food or water once they've fallen into deep slumber. Smaug had considered escaping during these days, but the very thought of the unbreakable oath would animate the golden red lines on his neck, tightening and burning like cramps and marrow, leaving the dragon in excruciating pain. Under this constant torment, Smaug resigned himself to his fate, no longer daring to think of escape or betrayal. So, Smaug obediently hunted in the wilderness, awaiting Dewey's call. After Smaug finished his roasted bison, he suddenly glanced up at the sky with alarm. He sensed someone watching him. "Master," Smaug asked tentatively, sensing a familiarity in that unknown gaze. A second later, the oath cord around his neck tightened slightly, becoming intensely hot. This was the oath he had sworn. Wherever the dragon Smaug was, if Dewey needed him, he would come unconditionally. Confirming it was Dewey calling him, Smaug didn't hesitate, dashing towards the lonely mountain at top speed. His only regret was that his wings hadn't fully healed yet, preventing him from flying directly. HMPH, quick reflexes, Dewey snorted, watching the crystal ball display Smaug's rapid movement. Don't think he didn't know how many times this fellow had harbored disloyalty these days. He even considered fleeing north of the Grey Mountains, hoping to outlast him before emerging. But Smaug didn't know that every time Smaug harbored disloyalty, he would sense it. Therefore, whenever Smaug was tortured by the oath for harboring disloyalty, Dewey would deliberately intensify the punishment, making it even more painful. Seeing Smaug's obedient return, Dewey stopped looking at him. Instead, he checked on the new Orc King, Borg. With a conflict between the elves and dwarves imminent, it made no sense for the orcs to remain silent. Sure enough, the Palantir soon displayed an image of Mount Gundabad. Mount Gundabad, located in the northern Misty Mountains, was a massive fortress home to a large orc population in the domain of Borg. At Borg's command, countless trolls, orcs, and wargs burst from the fortress. Giant bats filled the sky, blocking out the sun, allowing the light-shy creatures of darkness to roam during the day. The dense orc army, numbering tens of thousands, advanced rapidly towards the lonely mountain. Huh? I didn't expect he'd track them all the way here, Dewey exclaimed in surprise as Legolas and Tauriel appeared on the screen. They were hiding behind a massive rock in the fortress of Gundabad, secretly observing the orc army's movements. Suddenly, Legolas seemed to sense something, and he glanced warily at the sky behind him. "What's wrong, Legolas?" Tauriel asked beside him, puzzled. Legolas shook his head hesitantly. "I don't know, I just feel like someone's watching me." Tisk, so perceptive. Dewey was surprised, but then he turned his gaze away and continued to investigate. This time, his eyes focused on the area east of the Lonely Mountain. He knew that there was a dwarf tribe living in the Iron Hills east of the Lonely Mountain, led by Dane Ironfoot, a cousin of Thorin Oakenshield. Only Thorin and 13 dwarves remained on the Lonely Mountain. Even if they blocked the city gates, they would be powerless to withstand the elven army. So, if Thorin wasn't foolish, he would surely ask Dane for help. Sure enough, in the wilderness east of the Lonely Mountain, a dwarf army of tens of thousands was approaching. All parties involved in the Battle of Five Armies had arrived. Dewey stopped investigating and put away the crystal ball. He found Beorn and Bilbo and said, "Let's go to the gates of the Lonely Mountain. The orcs are coming. We can't let them start a fight first." Upon hearing that the orcs were approaching, Beorn's eyes lit up. Finally, they've arrived. Bilbo, though a little nervous, wasn't afraid. Instead, he gripped his elven shortsword tightly. Dewey handed Beorn his broomstick. "Take Bilbo and follow behind. I'll stop them first." With that, he cast his animagus, transformed into an eagle owl, and flew towards the gates of the Lonely Mountain. Beorn had ridden a broomstick a few days before, so he wasn't worried about anything going wrong. Meanwhile, the atmosphere at the gates of the Lonely Mountain was tense. Thorin, as expected, refused Thranduil's request for the white gem necklace and Bard's request to share the treasure. Despite Gandalf's earnest persuasion, neither side accepted his offer. "Thorin, lay down your weapons. Open the gates. The treasure will kill you," Gandalf said. "You can't win this battle. Don't kill your companions." Thorin's eyes flickered, but he remained unmoved. "Now, Gandalf, put away your useless words. You can't wake someone who's pretending to sleep." Thranduil, dressed in armor and riding a giant stag, said sarcastically. Then he turned a cold gaze on Thorin on the city wall. "Now it's time to answer us, Thorin Oakenshield. Do you want peace or war?" Looking at the tens of thousands of elves, Thorin felt insecure. He paced anxiously on the city wall, his eyes fixed on the far east, as if waiting for something. Finally, a raven appeared over the wall. Thorin was instantly delighted, his confidence instantly surging. Without hesitation, he answered Thranduil below, "I choose war." Thranduil was stunned by Thorin's sudden confidence and immediately looked towards the mountains to the east. He saw a dense army of dwarves appearing on the eastern hills. "Alert!" Thranduil shouted. The elven army quickly turned its attention to the more threatening dwarven army. The heavily armored dwarven army arrived 1,000 meters away from the elven army. Dane Ironfoot, Lord of the Iron Hills, rode a war boar, hammer in hand, and came to the front. "Good morning, everyone. I have a small suggestion. If you don't mind, I'll take up a little of your time. Would you consider getting as far away as possible? Chapter 114 Battle of Five Armies. All of you. All of you. Now, Dane Ironfoot roared, his tone both arrogant and dismissive. Lord Dane, will you listen to me? Gandalf shouted, stepping out from the elven host. Gandalf the Grey, Dane narrowed his eyes at him. Tell this mob to leave, or I will water the earth with their blood. This is not the way to start a war between dwarves, men, and elves, Gandalf said sternly. There is a host of orcs marching towards the Lonely Mountain. Stand down your troops and turn your weapons against the orcs. I will not lower my guard before an elf, especially not before this immoral woodland goblin. Dane pointed at Thranduil. He has nothing but evil in his heart for my people. If he tries to stand between me and my king, I will chop off his pretty head. See if he can still smile. Thranduil laughed in anger, his eyes cold as if he were looking at a dead object. Dane, wait. Dane ignored Gandalf's pleas and returned to his army, preparing for battle. Let them advance, and see how far they can get, Thranduil snorted, dismissing the dwarf. But Dane, clearly not one for good temper, immediately retorted sarcastically, do you think I care about your dead dog's threats, the little princess with pointed ears? Hear all, warriors. This time, let's give these bastards a good beating. A horn blasted. The dwarf army charged down the hillside toward the elves. Shoot, Thranduil shouted, and the elves quickly drew their bows and arrows, raining thousands of arrows down upon the dwarf army. Suddenly, an eagle owl swooped in, blocking the rain of arrows. The eagle owl instantly transformed into humanoid form, and while suspended in the air, it swung its wand and unleashed a shower of arrows. The rain of arrows quickly transforming into a sky full of flowers that drifted down on the wind. Dui appeared above the battlefield, his body like a weightless feather, slowly descending. He landed in the open space between the elven and dwarven armies. The charging dwarven army paused in surprise at Dui's sudden landing before them. Who are you? Dane Ironfoot asked warily, looking at the scattered flowers. I am Duil the Black Wizard, and I have come to stop your needless losses, Dui's voice echoed across the battlefield. The orc army is advancing from Mount Gundabad. They number hundreds of thousands and will arrive in an hour or two. If you do not want to be utterly annihilated by the orcs, prepare your defenses quickly, rather than slaughter each other here. Dui's words stirred the crowd. The elves, dwarves, and humans here totaled only a few tens of thousands, a tenfold difference compared to the orc army. How can I believe you're telling the truth? Dane asked, his eyes narrowed in suspicion. I know you're in league with Gandalf the Grey. I wonder if you're lying to those mobs and those pointy-eared bastards, Dui sneered. Whether you believe it or not is up to you. I don't need to prove it to you. Just then, Beorn arrived on his broomstick, carrying Bilbo. He leaped from midair, transformed into a giant bear, and caught Bilbo with one hand, roaring at Dane. The war boar beneath Dane was startled and scurried back, nearly causing Dane to fall. Ignoring Dane Ironfoot's reaction, Dui turned and headed towards the army of elves and men. Gandalf hurried over and asked, Dui, are the orcs really coming? Dui nodded. I saw it with a palantir. Gandalf's brow darkened. Hundreds of thousands of orcs. This will surely be a difficult battle, but what caught Gandalf even more off guard was the sudden retreat of the elves. Lord Thranduil, facing such a formidable enemy, why are you retreating? Gandalf approached Thranduil and demanded. Thranduil replied coldly, this is a war between orcs and dwarves. I have a responsibility to my people. Every elf of the Woodland Kingdom is precious and cannot be lost on a battlefield that does not belong to them. But if even the Lonely Mountain falls, how long can the Woodland Kingdom hold out? Gandalf begged to differ. Do you think the orcs will spare the Woodland Kingdom, or does the great Lord Thranduil intend to submit to them? Thranduil snorted. Gandalf, you need not provoke me. I have lived through Morgoth's darkest hour, witnessed the fall of countless kin, and slain more orcs than the trees of Mirkwood, but my woodland people will die defending their homeland, not be buried worthlessly with these dwarves, but the enemy won't give you a chance to retreat. Du suddenly pointed toward the distant hills. Thranduil and Gandalf looked in Du's direction. They saw Orcish banners atop the distant hills. At the same moment, a deep, deafening roar echoed from the ground. The next moment, giant earthworms emerged from the mountain, tunneling through them. Countless orcs poured out from the tunnels, densely swarming the surrounding peaks and surrounding the elves and dwarves. Alert, Dane, no longer concerned with confronting the elves, immediately ordered his army to shift its defenses. This was also the first time DUI had seen a Middle-earth version of a shield machine. The speed at which it could dig through the mountain was unmatched even by the engineering teams of his previous life. If he had the chance, he'd love to capture one. It would be a great tool for digging tunnels or working on construction projects. The battle was imminent, and the dwarven army, at the forefront, collided with the orc army. The dwarves were heavily armed, but the orcs outnumbered them by a vast margin, not to mention the wargs and trolls fighting among them. The two sides engaged in a frenzied battle, their screams unceasing. Just as the dwarves seemed to be losing ground, the elves, who had been silent until then, suddenly sprang into action, joining the fray. Countless arrows rained down upon the orcs, instantly decimating them. Even though the orc casualties far outnumbered the elves and dwarves combined, a steady stream of orcs continued to emerge from the tunnels. Bard and several hundred humans from Lake Town also joined the fray. Bjarn, meanwhile, had already charged into the orcs, moving effortlessly in his giant bear form, smiting or blowing away one after another. Gandalf drew his smiting sword and gazed sternly at the orcs that filled the hills. He asked DUI, where is your dragon? We need him. DUI, as if sensing something, glanced into the distance and smiled. I think he's here. Before he could finish his words, the mighty dragon Smog appeared on the distant hilltop. Standing atop the hill, the dragon raised its head and let out a deafening roar, then belched a searing fire at the orcs atop. The dragon's appearance brought the battlefield to a halt for a few seconds. The dwarves and elves were startled, but then saw the dragon attacking the orcs, and they were instantly delighted. The orcs, in turn, panicked, their formation falling apart, giving the elves and dwarves an opportunity to launch a fierce counterattack. Duir, there are too many orcs to kill. We must find the Borg. If we kill him, the orc army will be thrown into disarray, and then we can turn the tide, Gandalf shouted to Duir, slashing an orc with his sword. Duir nodded, and with a wave of his wand, he slew all the orcs and wargs around him. I know, leave it to me. He produced the palantir and searched for the Borg. I found you. Duir observed the Borg's figure on the crystal ball and quickly determined his location. But at that moment, something unexpected happened. The Borg's figure on the crystal ball suddenly vanished, and a fiery red demonic eye emerged, emitting a dark spiritual wave that corrupted and degraded people. Duir the Black, wizard who subdues dragons, I know your desire. How about a deal? If you will cooperate with me and help the orcs conquer the Lonely Mountain, I will teach you how to forge a ring of power, granting you immense strength and endless life. A holy aura emanated from Galadriel's hair on his wrist, bringing DUI back from the bewitching voice. A cold sweat ran down DUI's back. He had almost fallen prey to the influence. He hadn't expected to see the Dark Lord Sorin again so soon, and through the palantir. Apparently, the palantir in his possession had been discovered by Sorin. Sorin also possessed a palantir, and through it, he was contacting him, attempting to seduce, corrupt, and degenerate him. He never imagined that he would one day suffer the same fate as Saruman. DUI dared not respond to Sorin. After all, if Saruman could be corrupted and controlled by him through the palantir, he would be even more dangerous. Eat shit. Dewey immediately pulled out a crystal bottle gifted by Galadriel and channeled his magic to unleash the light within. The crystal bottle instantly erupted with a dazzling holy light, the light of Erendel. Sorin, naturally, had a deep memory of the light of Erendel, and his pupils constricted upon seeing it. The next second, the dazzling holy light burned his eye, and with a cry of pain, he instantly vanished into the stone of Palantir. Seeing that the crystal did not contain Sorin's eye, Dewey remained concerned and carefully shone the light of Erendel, ensuring that Sorin had no hidden tricks within. After confirming that there were no hidden dangers, Dewey finally breathed a sigh of relief, but he decided to keep the stone of Palantir and the light of Erendel together for the rest of his life. With the light of Erendel, which restrained the forces of darkness, he would see if Sorin dared to peek again. If he didn't blind him, he would be damned. Dewey frowned as he stared at the stone of Palantir. Since Sorin knew he had the Palantir, he would have to use it with caution. The enemy could easily see what was happening on his side through it, like having a surveillance camera right next to him. Even more infuriating, he didn't even have the nerve to check on them. Otherwise, he might have suffered the same fate as Saruman. He packed up the Palantir and the light of Erendel and put them away. Dewey immediately set out to find the Borg. Despite the earlier incident, he still knew where the Borg was. The Borg was truly cautious and cunning. He wasn't on the command platform, But instead, he was hiding in a tunnel dug by the earthworms. Having located the Borg, Dui naturally wanted to eliminate him. However, he looked at Bilbo beside him, thought for a moment, and said, "Bilbo, I'm going to the orc stronghold across the way to eliminate the Borg. It's not safe here. I'll take you to Thorn's Wall." But Bilbo shook his head, holding the elven sword. "Dui, don't worry about me. You know I can take care of myself." Seeing Bilbo's insistence, Dui didn't force it. "Alright, take care of yourself then." Still concerned, he cast several layers of protective shields. Then, he mounted his broom and flew towards Borg. But before he could get far, the giant bats, obscuring the sky, attacked Dui. Shatter to pieces, Dui continued his spell, and the giant bats fell like rain all around him. Chapter 115 Earthworm Attack. On the battlefield of Lonely Mountain, the elves and dwarves, true to their millennia-old foes, were intimately familiar with each other's methods and coordinated with each other seamlessly. As the dwarves repelled the first orc attacks, the elves quickly surged in, with both sides coordinating and holding off the attack. Bjarn, possessing a deep hatred for the orcs, took the form of a giant bear and charged directly into the orc ranks, engaging in a frenzied battle. His thick fur and powerful defenses allowed him to ignore the orcs' weapons, crushing and slaying orcs wherever he struck. The most striking sight was the dragon Smog. Though temporarily unable to fly, the dragon's attacks were still terrifyingly destructive. A single sweep of his powerful tail, like a battering ram, ripped through a vast swath of orcs like the Grim Reaper's scythe. Even more terrifying was the dragon's flames, their scorching heat capable of melting even the strongest steel, let alone the flesh and blood of orcs. Wherever the dragon's flames touched, orcs were reduced to ash, and the earth was reduced to scorched earth. Fearing to confront the dragon, all orcs fled in terror, causing chaos among the Orcish army. The dragon Smog, seemingly venting all his recent frustrations, launched a frenzied fire attack, using the orcs as a tool for venting his anger. Meanwhile, Dui was engaged in a battle with giant bats in the sky. Millions of these bats obscured the sky, primarily blocking out the sun, allowing the orc army below to operate during the day. Dark creatures are naturally repelled by the sun. Orcs experience pain and discomfort when exposed to it, while trolls are petrified. Therefore, Sauron specifically bred giant bats to compensate for the Dark Army's weakness during the day. These bats were so large that they could easily capture an adult. Dui was confident he could easily defeat even a few dozen, 100, or even 1,000 of them. But facing millions of bats, Dui simply couldn't kill them all. He could only cast a magical barrier to block the giant bats attacking from all directions. Thousands of bats densely surrounded Dui, enclosing him so tightly that not even a ray of light could penetrate. To make matters worse, the bats also knew how to attack with sound, emitting ultrasonic waves in unison. The ultrasonic waves of a single bat were insignificant, but when thousands of bats gathered together, the power was terrifying. Fortunately, Dui had cast a soundproofing spell the moment he sensed trouble. Otherwise, he would have been dealt a heavy blow. HMPH, so your voices are all you can do? Today, I'll let you taste the sound of a mandrake. Dui pulled a mandrake from his space bag, plucked it from the pot, and held it outside the soundproofing spell. Awakened from its slumber, the mandrake, filled with resentment and grievance, opened its mouth and let out a deadly, piercing cry. Loud, Dui then cast a sound-amplifying spell on it. Instantly, a loud, piercing cry echoed from the sky. Like ordinary bats, giant bats possessed highly sensitive hearing, even relying on it to determine direction and obstacles. The cry of the mandrake proved even more deadly to them. Wherever the mandrake's cry reached, the giant bats, seemingly frozen in place, instantly stiffened and plummeted to the ground. The cascading mass of giant bats tore a hole in the sky, allowing sunlight to reach the ground. Orcs caught in the blast instantly lost their fighting power and wailed in agony. The trolls were instantly petrified, transformed into giant statues. Countless falling giant bats, like a barrage of artillery shells, crushed and injured the orcs on the ground. Dui, using the mandrake as a weapon, chased them towards the bat-heavy area. Swarms of giant bats fell continuously, tearing through the darkness of the sky and causing secondary damage to the orcs on the ground. Take out your Morgul arrows and shoot him. Kill that wizard in the sky, Dark Tone, Bolger roared in terror and fury. At the command of the orc herald, the orcs on the hilltop set up rows of massive crossbows. These arrows were inscribed with dark spells and exuded the aura of black magic. They waited until Dui appeared before unleashing them, evidently weapons specially prepared to deal with him. Fire, Morgul arrows rained down upon Dui from the sky, leaving him no room to dodge. Seeing the incoming arrows, Dui frowned and quickly leaped to higher ground to avoid them. These Morgul arrows possessed a magic destroying power, making them impervious to ordinary protective spells. These orcs had gone to great lengths to counter him, unleashing such a massive volley of Morgul arrows at once as if they were free. Seeing the threat of the Morgul arrows, Dui could not, for the time being, approach the orc headquarters. He immediately turned and flew straight towards the dragon Smaug. Smaug was now spitting fire with reckless abandon, and upon seeing Dui appear, he instinctively felt the urge to do the same. But once he came to his senses, he immediately closed his mouth in fear. Only thick black smoke billowed from his nostrils, choking him. The scene looked rather comical. "Master, what are your commands?" Smaug asked with a guilty and flattering tone. Dui, unconcerned with his previous actions, landed on his back and pointed towards the orc headquarters camp on the distant hill. "Barg is hiding there. Destroy him with your dragon's flame, your will is my direction," Smaug declared, and then he led Dui on a relentless charge towards the distant hill. Smaug's scales offered such powerful defense that even Morgul's arrows could not harm him. With Smaug, his supreme shield, Dui didn't need to do anything. Morgul's arrows could not reach him, and he quickly advanced towards Barg's hiding place. "My lord, the dragon is coming," Dark Whisper, the orc herald cried in fear. The surrounding orcs were also in a state of panic. Had he not been intimidated by Borg's majesty, he would have fled in panic. A flash of panic and fear flashed across Borg's eyes, and then his expression hardened. "Use earthworms to attack the dragon," Dark Whisper, "drag the dragon underground, and it will be no threat," Dark Whisper. Dui, riding his dragon, crushed all the orcs that stood in his way, turning them into a pile of mud. Just as he approached Borg's position, the ground suddenly shook, and an earthworm suddenly emerged from the earth. Its sharp, dense fangs bit into one of Smaug's legs, attempting to pull him deeper into the ground. Smaug, in pain, bit the earthworm's head and strained to pull it free. But the earthworm seemed to be rooted deep underground. No matter how hard Smaug bit and pulled, it wouldn't dislodge, still clinging to Smaug's leg, trying to drag him into the tunnel he had dug. Crucify, Dui, perched on the dragon's back, attacked the earthworm. The earthworm, instantly in pain, twisted its massive body and emitted a low, hissing sound. The dragon Smaug seized the opportunity and yanked back, yanking a worm roughly 100 meters long and 75 meters wide, emerging intact from the surface. The earthworm was a unique and terrifying sight, cylindrical in shape, covered in a rough, hard shell. Its overall color was a dark brown, similar to the color of Earth. Its head was massive and flat, eyeless, with only a single round, sharp mouth parts arranged closely together like saw teeth, capable of easily crushing stone and earth and digging tunnels. The earthworm, now exposed to the air, appeared uneasy and attempted to burrow back into the earth. Smaug, furious at this sneak attack, naturally refused to allow it a chance to escape. He immediately unleashed a scorching burst of dragon fire upon the earthworm, roasting it to a crisp. The earthworm let out a low, painful whine, its body twisting and tumbling, attempting to extinguish the dragon's flames. The ground shook with a mighty movement, affecting countless orcs. But how could dragons' flames be extinguished so easily? Soon, a foul, meaty aroma wafted into the air. "Smaug, don't be careless. There are definitely more earthworms beneath the earth," Dui warned sternly from the dragon's back. He remembered that there was more than one earthworm that had dug the tunnel directly. Sure enough, before long, two earthworms of the same size suddenly emerged from the ground. Smaug reacted quickly, dodging a worm that bit his neck and blasting it with a stream of searing flame. The earthworm, in pain, quickly retreated underground. But another earthworm seized Smaug's tail and yanked it down into the underground tunnel. Avada Kedavra, Dui hurled a killing curse, striking the earthworm. The earthworm froze instantly, releasing Smaug's tail and lying lifeless. Dui was delighted. This was his first successful kill with a killing curse. It was truly an achievement. 3 times the truth, the 2 previous attempts had failed, leaving him with little confidence in the curse. Now, he had finally achieved his first kill. Having dispatched 2 earthworms, the remaining one seemed frightened and refused to emerge from the ground for another attack. But Dui was not complacent. Earthworms were kings of the underground. If Smaug were dragged down, the outcome was uncertain. The next second, the ground shook again. Just as Dui expected the earthworm to attack, he was surprised. The earthworm's target was the two dead earthworms. It quickly dragged their bodies underground, leaving behind two vast, bottomless caverns, and then remained completely silent. Seeing this, Dui and Smaug ignored it and continued their advance towards Borg. The defeat of the earthworms drastically reduced the morale of the orc army. Upon seeing Smaug the dragon and Dui, all orcs fled in all directions. Lord Borg, the earthworms are no match for the dragon and the wizard. We are no match for them. Retreat, Dark Whisper, the orc herald cried in horror, his eyes filled with fear. Borg's ugly face darkened even further, and his mace instantly crushed the herald's head. He then took a deep breath and commanded, retreat to the tunnels. If you are listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means it was downloaded and re-uploaded without effort. We warmly invite you to visit our channel, Fanfic World. There you will find the original version of this story and many other novels of various genres. We look forward to seeing you dive into a world of incredible novels. Chapter 116, Fiery Fire. At Borg's command, the orcs retreated into the tunnels dug by the earthworms. So when Dui arrived on Smaug, he only killed those orcs who hadn't had time to retreat into the tunnels. But the rest, including Borg, had already entered the tunnels, leaving Dui no chance to find him. Seeing this, Dui felt a sense of helplessness. This Borg was clearly even more formidable than his father, Azog. He immediately retreated into the tunnels when he saw the situation was dire. Smaug noticed Dui's expression and quickly offered a positive response. Master, even if the Borgs retreat into the tunnels, it won't matter. I'll just breathe fire into them and burn them alive. Dui shook his head. Have you forgotten they still have an earthworm? With the earthworm around, they can burrow anywhere underground. How far can your dragon flames reach? As for pursuing them into the tunnels, Dui hadn't considered it at all. Once inside, the earthworms would dominate. Perhaps Borg was hoping he'd chase them in right now. But just because he didn't chase him in didn't mean Dui had no other options. He leaped from Smaug's back and reached the tunnel entrance. Pointing his wand inside, he gathered his malice enchanted, Hellfire. A small wisp of blue flame erupted from the tip of his wand. The flame, filled with violence and evil, resembled the flames of hell. As soon as it touched the ground, it quickly devoured all nearby flammable materials, including Dui, the caster. Dui's expression turned cold, and with a powerful wave of his wand, he drew the flames back. The flames, as if possessing a mind of their own, knew Dui was formidable, and they quickly spread into the tunnel, devouring everything flammable. The flames grew larger and larger, eventually converging into a giant fiery serpent that filled the tunnel. Dui immediately cast a thunderbolt, collapsing the tunnel entrance and blocking it. He finally breathed a sigh of relief. He had just cast the most dangerous spell in the wizarding world, the Grimfire. As one of the most advanced dark arts, the fiery flame curse is extremely difficult to control. The summoned flames grow increasingly powerful, capable of assuming the forms of various monsters and relentlessly pursuing any flammable object, including the caster, regardless of friend or foe. Therefore, less skilled wizards often find themselves harmed when casting the fiery flame curse, unable to control it and lacking the ability to counteract it. Therefore, even the most ruthless dark wizards dare not cast it lightly. To date, the only exception is the Dark Master Grindelwald, who has mastered the fiery flame with ease. He can even use it to distinguish friend from foe. Those loyal to him remain unscathed, while those disloyal are reduced to ash. Had it not been for the combined efforts of great wizards like Nicholas Flamel and the Scamander brothers, the entire Paris would have been nearly reduced to ashes by Grindelwald's fiery flame. Dui, believing he lacked Grindelwald's skills and could control the fiery flame, unleashed it into the tunnel, immediately blocking its escape route. After all, the tunnels only held orcs and other enemies, so there was no need to worry about harming innocent people. Seeing Dui unleash the fiend fire, Smaug's pupils shrank, and he retreated a few steps in fear and trepidation. Master, what was that flame you just unleashed? Why does it seem so dangerous to me? Smaug felt it was even more powerful than his own dragon's flame. If you were to touch even a little of it, even the toughest dragon scales wouldn't be able to withstand its burning. That's the fiend fire, also known as the devil's flame or hellfire. It consumes everything, becoming ever more powerful. If the curse isn't broken, it will burn until it can no longer be controlled, Dewey explained simply. Smaug's fear of the fiend fire deepened upon hearing this. He had always been proud of his dragon's flame, capable of melting even the toughest dwarf armor and weapons with ease. But now, the fiend fire truly lived up to its name, like a flame from hell, carrying a destructive power. And so, he held a heightened reverence for the master who could unleash such terrifying fiend fire. If his master had used this kind of fire against him, he would have been burnt to charcoal. Thinking of this, Smaug couldn't help but feel relieved. Dewey didn't know what Smaug was thinking at the moment, or else he was just overthinking it. If it weren't for the difficulty of controlling the fiend fire, do you think he wouldn't want to use it? Having blocked the tunnel entrance, Dewey didn't pause. He told Smaug to continue attacking the orc army and its weapons, while he rode his broom into the air and waited. Sure enough, before long, a horde of panicked orcs poured out of a tunnel below. They scrambled, stepping over their fellows as they made their way out, as if some terrifying being was chasing them from within. The next moment, with a tremendous rumble, a fiend fire, disguised as a basilisk, burst from the tunnel, instantly incinerating the orcs who had no chance to escape. The fiend fire, emerging from the ground, let out a roar, like a demon freed from its cage, attempting to spread and devour everything around it. Dewey charged forward on his broom, wielding his wand with a powerful wave. Get back! An invisible barrier pressed down on fiend fire, forcing it back into the tunnel. Having burned for so long in the tunnel, fiend fire had grown even more powerful than before. It twisted its flaming body frantically, unwilling to be forced back in. It hissed and spewed fiend fire at Dewey, attempting to break through the barrier. Dewey summoned his magical power to suppress it, forcing it back into the tunnel. He then immediately collapsed the tunnel, blocking that exit as well. Dewey continued to wait. A moment later, another wave of orcs swarmed from another tunnel. This time, Dewey collapsed the tunnel's exit beforehand, trapping both the orcs and fiend fire within. Then, like a whack-a-mole game, Dewey sealed off each tunnel entrance that fiend fire was attempting to exit, preventing it from escaping. An unknown amount of time passed before a tremendous roar erupted from tens of thousands of meters north of the lonely mountain. Blue flames shot up into the sky, and a 10,000-foot-long fiery python roared incessantly, as if announcing its escape. Dewey's expression froze. He hadn't expected the fiend fire to emerge from the other end of the tunnel dug by the orcs. Without hesitation, he rushed in its direction. The fiend fire would not extinguish if it encountered even the slightest flammable substance, even a small sawdust. If left unattended, even he would likely be unable to suppress it. By the time Dewey arrived, he saw the fiend fire had coalesced into a hundreds-meter-long serpent, madly devouring and burning an earthworm. Bolger and some orcs, remarkably resilient, were desperately trying to escape the fiend fire's pursuit. However, before Bolger could be reduced to ash by the fiend fire, Dewey's spell struck. Shatter. Bolger's expression froze in terror as his body was instantly chopped into countless pieces. Disposing of the Bolger was a piece of cake. Dewey, without stopping, flew towards the fiend fire, his wand blazing with a dazzling light. All Curses End. The All Curses End spell could be said to be the antidote to almost all spells. It could dispel common spells within the spell's range, including the dark magic of the fiery flame. As Dewey cast the All Curses End spell, a massive barrier formed, enveloping fiery flame and shrinking it. Fiery flame, in the form of a giant basilisk, furiously attacked the barrier, stirring up waves of energy, attempting to break through its prison and burn everything. Dewey was now struggling. While the All Curses End spell was the antidote to the fiery flame, its power depended on the strength of the fiery flame. A newly cast fiery flame could be easily extinguished with this spell. But the fiery flame before him, having devoured the lives of tens of thousands of orcs, had become a 100-meter-long fiery flame serpent, a formidable force. A fiery flame of this strength would require the combined efforts of at least 4 or 5 elite warriors to completely extinguish it. Dewey, now dealing with it alone, was overwhelmed. However, Dewey did not expect to completely extinguish it alone. His goal was to force it back into the tunnel and completely block the exit. While the fiery blaze could burn most objects, even steel, it wasn't truly invulnerable. Stone and soil, for example, could prevent the fiery blaze from spreading. Therefore, once the tunnel was blocked, the fiery blaze would be confined to its interior. Once nothing remained to burn, it would naturally extinguish. But it was clear that the fiery blaze, possessing its own consciousness, was not a willing being. Seeing that the basilisk's form couldn't break the barrier, the fiery blaze transformed into a Balrog from Middle-earth. The Balrog resembled a demon from his previous life, with horns on its head, bat wings on its back, and a long tail. Wielding a flaming whip, it lashed at the barrier with all its might. The barrier trembled, showing signs of failing. Dui's expression changed, and he immediately mobilized all his magical power. Get back into the tunnel. The barrier continued to shrink, forcing the fiery blaze back. After all, the fiend fire wasn't a true Balrog, nor did it possess much intelligence. Seeing it was being suppressed, it slowly retreated into the tunnel. Thunderbolt, Dui, swift-witted and quick-handed, instantly struck the tunnel overhead. A violent explosion caused the tunnel to collapse, completely burying the entrance. Still uneasy, Dewey cast several more spells, completely sealing the tunnel entrance. Finally, with a sigh of relief, he waved his wand, levitating Borg's head, and flew back to the battlefield on his broomstick. By then, the combined forces of elves, dwarves, and men had gained the upper hand. Ever since Dewey had forced Borg, the orc leader, back into the tunnel and unleashed the fiend fire, morale on the orcs had been severely weakened, and their army was unstable. Then, the great eagles, summoned by Gandalf, brought immense pressure from the air, causing the orc army to collapse and retreat. Had the orcs not outnumbered the elves and dwarves combined by many times, and thus proved impossible to slay in such a short time, the orcs would have been completely defeated. Dui returned to the battlefield and tossed down Borg's head. His voice, resonating throughout the battlefield with the spell, echoed, "Oxitans, your leader Borg is dead. You are defeated." He then produced a black horn. It was made from the horn of an unknown animal, inscribed with a spell. Dui had found it on Borg's body. He wiped the mouthpiece of the horn with a hint of disdain, then blew it forcefully. The horn emitted a piercing sound that quickly spread in all directions. In the next moment, the giant bats that had obscured the sky, as if receiving an unspoken command, became chaotic and scattered. The dark sky quickly brightened, and the sun shone again. The orcs, terrified, sought shade, but were too late to evade the sun's rays. Instantly, the orcs collapsed to the ground in agony, their fighting power gone. The ogres were turned to stone, their faces frozen in terror. Chapter 117. After the war. Upon hearing that their leader, Borg, was dead, the orc army was instantly disheartened. Without the giant bats blocking the sun from the sky, the orcs felt a sense of doom. Countless orcs fled frantically, seeking shelter from the sun. Many more, unable to escape, were scorched by the sun, suffering and weakening. The elves and dwarves, both well-trained and elite, seized this opportunity and launched a one-sided slaughter, relentlessly pursuing the orcs. Even Thorn and his men, who had been guarding the gates of the Lonely Mountain, arrived on the battlefield to fight alongside the dwarven army led by Dane Ironfoot. The most ferocious of all was undoubtedly the dragon Smaug. He radiated death on the battlefield, ruthlessly slaying countless orcs with his dragonfire and incredibly strong tail. Next in line was Bjarn, in his bear form, a massive tank, crushing and tearing apart his enemies. The orcs were powerless to resist, and in their panic and despair, they were slain one by the elves, dwarves, and men. The battle raged until sunset. The hundreds of thousands of orcs led by Bald were nearly completely annihilated. The few remaining orcs, taking advantage of the sunset to recover their strength, fled in panic into the mountains and wilderness. But these orcs, utterly emaciated by the slaughter, no longer posed a threat and were of little concern. On a battlefield littered with orc corpses, Thranduil the elf, Dane Ironfoot, Lord of the Iron Hills, Gandalf, Bilbo, and Thorin finally gathered. With the exception of Thranduil, who maintained his dignified demeanor, the others were utterly devastated, their bodies splattered with the black blood of orcs. After this great battle, the tension between the elves and dwarves faded. For the first time, they stood together in complete peace. But everyone's eyes were now fixed on Dewey. Dewey descended on his broomstick, followed closely by the mighty dragon Smaug. Seeing Smaug approach, even though they knew he had been enslaved by Duil, was on their side, and had played a decisive role in the war, the elves and dwarves still instinctively retreated in fear. Thranduil, Thorin, and Dane tensed, looking at the dragon with some trepidation. Seeing this, Duil left Smaug behind while he joined the others. Let us welcome the greatest contributor to victory in the Battle of Five Armies, Duil the Black, the slayer of Azog and Bolg, "King of the Orcs, the destroyer of orcs, and master of dragons," Gandalf exclaimed joyfully. Bilbo gazed at Duil with adoration and excitement. Thranduil, the Elf King, softened his gaze, for once shedding his arrogance. He stepped forward and said solemnly, "Wizard Duil, I must express my gratitude to you. Without your efforts to turn the tide, I foresee that my people will shed their blood on the land and never return to the forest." As an Elf King, Thranduil was not lacking in wisdom and foresight. He knew that if Dewey hadn't stopped the war between the elves and dwarves in time, and then single-handedly turned the tide of battle, his elven army would have suffered heavy losses, perhaps even annihilation. He couldn't imagine how he would face the people of the Woodland Kingdom in that situation. So, Thranduil was filled with gratitude towards Dewey. "Dewey, you will be my guest of honor, Thranduil, and a forever friend of the Woodland Kingdom. Mirkwood will always welcome you." Thranduil solemnly performed the elven salute. Legolas, standing behind Thranduil, also smiled in gratitude and followed his father's lead in bowing. The elven army saluted Dewey in unison, their movements swift and fluid, without any unnecessary flourishes, creating an overall atmosphere of calm, solemnity, and sincerity. Dewey was startled by this sudden solemnity, and momentarily flustered. "Your Majesty, Thranduil, you're so polite, but I'm delighted to be friends with the Woodland Kingdom." "It's an honor," Dewey returned the greeting. Thranduil beamed with joy at the words and immediately invited him, "If you have time, Dewey, please come visit the Woodland Kingdom. I'll treat you with a most magnificent feast, and Legolas has always spoken highly of your friend. I'm sure he'll be looking forward to your visit. When this is over, I'll definitely visit the Woodland Kingdom on my return." Dewey nodded, happily agreeing. Thranduil's smile deepened. After this war, Dewey's strength had been witnessed by all. Not to mention his possession of a powerful dragon. Befriending such a wizard would only benefit the Woodland Kingdom. Seeing Thranduil courting Dewey, the dwarfs were not to be outdone. Dane Ironfoot, Lord of the Iron Hills, stepped forward immediately. Unlike his previous arrogance, he enthusiastically announced, "And we of the Iron Hills, Duil, I, Dane Ironfoot, am a recognized friend. The Iron Hills always welcome you, Duil, you have helped us dwarves. To express our gratitude, the Iron Hills will forge a suit of dragon armor for the dragon as a token of friendship. I hope you won't refuse." "Dragon armor?" Duil was stunned. He hadn't expected such a reward from Dane Ironfoot. But seeing Smaug's eyes gleaming with longing, he gladly accepted Dane's offer. Smaug's heart scales had been knocked out by a black arrow, leaving him vulnerable. With a dwarf-forged armor, his defenses would be greatly enhanced, making him immune to even the black arrows. Seeing Dane deliver the gift to Duil's heart brought a smile to his face. The others' gazes toward Dane Ironfoot shifted. Thranduil leered at the dwarf, his heart filled with wariness. It was surprising to see this seemingly rude and arrogant dwarf so cunning. Thorin Oakenshield, looking at Dewey with a complex expression, was being courted by the elves and his cousin Dane. He took a deep breath, stepped out of the crowd, and solemnly addressed Dewey. "Dewey, thank you for helping me recapture the Lonely Mountain from the dragons, and now for helping us defend it from the orc army, and I apologize for my earlier rude remarks to you, though I didn't mean them." Dewey's smile faded, and he looked at Thorin calmly. "I'm glad to see you sober." "I accept your apology." Thorin breathed a sigh of relief and immediately assured him, "Don't worry, your tenth of the treasure will be divided up as quickly as possible and delivered to you, and even though Bilbo didn't find the Arkenstone, I won't lose anything from his share." Dewey nodded, finally looking at Thorin with a friendly expression. It was unclear how Thorin had shaken off the effects of the dragon sickness and regained his sanity. But now Thorin finally seemed to be acting like the king under the mountain. Thranduil took the opportunity to ask Thorin for the custom-made white gem necklace. However, this time, he didn't resort to force, instead offering to pay Thorin a reward that would satisfy him and reclaim the relic of his deceased wife. Thorin, having regained his composure, simply offered to return the necklace to its rightful owner, refusing to ask for a reward from Thranduil. This was done in the hope of repairing relations between the kingdom under the mountain and the Woodland Kingdom. This softened Thorin's attitude, and Thranduil promised to return the beast bite sword he had confiscated. Furthermore, Thorin promised to give 1/14 of the treasure to Bard and the people of Lake Town. He also gave another 1/14 to his cousin, Dane Ironfoot, as a token of gratitude for leading the dwarf army to his aid. Similarly, the 12 dwarves who had accompanied Thorin to the Lonely Mountain also received a share of the treasure. Thorin's generosity impressed everyone. Gandalf, who had long been disappointed with Thorin, was delighted. He believed that the Lonely Mountain would welcome a wise dwarf king, and that the kingdom beneath the mountain would become even more powerful than before. After the battle, Thranduil, after receiving the white gem necklace, formally bid farewell and led the elven army back to Mirkwood. During this time, a small incident occurred. The elf Tauriel asked Thranduil to leave the woodland kingdom, wishing to be with the dwarf Kili. Tauriel and Kili had previously crossed paths when a group of dwarves were captured in Mirkwood and imprisoned in the elven dungeons. Later, after being ordered to hunt the dwarves and arriving in Lake Town, Tauriel used Kingsleaf to save Kili from Morgul's arrow. A sudden and unspoken love blossomed between the two. Thranduil disapproved of Tauriel's desire to be with the dwarves. Elves possessed eternal life, while dwarves lived for only a few hundred years, a fleeting moment for an elf. While elves possess infinite lifespans, they are not immortal. They die either by being killed or by a broken heart. If Tauriel chooses to be with Kili, and their affection grows, then when Kili dies of old age, Tauriel will also die of grief and heartbreak. Thranduil finds giving up eternal life for love utterly irrational. Legolas, who has a close relationship with Tauriel and always considers her a sister, finds such a choice unacceptable and tries to persuade her. Even Kili doesn't want Tauriel to give up her long life for him. However, Tauriel is adamant, deeply in love, and determined. Seeing her resolve, Thranduil gives up persuasion and agrees to her request, returning to Mirkwood with a heartbroken Legolas. Touched by Tauriel's sacrifice, Kili makes his own request to Thorin. Tauriel is unsuited to life in the Lonely Mountain, so he plans to leave and live with her. Thorin is naturally heartbroken. Kili is not only his right-hand man but also his nephew. Thorin had no offspring, and Fili and Kili were both his nephews, making the future king under the mountain a likely successor. But now that Kili insisted, Thorin had no choice but to agree. Dui didn't express his opinion on this interracial romance, but he was curious about what the offspring of a dwarf and an elf would be like. Would they lean more towards dwarf or elf? The image of a dwarf with pointed ears popped into Dui's mind, and he was immediately speechless at his own wild idea, quickly dismissing it. As Kili and Tauriel were about to leave, Dui offered their blessing and curiously asked, "What are your plans?" "Where are you going?" Kili and Tauriel exchanged a look, their eyes almost tearing. He smiled brightly and said, "We plan to explore and stop wherever we like. If you ever come west, please be sure to visit Witherdop and let me show my hospitality," Dui invited with a smile. Chapter 118 Divide the Treasure. Inside the Hall of the Dwarves in Lonely Mountain, Thorin sat on the throne at the top. Dewey, Gandalf, Dane, Bilbo, and Bard sat on either side. As for Beorn, after the defeat of the orcs, he had already returned to his home on a giant eagle. Everyone had gathered here for the Mountain of Treasure in the treasury. Thorin looked at the people below, his eyes flashing slightly, and said, "I have distributed the treasures over the past few days. The purpose of having everyone here is so that everyone can get their own share of the treasure. The only pity is that we didn't find the Arkenstone in the treasury. I'm afraid this treasure of our race has disappeared and we can't let everyone see its glory." As he said this, he looked around at everyone, inadvertently observing their reactions. "What? The Arkenstone is missing." Dane was the most excited. "How could the Arkenstone be missing? Isn't it hidden in the treasury? How could it be lost?" The Arkenstone was like a royal seal to the dwarves, a symbol of royal authority. Only with it could one command the 7 dwarf clans. It was of paramount importance. Now that this treasure had disappeared, Dane couldn't help but be anxious. After all, Thorin, with the Arkenstone, was the true king under the mountain, recognized by all dwarves. Otherwise, Thorin would only be king of Durin's clan, unable to command the other dwarf clans. The difference between the two was enormous. The 7 dwarf clans were the Longbirds, the Firebirds, the Broadbeams, the Ironfists, the Hardbirds, the Darkhairs, and the Stonefoots. The Longbirds were Durin's clan, to which Thorin belonged. The 7 dwarf clans lived in different parts of Middle-earth, relatively independent yet connected. The 7 rings of the dwarves, given by Sauron, were given to the leaders of these 7 clans. During the reign of Thorin's ancestor, Thrain, the Arkenstone was unearthed from the depths of the Lonely Mountain, crafted with the unparalleled skill of the dwarf craftsman. The Arkenstone was recognized by all 7 clans, who swore fealty to its bearer. Therefore, whoever possessed it was considered the king of the dwarves, commanding all. The others were surprised to hear that the Arkenstone had been lost. Bilbo felt both surprised and guilty. He wondered if he had been more careful, perhaps he would have recovered the Arkenstone and avoided its disappearance. Bilbo believed that if the Arkenstone had been lost, it was likely destroyed in Smaug's dragonfire, as Dowie had said. Gandalf was surprised and glanced thoughtfully at Bilbo and Dowie. Dowie, on the other hand, looked indifferent. Thorin observed the reactions of the crowd below and fixed his gaze on Dowie. Dowie, I have a request. Could you lend me the Stone of Truth so I can find the Arkenstone and fulfill my wish? The others' gazes fell on Dowie. Dewey's eyelids lifted slightly, a twinkle in his eyes, and he spoke calmly. Of course I can, but the Stone of Truth has been discovered by Sauron. He once tried to corrupt me through it, and I was only saved by the protection of the Lady of Lorien. If you use it, be prepared to be discovered and corrupted by him, leading you to darkness. Upon hearing Dewey's words, Gandalf's expression changed before Thorin could even speak, and he shook his head gravely. The fact that Sauron can see Durin through the Palantir means he also possesses one. He can see everything here, even influence people, leading them to darkness and becoming his servants. Sauron's dark power is more dangerous than dragon sickness. You never know when you might fall prey to his influence. It's too dangerous. Thorin, you must not take risks with a Palantir. But even after regaining his composure, Thorin remained the stubborn dwarf. The Arkenstone is of vital importance to Durin and his clan. Gandalf, I am willing to take this risk. You don't need to persuade me. I will bear all the consequences. He stepped down from the throne and stood before Durin, staring directly into his eyes. Durin, please grant me this request. Without looking away, Durin chuckled softly and said, since you insist, I see no reason to refuse. He then pulled the Palantir from his pouch and placed it on the table before him. Go ahead. Thorin glanced at Durin, his eyes gleaming. Thank you. He lifted the Palantir with both hands, his eyes fixed on it, concentrating on the location of the Arkenstone. The mist within the stone quickly dissipated, revealing a scene from the treasury. Thorin was instantly delighted. Could the Arkenstone still be there? But as he struggled to find it in the scene, all he saw was a mountain of treasure, not a single trace of the Arkenstone. Thorin searched relentlessly, but after a long time, he still found nothing. Disappointed, he set the Palantir down. Could the Arkenstone really have been destroyed by the dragon's flame? Thorin muttered in frustration and confusion. Dewey ignored his emotion and put the Palantir back away. Well, Thorin, now that we've explored, let's get down to business. Thorin, feeling somewhat discouraged, waved his hand, telling Balin and the others to lead the group into the treasury to claim their share of the treasure. He himself, silently, gazed at the empty seat on the throne where the Arkenstone had been set. When everyone arrived at the treasury, they were once again astounded by the treasures within. The treasury was enormous, with all the treasure divided into several portions, each piled high. Dewey, this is yours, 1/10, Balin explained, leading Dewey to the tallest mountain. The others nearby belonged to Lord Dane, Master Bard, and you, Bilbo, he said, pointing to the smaller mountains nearby. Dane beamed at the side of his own mountain. After all, no dwarf could refuse such a large treasure. Bard was also delighted, believing that with so much treasure, he would be able to rebuild Dale and restore the glory of his ancestors. Bilbo, however, felt uneasy about his share of the gold. He felt he hadn't fulfilled his mission to help Thorin obtain the Arkenstone, and therefore didn't deserve such a large share. He shook his head and took a few steps back, feeling unworthy. No, I didn't complete my quest. I don't deserve my share of the treasure. I can't take it. Philly and Boffer pushed Bilbo back, laughing. Well, Bilbo, don't be polite. Even if you didn't find the Arkenstone, you were still a member of our expedition. Don't forget, it was you who saved us from the giant spider in Mirkwood and freed us from the elven dungeon. You deserve all this. Even so, Bilbo still felt he didn't deserve so much. It was the first time anyone had seen a hobbit so unconcerned with money. In the end, Bilbo was still determined to take only a small portion. Thorin, having calmed down, went to the treasury. Seeing that Bilbo didn't want a mountain of gold, he warmed to him even more. He immediately pulled out a piece of mithril armor and put it on Bilbo. The mithril armor was priceless, weightless, yet impervious to even the sharpest elven swords. It was perfect for Bilbo's protection. Then he prepared to stuff Bilbo with as much gold and jewelry as he could take. Dewey, unwilling to let Bilbo suffer, immediately cast a purse with a stretch charm and stuffed nearly half the mountain of gold into it. He reluctantly stopped the spell only after Bilbo cried out, "Enough, enough." Thorin twitched his lips at the sight, his expression nearly cracking. He had forgotten about Dewey's unreasonable presence. Dewey ignored Thorin's thoughts and produced a hide purse. Using his wand, he continuously expanded the space inside until it was half the size of a football field. Then, like a whale swallowing, the purse automatically leaped to his portion of the mountain, sucking in the treasure. Thus, 1/10 of the treasure now lay in his hands. This treasure was enough to make him the richest man in Middle-earth, second only to the Lonely Mountain. Witnessing this scene, Bard and Dane stood stunned, then filled with envy and longing. They too wished for a purse that could hold an entire mountain of gold. Dewey also enchanted the two men's purses, though neither held as much space as Dewey's. Even so, the two cherished them as treasures, believing that a purse capable of holding so much space was worth as much as the treasure itself. Having collected his share of the treasure, Dewey did not linger. He left the Lonely Mountain with Gandalf, Bilbo, and Bard, returning first to Dale. After a few days in Dale, Dewey, Gandalf, and Bilbo were welcomed back by Bard and the locals. Dewey still kept the hearth in Dale and even gave Bard a small bottle of flue powder, inviting him to visit Witherdop in the future. The house they had stayed in was later renovated by Bard into something magnificent, second only to the Lord's mansion. Bard also granted Dewey permanent ownership of the house, declaring him a permanent member of Dale, free to return at any time. However, Dewey remained unaware of any of this. He was currently riding on Smaug's back with Gandalf and Bilbo, heading towards Mirkwood. Having promised Thranduil a visit to the Woodland Kingdom, he naturally wouldn't break his promise. More importantly, he needed to take Smaug to Rivendell so that Elrond, the master healer, could heal Smaug's wings. Duel's current reaching spell wasn't enough to successfully fit the enormous dragon Smaug into a single space. After all, Smaug was over 140 meters long, his head, minus his horns, was 12 meters tall, and his wingspan was a whopping 120 meters. Only Newt Scamander's suitcase could possibly hold such a massive body and still allow him to move freely. But Duel clearly didn't have the strength to do that. So, they had to resort to the most rudimentary option, take Smaug over the Misty Mountains to Rivendell on the other side for treatment. Of course, Duel had also tried to convince Gandalf and Bilbo to teleport directly from the Hearth in Dale to Rivendell to wait for him. However, the two clearly preferred the color activity of riding a dragon, rather than arriving at their destination in the blink of an eye without any sense of participation in the journey. This statement came from a certain unnamed gray-robed wizard. Chapter 119 Holy White Fruit. Dewey and the other two made their way to the outskirts of Mirkwood. Upon their arrival, the elves of the Woodland Kingdom were already waiting. Dewey was surprised to see his escort. "Lord Legolas, why have you come in person? When you first arrived near Lake Town, patrolling guards spotted the dragon from afar. Father knew you were coming, so he sent me to greet you," Legolas said with a warm smile. His gaze drifted to the dragon behind the three. Although he had already seen it on the battlefield of Lonely Mountain, seeing it again still filled him with a sense of fear. "Please follow me, everyone. Father has prepared a feast for you." To prevent Smaug's presence from unsettling the elves, Dewey asked Smaug to remain outside the woods. Then, the three followed Legolas back to the Woodland Kingdom. Thranduil sat high on the throne, clad in magnificent robes and crowned with a woven crown of fiery red maple leaves and blueberries. He exuded a noble, majestic, and elegant demeanor, like an elven king ruling over the endless forest. Unlike their previous meeting, Thranduil this time took the initiative to step down from the throne, his manner reserved yet friendly. "Welcome, welcome again, all three of you. I have prepared a sumptuous feast of wine and delicacies. Please do me the honor of attending." Gandalf, the diplomatic officer among the three, nodded slightly, leaning on his staff, and said with a smile, "We are honored to attend your majesty's banquet." Thranduil asked Dewey, "Why is the dragon Smaug nowhere to be seen?" "Smaug's enormous size would crush the trees in the forest, so he had to wait outside," Dewey explained. Thranduil nodded. "That being said, we can't neglect the dragon. I will arrange a separate table for him outside the forest." Dewey was surprised that Thranduil had considered this and thanked him. "Thank you very much, your majesty." Then, led by Thranduil and accompanied by Legolas, everyone entered the banquet hall for the feast. Unlike the elves of Rivendell, who tended to eat a simple vegetarian diet, the elves of Mirkwood ate a mix of meat and vegetables. Perhaps due to their proximity to the dwarves of Lonely Mountain, the wood elves also enjoyed drinking, often to excess. Their movements, while elegant, were often more flamboyant. At the banquet, melodious music accompanied the elven maidens who sang ancient elven epics, while elven servants gracefully moved around the table, pouring wine for the guests. Thranduil and Gandalf discussed the situation in Middle-earth, while Dewey and Bilbo listened to Legolas, who translated the elven maidens' elven epics for them. During their conversation, they casually mentioned Tauriel, the wood elf who had chosen to be with the dwarf Keely. Legolas was somewhat depressed, grieving the impending loss of a friend. Although he couldn't understand why Tauriel would give up eternal life for love, only to die heartbroken over her lover's passing in just a few hundred years, he ultimately gave his blessing. The atmosphere at the banquet was harmonious, and Thranduil looked at Dewey and revealed a surprising piece of news. Thranduil was preparing to send Legolas away for training. He had instructed Dewey to take Legolas with him on this trip. Legolas was taken aback by this sudden announcement. Evidently his father hadn't told him in advance. Dewey was surprised by Thranduil's request, but not surprised at all. When planning for one's children, one should always think long-term. Thranduil wanted Legolas to see the world, so that he could quickly grow and become independent. If Dewey hadn't appeared, Thranduil would have sent Legolas away for training soon, perhaps even having him join the future Fellowship of the Ring as the sole elf. But with Dewey's presence this time, and having witnessed his abilities, Thranduil clearly had the idea of letting his son experience the world ahead of time. His Highness Legolas is a skilled archer and elven warrior. We are honored to have him with us. Dewey naturally wouldn't refuse Thranduil's request. He had a good impression of Legolas and wasn't averse to having such a companion. Thranduil was delighted to hear Dewey's cheerful agreement. At his signal, an elf held up a golden tray and placed it before Dewey. Dewey stared at a small box on the tray, inlaid with various jewels and emeralds, a puzzled expression on his face. He looked at Thranduil. "Your Majesty, what do you mean by this?" "This is a token of gratitude," Thranduil said sincerely. "For the elves not being annihilated in the Battle of Five Armies, of course. There's also an additional request." "What is it?" "I want you to craft a wand for Legolas." Dewey wasn't overly surprised to hear this request. He still owed wands to Elrondor, Elladan, and Arwen, and, thinking it was better to herd one sheep than two, he agreed to Thranduil's terms. However, he was also filled with curiosity about what was inside the treasure box. The box was of extraordinary value. What kind of treasure could Thranduil have stored so preciously within it? Curious, he opened the box and was stunned. Inside the box, padded with silk, lay a silvery white fruit. Given how treasured it was, Dewey naturally wouldn't consider it an ordinary fruit. "What is this?" "It's the fruit of the white tree." Gandalf's surprised voice was the first to chime in. "Lord Thranduil, where did you get this fruit from?" Seeing Gandalf's discerning eye, Thranduil's lips curled slightly as he explained casually, "This is a seed from the white tree Nimlith. I visited Nominor in the Second Age, before Nimlith was felled, and I plucked a fruit from her and brought it back. I tried to plant it, but unfortunately, Mirkwood isn't suitable for it, and it never took root." Hearing it was a seed from the white tree Nimlith on Nominor, Gandalf was even more astonished. Even Dewey was startled. Looking at the fruit in the box, he felt a sudden weight on his face. According to Dewey, after the two trees were destroyed by the evil gods Ungoliant and Morgoth, Yavanna, goddess of vegetation, one of the Valar, created the white tree Galatharion for the Vanir and the Noldor, modeled after the silver tree. This white tree resembled the silver tree, one of the two trees, except that it did not emit light. Later, the elves planted a descendant of Galatharion on the island of Talaresia, where it was named Celeborn. The elves of Talaresia had friendly relations with the Numenoreans, so they gave them the seeds of Celeborn. The Numenoreans planted the seeds in the king's court on Nominor, where they grew into the white tree, named Nimlith. The white tree has since become the symbol of the Numenoreans. Later, Sauron seduced and corrupted the king and some of the Numenorean nobles, cutting down and burning Nimlith. Only Isildur, a loyalist, risked his life to secretly rescue a fruit of Nimlith the night before it was felled. After the sinking of Nominor, Isildur planted it in Minas Ithil, Gondor's first white tree. However, the white tree's fate seemed to be plagued by adversity. This white tree of Gondor was burned by Sauron after he conquered Minas Ithil. Before the fall of Minas Ithil, Isildur snatched a seed and planted it in Minas Anor, becoming Gondor's second white tree. However, this white tree perished in the Great Plague of 1636. In 1640, King Tyrondor of Gondor planted a new seedling in Minas Tirith. However, in 2872, with the extinction of Gondor's royal bloodline, the white tree gradually withered, and no new white tree has appeared to this day. The fruit of the white tree Thranduil presented was the seed of the third-generation white tree, Nimlith. It could be said to be the fourth-generation white tree, the same generation as Gondor's first. If the Dunedain or the people of Gondor knew of this seed, they would likely do anything to obtain it. Your Majesty, this is truly too precious. Dui hesitated to accept it. Thranduil shook his head. You need not refuse, Dui. While this fruit has historical value, the growing conditions are too demanding. If I hadn't sensed the vitality within it, I would have thought it was rotten, so don't hold your hopes too high. I even doubt that outside of a sacred place like Valinor, there's no environment suitable for it to break through its shell and germinate. Seeing Thranduil's resolute attitude, Dui accepted the precious fruit. He also decided to craft the finest one for Legolas. Otherwise, he would feel uneasy accepting the gift. The atmosphere at Dui's banquet was lively, and the dragon Smogs was also bustling. The wood elves, trembling with fear, wheeled carts of delicacies before Smog, placing them before him. There were whole roasted lambs and pigs, and barrels of wine. Smog luxuriated in the elf service like a master, chowing down on each roasted lamb and each barrel of wine, his eyes narrowed with delight. He only thought, this is what it's like to enjoy yourself. Why hadn't he thought of capturing servants to serve him? Smog's voracious appetite ate dozens of pigs and lambs and drank over a dozen barrels of wine before he could barely manage a burp. This scene infuriated the elves who served him, their faces darkening. Especially the elven chefs in charge of the grilling. They couldn't even keep up with the dragon's consuming speed, and they were so exhausted they wanted to go on strike. They no longer cared about fearing the dragon, they just wanted to send this glutton away. If he continued to eat, their woodland kingdom would be in danger of famine. Chapter 120, Lorien. Dui and his companions stayed in the woodland kingdom for 2 days before formally bidding Thranduil farewell. However, before departing, Dui, with Thranduil's permission, installed a fireplace as a flue node and presented Thranduil with some flue powder. Thranduil was deeply intrigued by the flue network. Although Thranduil somewhat disdained the rather tacky nature of flue powder, he immediately recognized its strategic importance. It seamlessly connected all the forces of Middle-earth, allowing any news to be transmitted instantly through the flue network, even teleported. And the fact that such a powerful tool lay in Dui's sole hands only strengthened Thranduil's respect for him. After bidding farewell to Thranduil, Dui's group added another member. The four of them, riding on Smog's back, continued their journey westward. Legolas, riding a dragon for the first time, was thrilled. Although his reserved nature prevented him from showing much emotion, his red, pointed ears clearly showed it. While traveling west through Mirkwood, the group encountered giant spiders startled away by the dragon. Legolas immediately drew his bow and arrows, piercing each one's head. Just as he was about to finish off the remaining two, Dewey reached out and stopped him. Facing Legolas's questioning gaze, Dewey smiled and said, "Don't kill them all. Leave 2 alive." With a flick of his wand, he petrified the fleeing spiders, then used the levitation spell to bring them over and stow them away in a dimensional bag. Dewey's actions surprised not only Legolas, but also Bilbo and Gandalf. "Dewey, why did you get 2 giant spiders?" Gandalf asked, puzzled. Dewey smiled and explained, "Don't you think giant spider silk is incredibly strong? I happen to have a weaving spell that can weave cloth from spider silk. It's bound to be more defensive than most armor and absolutely worth its weight in gold." The 3 were speechless. Gandalf looked at Dewey in bewilderment. "The treasure you received from the Lonely Mountain would make you one of the richest men in Middle-earth. Why are you still thinking about making money?" Dewey angrily kicked Smog at his feet. "Because I have a dragon to feed now, and no amount of money will ever be enough." Thinking of the wood elves trying to suppress their smiles before leaving, and even Thranduil sighing in relief, Dewey felt a pang of pain in his teeth. He had never imagined that one day he would become unwelcome. Smog had eaten hundreds of sheep and pigs in 2 days and drunk all the wine in the cellar. The elves had been forced to hunt in the woods with bows and arrows to supplement their meat shortage. Dewey had never imagined that a dragon that wasn't asleep could have such a voracious appetite. After witnessing the dragon's voracious appetite, Dewey wished he could find a place for the creature to sleep. That way, he wouldn't have to worry about not being able to feed it. But the trouble was, Smog demanded a blanket of gold before he could sleep. He was adamant, refusing to budge, even threatening Dewey with a crochet discourse. Smaug explained that the dragon's only and unwavering pursuit was to sleep atop an immense treasure trove. In their scramble for treasure, dragons not only attacked dwarves but even fought each other, plundering the treasures of each other's caves. This was the reason the dragons dwindled. Until now, only Smaug was the last known dragon. Dewey promised Smaug that upon returning to Weatherdup, he would use the treasures he had received from the Lonely Mountain as his bed. This only managed to silence Smaug's incessant complaints. But Smaug still felt this small amount of treasure was far too meager for a bed. After all, it only represented 1/10 of the Lonely Mountain's treasures, barely enough to cover him. He had once slumped over the Lonely Mountain's treasures, possessing the greatest wealth in the world. But now he was following a poor master. The difference in treatment was a cliffhanger. Dewey's teeth clenched, and he wished he could have it of this foolish dragon right away. He hadn't just subdued his mount, he'd hired a master, and a money-eating master at that. Gandalf and Bilbo chuckled uncontrollably at Dewey's rambling complaints. Even Legolas couldn't help but smile. They'd assumed Smaug would be some ruthless dragon, but they hadn't expected him to be this kind. Of course, they all knew Dewey was joking about making money. But they all thought the idea of using spider silk was a good one. They'd all seen the strength of giant spider silk, even the sharpest elven swords couldn't easily cut it. If protective clothing could be woven from spider silk, it would undoubtedly be superior to most armor, lighter and more flexible. And the material would be readily available and inexhaustible. Thinking of this, Legolas began to believe that the giant spiders of the jungle weren't completely useless. Perhaps he could send a message to his father, Thranduil, to capture some giant spiders and imprison them, then have the skilled elven craftsmen weave strong armor from their silk. They rode their dragons across Mirkwood, then had afternoon tea at Beorn's house before saying goodbye and continuing their journey. However, this time they did not continue west to the Misty Mountains, but instead followed the Anduin south. Before crossing the Misty Mountains to Rivendell, Dewey had to visit Loch Lorien. Not only had Dewey promised to make wands for Elrondor, Elladan, and Arwen, but now Legolas's wand had also been added. He also had the staff that Gandalf had promised to make for him. For all of this, he needed to travel to Lorien. Lorien lay east of the Misty Mountains and west of the Anduin, separated only by the Anduin from Dol Guldur, the southernmost city of Mirkwood. Here, the Nimrydal Brook, originating from the Misty Mountains, and the Celebrant River converge into the Anduin, forming a beautiful delta. Lorien is shrouded and protected by the power of Nanaya, the Ring of Water, making it impervious to the erosion of time. The valley remains eternally pure and beautiful, the last pristine land in Middle-earth. When Dewey and his companions reached the outskirts of Lorien, they sensed an invisible magical barrier, making it difficult to find the correct path without the permission of those within. However, among them was Gandalf, a frequent visitor to Lorien. At Gandalf's suggestion, Smaug was left outside Lorien. The three followed Gandalf upstream, following the river. Along the way, the trees and grasses were evergreen, reminiscent of the early spring of ancient times, eternally lush and evergreen, bearing the marks of time. From time to time, golden leaves drifted down the river from upstream. Their brilliance and beauty were so dazzling, as if they were made of gold, enough to make even dragons covet them. The four of them journeyed deeper into the forest. The surrounding green faded, transforming into a realm of gold. In the heart of the forest grew countless tall, majestic mullein trees. Their bark was silver gray, while their leaves were golden yellow, as if crafted from gold. The fallen golden leaves covered the ground, like a blanket of gold. This is how the Golden Forest of Lorien got its name. Here, they encountered three elves. "Ah, Haldir, it's been a long time since we last met," Gandalf greeted the leading elf. Haldir smiled and nodded. "Mithrandir, the Lord's Lady knows you're coming and has sent us to greet you. Please follow us." Gandalf smiled and exclaimed, "The Lady of Lorien has a keen eye. I believe she spotted us the moment we entered Lorien." They followed the elves leading the way to Khazad-dûm, the capital of Lorien. The city of Khazad-dûm sits atop a green hill, crowned by towering mullein trees. The hill is surrounded by a green wall and moat. The elves of Lorien do not dwell on the ground, but rather on platforms or dwellings built atop the towering mullein trees. Khazad-dûm is a city built upon the trees. Countless lights hang from the trees, like countless stars dotting the forest floor, and the entire hill seems submerged in a sea of stars. Atop the largest of the numerous towering mullein trees stands the palace of the Lord and Lady of Lorien. Beneath this largest and oldest mullein tree, A central fountain rises from a verdant lawn. The waters of the fountain fall into a nearby silver basin, then overflow to form a lake. The waters flow down the hill into a stream called the spring stream. This spring is said to wash away the weariness of life and possess extraordinary magical powers. Where the spring stream flows lies a beautiful garden, Lady Galadriel's private garden, planted with a variety of exotic flowers and plants, blooming year-round. From the foot of the giant tree, several people ascended a spiral staircase until they reached a large platform. The Lord and Lady's palace sat on this platform. Built in an oval shape around the tree, it consisted of several platforms in a large hall. From below, it seemed to float in midair, blending seamlessly with the surrounding natural environment. From the treetop platform, one could overlook the entire forest of Lorien, taking in its breathtaking beauty. They entered the hall. At the front, the thrones of the Lord and Lady sat side by side, without any particular order of rank. On the other side, a simple, elegant staircase spiraled up the hall, descending to a higher platform. This was the resting place for the Lord and Lady. Gandalf was already familiar with the surroundings. But Bilbo, and Legolas, visiting for the first time, gazed in wonder as they waited. A moment later, an elven couple, hand in hand, descended from the end of the escalator. With their appearance, the entire hall seemed to brighten. Everyone's gaze unconsciously converged on them, as if living things instinctively follow light. They were Celeborn and Galadriel, the masters of Lorien. Mithrandir, the autumn leaves of Lorien have fallen dozens of times, obscuring your former footsteps. But what storms outside have delayed your arrival? Celeborn greeted. His voice was like fresh spring thunder, rich and resonant with the spring breeze. He was tall and straight, with silver hair and robes of natural splendor and exquisite beauty, exuding majesty and elegance. If Elrond was like the spring breeze, compassionate and forgiving, a benevolent king, Thranduil was like Mirkwood itself. Mysterious and unapproachable, a solitary and austere king. Celeborn before him possessed an ancient calm and composure, as if weathered by the passage of time. His demeanor held a near-eternal tranquility, unheard and unhurried, as if the turmoil of the world could not shake his composure. He was more like an elder silently guarding his home, a king tempered by the mortal world, his edge restrained, his dignified composure steady. No matter how fierce the storm outside, it cannot shake your composure, Lord Celeborn, Gandalf complimented with a slight nod. Except, of course, for your beautiful Lady Galadriel, Celeborn smiled at this. Meanwhile, Galadriel, standing hand in hand with her husband, turned her gaze to the remaining few. Young wizard, we meet again. Galadriel's eyes met Dui's with a smile. A voice echoed in Dui's mind. Chapter 121 Prophecy. In the hall, Celeborn exchanged pleasantries with Gandalf and turned his attention to Dui, Bilbo, and Legolas. But Dui was the one he focused on. This must be Dui the Black, who subdued the dragon Smaug, slew the Orc kings Azagenborg, and turned the tide in the Battle of Five Armies. Celeborn's tone was filled with admiration. It's true that hearing about you is worse than meeting you in person. You are younger and more distinguished than I imagined. Thank you for the compliment, Lord Celeborn. Dewey nodded in greeting, accepting Celeborn's praise with a smile. While the Lord of Lorien before him might not be as renowned as Elrond or Thranduil, even his wife, Galadriel, far surpassed him in prestige, status, and power in Middle-earth. But that didn't mean he was mediocre. Without exceptional strength, how could he have won Galadriel's favor? Therefore, Dui never underestimated him for being the man behind Galadriel. Seeing Dui's composure, Celeborn's gaze flickered with admiration. Galadriel once told me that Middle-earth would welcome a wizard beyond compare, and it seems her vision remains as sharp as ever. Lady Galadriel, you flatter me. I'm only an ordinary wizard. No ordinary wizard can tame a dragon. Celeborn smiled, then turned his gaze to Legolas. His emerald eyes met the elf prince's with a touch of the gentleness of an elder. Thranduil's sun is truly as bright as a star. I see in you some of your father's former brilliance. Is your father well? Legolas bowed, his tone even more respectful. My father is well, Lord Celeborn. I send my regards to you. He often told me of you, saying you were more age-savvy than the trees of Mirkwood, more wise than the lakes of the Misty Mountains. Although Thranduil and Celeborn were not related by blood, they were both Sindarin elves, naturally close. Celeborn treated Legolas like a junior. After exchanging a few words with Legolas, he finally extended a gentle greeting to Bilbo. Galadriel stood beside her husband, looking at the others tenderly, but remained silent. After everyone had exchanged greetings, she instructed the elves to prepare a feast for the guests from afar. The dinner was not grand, but the atmosphere was solemn and gentle, without any noise or bustle. The Lord and his wife sat at the head table, dining with Gandalf, Bilbo, and Legolas. In addition, another elf had joined the feast. She was Arwen, the princess of the Evening Star, daughter of Elrond, who had lived in Lorraine since childhood. She was also the granddaughter of Celeborn and Galadriel. Arwen possessed long, lustrous black hair, luminous, deep gray eyes, and skin as white as jade. Her figure was graceful and lithe, and her every move exuded a spirit of agility and grace. She bore the blood of the lesser gods, the Maya, the three royal families of the elves, and the common blood of the three ancient houses of humanity. This complex and noble lineage imbued her with the divinity of the Maya, the grace of the elves, and the free will of humanity. Looking at the elven princess nestled against Galadriel, Dew's eyes were filled with wonder. Galadriel's beauty was as bright and dazzling as the moon, a queen of the night sky, inspiring awe. Arwen, like her title, Evening Star, was a beauty of gentleness and purity. Like a star in the night sky, she radiated a soft yet dazzling light, captivating the eye. Clearly beloved in Lorraine, she possessed a youthful spirit as she nestled beside Celeborn and Galadriel. The powerful elven lord and his wife always gazed upon her with loving eyes. As Dewey studied the princess of the Evening Star, he, too, was filled with curiosity about Dewey, the dragon-slaying wizard. Their eyes met. Arwen paused, then smiled gently and politely, nodding in acknowledgement. Dewey, unfazed by the guilt of being caught peeking, remained calm, and politely nodded in response. He felt a pity that such a beautiful evening star had chosen to become mortal for love, ultimately passing away only after losing everything she possessed. He remembered the final moment, when all the elves had crossed the sea and the aged Aragorn had passed away. This evening star chose to leave the realm of men and return to the forests once inhabited by elves, living out her final days in loneliness and sorrow. I wonder if she regretted it then? But none of this had happened yet. Aragorn was still a child, let alone love at first sight. Dewey thought with amusement, perhaps he could intervene and connect Lorraine to the hearth of Rivendell. Then, he could send Arwen to Rivendell and meet the childlike version of Aragorn sooner rather than later. If Arwen still fell in love with Aragorn under these circumstances, then he could only call it fate. But before he could continue his wild thoughts, the system issued a long-awaited notification. Hogwarts sign-in system, locating Lothlorien. Do you want to sign in? Dewey came to his senses and silently said, sign in successful. Congratulations on obtaining the gift of prophecy. A gift of prophecy? Dewey was stunned. The image of Professor Trelawney's rambling madness flashed through his mind. Ugh, what if he didn't want that gift? The next second, Dewey felt his mind suddenly clear. It was as if his third eye had been opened, and he looked at the world from a perspective he had never seen before. A mysterious aura enveloped him, making him suddenly become very rational and mysterious. Such a change was very subtle, but it could not escape the perception of the powerful people present. Galadriel, Gandalf, and Celeborn all turned to look at Dewey with surprise. That is, Celeborn's calm face changed for the first time, and he was confused. It is the power of fate. Galadriel's eyes flashed, and she said in a firm tone. Dewey, how are you? Gandalf asked with some concern. Dewey looked at Gandalf and was about to answer. Suddenly, some scenes he had never seen before appeared in his mind. He couldn't help but speak. The age of elves will end, and the age of men will begin. When the broken sword is reforged, the crownless will reign again, darkness will rise again, and the Dark Lord will seek his lost treasure. His voice was low and emotionless, as he spoke the prophecy calmly. Everyone stared at Dewey, his eyes blank, in astonishment, listening to his emotionless voice in a dead silence. Only after Dewey finished his last sentence, his vacant eyes focused again, and he coughed softly. Only then did everyone regain their composure, looking at Dewey with curiosity. Dewey, you never told me you could prophesy, Gandalf exclaimed with a complex expression. Dewey coughed again uncomfortably. Actually, I just found out too. Gandalf shook his head. He knew Dewey had secrets, but he had his own secrets, so he had no desire to pry. He turned to Galadriel and Celeborn. What do you think of Dewey's prophecy? Truth be told, prophecies in Middle-earth were not uncommon. For example, Glorfindel, Lord of the Golden Flower, prophesied to the Witch King of Angmar that he would not die at the hands of men. The man here refers to both people and men. Ultimately, the Witch King of Angmar was slain by Eowyn, Princess of Rohirrim. The hobbit Merry, who mortally wounded him with a dagger, was also not human. This outcome perfectly fulfilled Glorfindel's prophecy. Mobbith, the prophet of Arthedain, also prophesied that Aragorn would traverse the King's Road and call upon the dead to fulfill their oaths. Even Elrond and Galadriel possessed prophetic abilities. Of course, their prophecies were not innate, but rather the result of wisdom and foresight gained over countless years, foresighted by the possibilities of the future. So, while they were surprised by Dewey's ability to predict, they were not overly shocked. They focused their attention on the content of Dewey's recent prophecy. Their boundless wisdom allowed them to easily decipher the prophecy's ambiguities and grasp its true message. The prophecy clearly states that the forces of darkness will rise again, and Sauron and his minions are seeking the once-lost One Ring. Galadriel cast a deep gaze toward the far east, a look of worry on her face. Clearly, our previous guesses were wrong. The One Ring did not, as we thought, wash down the Anduin River into the sea. Otherwise, Sauron would not have sweated. Celeborn frowned upon hearing this. When Isildur was slain by orcs and the Golden Iris, the ring was lost. Orcs, men, and even elves have searched the area to no avail. But if the ring is not there, where else could it have gone? It must be hidden somewhere, or in the hands of someone, Gandalf said. Bilbo, hearing what they said, looked uneasy. He lowered his head and unconsciously touched something in his pocket. Since entering this place, the ring in his pocket had become unusually quiet, almost like an ordinary gold ring. Dewey also noticed Bilbo's strangeness. He had originally brought Bilbo here with the intention of letting Galadriel and the others discover the ring. After all, the ring was no good. The longer it remained in contact with Bilbo, the more it would corrode his body and mind. He considered destroying the ring in Mount Doom before Sauron recovered, sending him off prematurely. There was no need to wait 70 years for Frodo to escort the ring. He hadn't planned to follow the plot anyway. Was he going to wait for Sauron to recover and then engage in another battle? That would be asking for trouble. So, Dewey observed Bilbo's hesitation and struggle, silently approached him, and gently placed his hand on his shoulder. Bilbo shuddered, his neck stiff, and he turned to look at Dewey. Dewey patted his shoulder and said, in a voice only the two of them could hear, "Remember what I told you before? And imagine what Gollum looks like. Do you want to be like that?" Bilbo's mind suddenly flashed with the image of Gollum, and he shuddered. Chapter 122, Exposing the Ring. Gandalf, Galadriel, and Celeborn were discussing the prophecy and the possible location of the One Ring. But at that moment, a hesitant hand slowly rose. I know where the ring is." Gandalf and the other two instantly turned their gazes on Bilbo, their gazes filled with wonder. "Bilbo, you say you know the ring?" Gandalf looked at Bilbo in surprise. Bilbo felt uneasy under their probing gazes, and only when he felt Dewey's hand on his shoulder did he struggle to muster up his courage. "Actually, the ring you speak of is right here with me." He pulled a ring from his pocket and placed it in his palm. Everyone's eyes were fixed on the gleaming golden ring in his hand. Gandalf stared at the ring, his expression filled with doubt, eager to confirm whether it was the One Ring. Celeborn eyed the ring with even greater caution, as if he had seen something dangerous. Galadriel stepped forward, approaching Bilbo, extending her finger to touch the ring. "Lady Galadriel," Gandalf worriedly tried to stop him. His husband, Celeborn, didn't stop him, but his face was equally filled with worry. Galadriel's finger didn't touch the ring, but she withdrew her hand a few centimeters away, as if burned by flames. "I don't know if this ring is the One Ring, but I sense an evil power within it, something so dark, so terrifying, so bewitching," Galadriel said with a serious and solemn expression. "The One Ring was forged by Sauron at Mount Doom. To determine if it is the One Ring, we simply need to burn it with fire," Gandalf explained the method. Dewey patted Bilbo's shoulder and said, "Bilbo, place the ring on the table." Bilbo's hand was aching from holding it, so he quickly obeyed, placing the ring on the stone table beside him. Dewey cast a fire spell, setting the ring ablaze. Under the blazing flames, mysterious words gradually emerged from within the ring. Seeing this, Gandalf quickly leaned forward, tilting his head and reading the words, "The One Ring controls all the rings, the One Ring seeks all the rings, the One Ring guides all the rings, and binds them in darkness." Galadriel calmly spoke the second half of the verse. "It seems certain now that the One Ring has reappeared." Celeborn frowned, eyeing the ring with fear and worry. With the ring now revealed, Middle-earth will never be at peace again. Confirming it was the ring, Gandalf asked Bilbo in great confusion. "Bilbo, where did you get this ring?" Bilbo didn't hide it. "When I fell into Goblin Town, I fell to the bottom of the abyss and found it there. It must have belonged to Gollum." Gandalf suddenly understood. "No wonder I didn't see you when I searched for you with a palantir. You already had the ring then." Bilbo nodded. Gandalf looked at Bilbo nervously again. "You've had a ring for so long now, are you feeling any discomfort?" He examined it carefully, concerned. Bilbo shook his head. "I'm fine. Dwar warned me to use it with caution, so I rarely use it except in times of danger." Gandalf turned his gaze to Dwar. "Dwar, did you know the ring was with Bilbo?" Dwar, surprised by Bilbo's quick revelation, nodded helplessly. "Bilbo told me when we left Goblin Town." Gandalf looked at Dwar with disapproval. "The ring is extremely dangerous. Even the strongest can be corrupted." "You should have told me right away," Bilbo quickly explained. "It's my fault. I told Dwar not to tell anyone. He had warned me, and it was he who made me mention the ring just now." "Come, Mithrandir. The past is irreversible. Now we must focus on the most pressing matters," Galadriel said gently. Upon hearing this, Gandalf stopped scolding the two. Dewey and Bilbo breathed a sigh of relief and offered expressions of gratitude to Galadriel. An angry Gandalf was a bit frightening, and Lady Galadriel had to come to his rescue. Everyone's attention then turned once again to the ring. Gandalf, Galadriel, and Celeborn all regarded it as a formidable threat, afraid to touch it directly, fearing its power would bewitch them. But as Bilbo effortlessly grasped the ring, it remained unaffected. All three could only marvel at the wonder of the Creator. How could a race as remarkable as the hobbits possess such a high resistance to the ring's magic? Everyone discussed the possibility of destroying the One Ring. Legolas struck the ring with his elven sword, but the recoil hurt his hand. No trace of the ring remained. "I remember that 4 of the 7 rings of the dwarves were destroyed by dragon fire. Perhaps we could ask Dewey's dragon for help," Celeborn suggested. Gandalf shook his head. "The One Ring was forged by Sauron at Mount Doom. The dragon's flames can destroy the 7 rings of the dwarves, but not the One Ring." He then turned to Dewey. "Dewey, I remember you unleashing that terrifying fire on the battlefield, instantly melting even solid steel. Can you see if you can destroy the ring now?" Dewey was also curious whether fiend fire could destroy the One Ring. After all, in the magical world, the fiend fire spell could destroy Horcruxes. And the One Ring was, to be honest, a bit like an upgraded version of a Horcrux. A wizard wouldn't truly die until their Horcruxes were destroyed. Similarly, Sauron's spirit would remain alive until the One Ring was destroyed. However, he felt a sense of unease as he surveyed the surroundings of the treehouse. The fiend fire spell is a bit dangerous and difficult to control. It's best to cast it in an open area. This wasn't a difficult requirement, and they quickly moved to a clearing. Then, as everyone watched, Dewey unleashed fiend fire on the ring on the ground. A pale blue fiery flame erupted from the wand, coating the ring. The fiery flame raged, attempting to spread and strengthen itself, even threatening to retaliate and burn the wand. Dewey yanked hard, reducing the fiery flame to a small point. Though small, it carried an aura of destructive power, filling the surrounding crowd with a solemn expression. Their anticipation grew. Surely such a terrifying fire could unleash the One Ring? As time passed, the scorching fiery flame had already scorched a vast crater in the solid ground, yet the One Ring remained unchanged. No, there was a change. The ring itself glowed crimson, as if it were ablaze. This sight shone brightly. Remember, when the flames had previously burned the ring, only the inscriptions on it had appeared, while the ring itself remained cold. Now, however, something different had occurred. Seeing this, Dewey perked up, and immediately increased the firepower, continuously burning the ring with a fiery flame. Time flew by in a flash. An hour, 2 hours. Gandalf and the elves were patient, quietly observing the ring's transformation, seemingly unfazed. Dewey, likewise enveloped by the power of Gandalf's ring of fire, showed no sign of fatigue. After a day and a night, Dewey finally extinguished the fiend fire. He lifted the ring with his wand and examined it carefully. Seeing the ring still smooth, he couldn't help but frown. Is it useless? No, it is. The flames have burned away some of the ring's power, and it has become much dimmer now, Galadriel said, approaching and examining the ring. Everyone hurried to examine it closely, realizing that the ring's luster had indeed dimmed. Without a close look, this would have been completely invisible. Their confidence in destroying the ring was instantly boosted. How long will it take to completely consume the ring? Dewey asked anxiously. With the current power of the fire, it should only take about 1,000 years to completely destroy it, Galadriel said, slowly approaching the ring and sensing it for a moment. But once your power increases, Dewey, this time will be shortened. 1,000 years is indeed not long. We can wait patiently, Celeborn nodded. Legolas and Arwen, present, agreed. Only Dewey and Bilbo clucked their tongues. But I can't wait, Dewey grumbled inwardly. He himself wasn't sure if he could live 1,000 years, let alone 1,000 years in which he would have to use fiend fire to burn the ring without stopping. He would either die of exhaustion or be drained dry. Gandalf, on the other hand, leaned on his staff and shook his head. 1,000 years is too long, there are too many variables in the meantime. It is enough for Sauron to gather power again, and once Sauron finds the trace of the ring, he will probably madly snatch it at all costs. We must find a way to destroy the ring as soon as possible, so that Sauron will lose his power and can no longer pose a threat to Middle-earth. But how to destroy the ring? The ring is indestructible, not even the scorching dragon flame can do anything to it, so how can it be destroyed? Celeborn always kept a certain distance from the ring, looking at the ring with vigilance and frown. Galadriel looked toward the far east, her voice ethereal and filled with a sense of fate. The ring was forged by Sauron in Mount Doom. Born from the volcano, it will be destroyed by the volcano. Only the power of Mount Doom can destroy the ring. Gandalf frowned and shook his head. Since banishing Sauron at the Battle of Dol Guldur, he has fled to the far east, to the heart of Mordor. That is his lair, home to orcs and trolls, as well as bewitched Easterlings, Haradrim, and even black Numenoreans. Furthermore, giant bats and fallen beasts watch over the skies. Mordor is now a heavily fortified den, impenetrable to even a mosquito. Sauron even possesses the Stone of Palantir, allowing him to monitor the entire Mordor region at all times. If the ring were brought to Mordor, Sauron would likely discover it before even reaching Mount Doom, and the ring would then be delivered directly into Sauron's hands, unless Sauron can be lured out, or his attention diverted so he has no time to focus on Mordor, Celeborn suggested. The problem is that Sauron has just been severely wounded and is currently weakened. Therefore, he has concentrated almost all of the dark forces in Mordor, making it a kind of ironclad region. Until he has recovered a certain amount of strength, Sauron will remain extremely vigilant, huddled in his lair to lick his wounds, and will never easily emerge. If you are listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means it was downloaded and re-uploaded without effort. We warmly invite you to visit our channel, Fanfic World. There you will find the original version of this story and many other novels of various genres. We look forward to seeing you dive into a world of incredible novels. Chapter 123 Destruction Plan. Gandalf, Galadriel, and Celeborn wished to send the ring to Mount Doom and destroy it. However, Sauron had now sealed the area, making it difficult to penetrate Mordor, whether from the air or the ground. Furthermore, they worried about a connection between the ring and Sauron, who would sense their presence if they approached. I think we should contact Elrond. He understands the ring better than we do and might be able to offer a different perspective, Gandalf said. He then turned to Dewey. Dewey, could you please connect the Floo network here? Dewey nodded. Lord Celeborn, Lady Galadriel, may I borrow your hearth? Galadriel smiled and nodded. Elrond has praised this magic of yours before. Let us witness its wonders. It's a good thing Arwen won't have to cross the Misty Mountains when she wants to reach Rivendell. A flicker of sadness crossed Galadriel's eyes as she spoke this. Her daughter, Celebrian, had come to Lorien to see them, but was captured and tortured by orcs on her way, forcing her to cross the sea to Valinor for recuperation. This became a lasting pain for Galadriel and Celeborn. Elrond therefore entrusted Arwen to their care to ease his daughter's absence. With Galadriel and Celeborn's consent, Dewey cast a spell over the hearth, connecting it to the hearth in Rivendell. Then, he sprinkled a handful of Floo powder and plunged into the green flames, disappearing. Except for Gandalf and Bilbo, who had seen it all before and were accustomed to it, everyone else was surprised. Arwen, with sparkling eyes, watched Dewey disappear into the hearth. Because of what had happened to her mother, Celebrian, her grandparents and father were worried about her making the long journey across the perilous Misty Mountains to Rivendell, so she had lived in Lorien since childhood. It was usually her father, Elrond, and her two brothers, Elrohir and Elladan, who visited her in Lorien. Now that she had this miraculous teleportation magic, it would be incredibly easy for her to travel to Rivendell whenever she wanted. She could even travel back and forth frequently, accompanying her grandparents and father. She also became curious about the young wizard, Doyle. She knew her grandmother, Galadriel, had commissioned this wizard to make her a wand. It was said that this wand, also created by this young wizard, possessed the power to allow magical beings to cast spells with ease. Even Galadriel, the most revered elf in Middle-earth, expressed admiration and appreciation for this groundbreaking feat. She even gifted him the Elisir Emerald, which she had treasured for many years. Now, there was even magic that could teleport people over great distances. Doyle was completely different from the other wizards she had known in Middle-earth, his magic even more remarkable. She was now even more eager to find her own wand. She wondered what kind of wand Doyle would make for her. Before long, the green flames of the hearth lit up again. Elrond emerged first, followed closely by Doyle. "Father," Arwen's eyes lit up, and she swiftly and gracefully stepped forward. "Arwen." Elrond reached out and caressed his daughter's hair lovingly, then bowed his head to Celeborn and Galadriel. Lord Celeborn, Lady Galadriel, as lords, Elrond held equal status to Celeborn. However, since the two before him were his parents-in-law, Elrond displayed respect. With Elrond's arrival, everyone's attention once again turned to the ring. Elrond looked at the ring before him, his expression complex. "During the War of the Last Alliance, I was the herald of High King Gil-galad. With the One Ring in hand, Sauron was invincible. Even Gil-galad and Elendil combined were no match for Sauron. That battle was brutal. Gil-galad, High King of the Noldor, and Elendil, King of Gondor and Arnor, both died in battle, and the sword Narsil was crushed under Sauron's feet. Just when we were facing despair, Isildur, son of Elendil, took the opportunity to use the fragments of the sword Narsil to cut off Sauron's finger wearing the One Ring, causing him to lose his power and his body to dissipate. In the end, the Alliance won a tragic victory. I tried to persuade Isildur to throw the One Ring into Mount Doom, completely destroying the ring and cutting off Sauron's chance of revival," Elrond sighed. "But Isildur, bewitched by the power of the ring, rejected my advice. He was subsequently ambushed and killed by orcs near the Golden Iris River, and the ring he carried with him is now missing. I had hoped the ring would fall into the river, washed away by the Anduin River into the sea. I never expected it to reappear today." Elrond then expressed surprise that Bilbo had held the ring for so long without being corrupted. "Perhaps this is the wonder of fate. Fate created the halflings, a marvelous race. Though small, they are simple-minded, loving life, without many desires or ambitions. Even the power of the One Ring was limited to them. And now, fate has allowed the halflings to possess the One Ring." Elrond looked at Bilbo with a smile, his eyes filled with hope. "I believe fate has made its mark. The One Ring has reappeared, and has been brought before us, destined to bring about Sauron's destruction." Elrond, Gandalf, and the others then discussed how to destroy the ring. Elrond agreed to throw the ring into Mount Doom. "But now is not the right time," Elrond said. "After the last battle of Dol Guldur, I sent a warning to the regent of the southern kingdom of Gondor, and Gondor quickly sent men deep into Mordor to investigate, but the results were unsatisfactory. Sauron is extremely cautious now. The entire Mordor region is monitored by giant bats. There are also orcs, trolls, fallen humans, fallen beasts, and even descendants of the giant spider Ungoliant. It can be said that the defenses are layered and the barriers are formidable. To penetrate Mordor and reach Mount Doom is as difficult as ascending to heaven." "What plan do you have, Lord Elrond?" Gandalf asked. "Under the current circumstances, Sauron is unlikely to reveal himself. He might even be hiding in his lair in Mordor to recuperate. Only by forming an alliance and attacking Mordor can he be forced to reveal himself, creating an opportunity to sneak into Mount Doom and destroy the ring." Elrond shook his head. "But now the northern kingdom of Arnor has been destroyed, and the southern kingdom of Gondor is kingless, with only a regent. And the kingdom of Rohan is divided. Only a king of sufficient prestige can rally all of men and unite the forces of the elves, forging a new alliance between men and elves. Only then can Mordor be conquered and Sauron forced to reveal himself, but only one such figure has ever existed, Elendil, king of Gondor and Arnor." This thought reminded Elrond of Aragorn, who now lived in Rivendell. Aragorn was a direct descendant of Isildur, Elendil's son, and heir to the royal house of Arnor in the north. The royal house of Gondor in the south no longer existed. Aragorn was the most suitable heir to the kingdom of Gondor and Arnor. As long as Aragorn became king of Gondor and Arnor, The kingdom of Rohirrim would also swear allegiance to the king of Gondor, as they had sworn. This would consolidate the power of the human kingdoms and form a powerful counterweight to Mordor. However, Aragorn was only 10 years old and couldn't bear such a responsibility. Secondly, once Sauron has regained some strength, he will inevitably expand. We can then block the forces of darkness, thereby attracting Sauron's attention. Then, a small group will quietly carry the ring to Mount Doom and complete the task of destroying it. Gandalf and the others nodded in agreement with Elrond's suggestion. But the question is, who will carry the ring to Mount Doom? The ring has the power to corrupt people, and we dare not even touch it. Who can carry the ring on such a long journey and guarantee that they will not be affected by it? Hearing Gandalf's words, everyone's eyes fell on Bilbo. Bilbo waved his hands frantically at the sight. No, I can't. He had just experienced the thrilling expedition to the Lonely Mountain, and his heart couldn't bear another even more dangerous mission. Seeing his strong resistance, everyone turned their gaze back. Escorting the ring to Mount Doom wasn't a matter of urgency, and there was no immediate need to decide who would go. Since the ring couldn't be destroyed, everyone began discussing how to dispose of it and who should keep it. The matter of the ring concerns the safety of Middle-earth. Should we inform Saruman? Elrond asked. After all, Saruman, as the leader of the White Council, had already been deeply infuriated by his failure to summon him during the Battle of Dol Guldur, creating a rift between them. If he wasn't informed about the ring this time, Saruman might completely alienate them, which would be detrimental to the unity of the White Council. Hearing Elrond's words, Gandalf paused for a moment, then nodded. Dol Guldur was a matter of urgency, and we didn't have time to inform him. But this time, we must explain the ring to him, or we risk losing an ally. The others agreed. If you don't want Sauron to know about the ring, I'm afraid I don't recommend telling Saruman about it, Dewey suddenly said. Everyone was drawn in by his words, their expressions varied. Dewey, what do you mean? Gandalf frowned, looking at him in disbelief. Why would Sauron know if I tell Saruman? Elrond, Galadriel, and the others also looked puzzled. Dewey remained calm in the face of their gazes. You all know that I possess a Palantir, and Palantars can communicate with one another. Sauron once tried to influence me through the Palantir during the Battle of Five Armies, but I repelled him with the Light of Eärendil, a gift from Lady Galadriel. But you don't know that Saruman also possesses a Palantir, and I'm afraid he's currently engaging in a heated conversation with Sauron using it. If I tell him about the ring, Sauron will likely know in a split second. Chapter 124, The Loyalty Curse. Everyone fell silent at Dewey's words. Gandalf's expression was grave. Dewey, this is a grave accusation, and the one accused is the most prestigious White Wizard in Middle-earth, the leader of the White Council. Do you have proof that Saruman is in league with Sauron? Elrond and Galadriel remained silent, but their expressions were also grave. They knew Dewey wouldn't make an unfounded allegation, but they also refused to believe Saruman would fall. In their view, Saruman, while somewhat arrogant and stubborn, had been a leader in the fight against darkness for millennia. If he truly fell to the dark side, it would be a devastating blow to the forces of justice. Proof? Dewey certainly had it. He raised his wand to his temple and slowly withdrew a silver thread of memory. Lady Galadriel, we are in trouble. Galadriel nodded, understanding Dewey's intentions, and led the group into her private garden. In a corner of the garden, water flowed from a fountain on the hill, forming a stream that flowed into a silver basin perched on a pedestal carved in the shape of a branch. The silver basin was wide and shallow, with a silver pitcher beside it. This was the mirror of Galadriel, revealing visions of the past, present, and future. Galadriel took the pitcher, collected the stream water, and slowly poured it into the basin. The water in the basin rippled, transforming into an ethereal mirror, seemingly filled with countless illusions. After this, Galadriel stepped aside and gestured for Dewey to continue. Dewey approached the basin and shook the silver thread wrapped around the tip of his wand into the basin. As the thread landed, it quickly unfurled and merged with the water. Illusory images suddenly emerged from the mirror. The crowd gathered, their gaze fixed on the images. They showed scenes of Saruman using the Palantir to communicate with the Dark Lord Sauron, Gandalf arriving in Isengard, discovering Saruman's betrayal and being trapped in Saruman's tower, and Saruman creating a mutant orc that was immune to sunlight. These images were fragmentary, but without exception, they all revealed Saruman's embrace of darkness. Everyone was shocked and incredulous upon seeing them. Gandalf's expression was extremely serious and solemn, his gaze fixed on the images, trying to grasp more information. Elrond, also observing the images, quickly realized what was happening and looked at Dew with suspicion. These aren't visions of the future that haven't happened yet. Are you seeing them? Have you predicted them? The others also looked at Dew in surprise. Dew nodded, then shook his head. It's not really a prediction, it's just precognition. After all, predictions are unchangeable. In fact, some of these images were indeed seen during the prophecy. But the majority were false memories Dew created based on known events. He was not one to hold grudges. Saruman had repeatedly disparaged him as a third-rate sorcerer, and this time he took the opportunity to expose his past. He wasn't afraid of Gandalf and the others' suspicions. After all, these were Saruman's future actions, and he hadn't made any false accusations. So Dew felt completely confident and had no regrets. Galadriel, Elrond, and the others fell silent upon seeing this. They had finally accepted the possibility of betrayal from their former allies. How should we address Saruman's corruption? Gandalf asked. Elrond shook his head. We don't have any concrete evidence yet. So we can't confront Saruman immediately. To prevent him from becoming wary, we can only investigate slowly and secretly, gathering evidence. Saruman's status and power were truly formidable. Not only was he the leader of all wizards, but he was also the head of the White Council. Any rash action could easily destabilize the entire Middle-earth. And the matter of the ring must be kept secret from him to prevent further accidents, Elrond said. Galadriel and Gandalf nodded in agreement. Now that they knew Saruman had ulterior motives, they naturally couldn't let him know about the ring's appearance. Who'll keep the ring for the time being? Celeborn asked. Since the ring couldn't be destroyed, a secure storage plan was needed to prevent any mishaps before it was transported to Mount Doom for destruction. The question of who would keep the ring posed another dilemma. The ring possessed the power to bewitch and corrupt people. No matter who was entrusted with it, it was difficult to guarantee that they would not be affected by its power. The more powerful one was, the more vulnerable they were to its pull. If powerful individuals like Gandalf and Galadriel were to be influenced or even corrupted, it would be a disaster. Therefore, as a precautionary measure, the ring could not be entrusted to those of great power. This meant that the choice of custodian of the ring fell back on Bilbo. Since fate has brought Bilbo to the ring, he should keep it until he decides to destroy it, Celeborn suggested. Of all of us, Bilbo is the least susceptible to the ring's influence, so it would be safest to leave it in his care. Celeborn also left unmentioned the fact that Bilbo posed the least threat, and even if he were to be affected by the ring, he would not pose a significant threat. Gandalf shook his head in objection. The ring's influence on the hobbits may be minimal, but that doesn't mean it has no effect. We can't gamble Bilbo's safety on the fact that it has no harm, Elrond agreed with Gandalf. Galadriel remained silent until everyone sought her opinion. Then she turned to Dewey and said, Dewey, what do you think? Gandalf and the others turned their gazes. Dewey, though somewhat surprised by Galadriel's question, replied, I know someone who can hold the ring like any other. Furthermore, with it in his hands, there's no need to worry about it being taken away, not even by Sauron himself. Dewey's words astonished everyone. Was there such a person in Middle-earth? Who are you talking about? Elrond asked, surprised. Dewey smiled and replied, Tom Bombadil, who lives in the Old Forest. Elrond was taken aback, then suddenly understood. He nodded. If it's Bombadil, then he's a good choice. Galadriel and Celeborn also recalled this figure. However, in Sindarin, Bombadil also had another name, Eoin Ben Arda, meaning eldest and fatherless. Tom Bombadil was very ancient, having existed long before the elves awakened from the cavern. He even lived among them for a time, so some of the ancient elves had heard of him. Tom's identity was mysterious, but his power was undeniable. Therefore, Galadriel and Celeborn had no objection to the proposal to entrust the ring to Tom Bombadil for safekeeping. Only Gandalf expressed some concern. Bombadil's character is like a cloud in the sky. He doesn't understand the importance of this. If you give him the ring, he will probably quickly forget it, or even throw it away. Such things don't occur to him. I think he's an unreliable custodian. Upon hearing this, Elrond also hesitated. Actually, there's no need to worry too much. Tom may be a bit unreliable, but his wife, Goldberry, is a thoughtful woman. As long as we explain the importance of this matter to Goldberry, there's no need to worry about Tom losing the ring, Dewey added. Dewey had lived with Tom and Goldberry for a while and knew that while Tom might be a bit erratic, Goldberry was attentive and gentle. Tom and Goldberry had helped DUI before, so it would be hard for DUI to bother them with this matter. However, only by giving the ring to Tom would we not have to worry about it corrupting people, nor would we have to worry about Soren taking it from Tom. Of course, we still needed to consult Tom and Goldberry. If they didn't want to take on this problem, we could find another solution later. So DUI shared his plan with the others. This time, Gandalf didn't object. After all, if the ring's safety could be guaranteed, he was happy to have someone take care of such a dangerous item. Even if Bombadil could permanently keep the ring from Soren, there would be no need to risk destroying it at Mount Doom. After all, if the One Ring were destroyed, all three would lose their power. Gandalf didn't care if the Ring of Fire was lost. But without the ring's power, Lorien and Rivendell would gradually decline. Just as Dewey had prophesied, the age of the elves would end, and the age of men would begin. Gandalf and the elves knew that day would come, and they prepared for it, though they always hoped it would be delayed. Now that the ring's fate had been decided, they decided without hesitation to take it with them to visit Tom Bombadil after leaving Lorien. Since no one dared to touch the ring, it was decided that Bilbo would keep it for the time being. Bilbo hadn't expected the ring to return to his possession, but he was still pleased, even if it was only for a short time. However, to prevent the ring from further harming Bilbo, Galadriel produced an exquisite locket engraved with elven runes and locked the ring away. This exquisite little box, a shielding device crafted during Sauron's heyday to prevent him from discovering the three rings of the Elven Lord, would minimize its impact on Bilbo. Seeing this, Dewey decided to contribute, revealing his long-held plan. I have a Fidelius charm. It will conceal the secret of the ring within the deepest recesses of the soul. Unless the keeper reveals it, no one, not even telepathic readers, can reveal it. Most importantly, even if someone learns of the ring, they won't be able to see or touch it, even if it's right before them. This will ensure the ring's maximum safety, preventing anyone besides us from learning about it. Upon hearing the effects of the Fidelius charm, everyone's eyes lit up. Chapter 125 The Secret Keeper. Gandalf had long witnessed the power of Dewey's Oath of Wisdom, capable of forcing even the dragon Smaug to submit. Now, upon hearing of the existence of the Fidelius charm, a contract magic used to protect secrets, he eagerly requested Dewey perform it. The others looked at Dewey expectantly. After all, if the ring could truly be kept secret, there would be no need to worry about Soren finding it. The Fidelius charm requires a secret keeper, who will preserve the ring's secret within the keeper's soul. As long as the keeper doesn't reveal it, outsiders will never know its contents. Does anyone want to serve as the secret keeper? Dewey finally asked for their opinions. The secret keeper's role was crucial, but none of the people present were likely to leak secrets. Gandalf, Galadriel, Elrond, and Celeborn were particularly suitable candidates, not only for their strength, but also for their profound wisdom and integrity. Therefore, Dewey didn't care who he chose as the secret keeper. However, he didn't expect the people he'd chosen to meet exchanged glances, their gazes fixed on Dewey. Gandalf, in particular, spoke for the group, cheerfully saying, "Don't bother with two masters. We don't know much about the Fidelius charm, so you, Dewey, should be the secret keeper." Me? Dewey was taken aback. He hadn't expected the last few to offer him the secret keeper position. While somewhat unexpected, Dewey didn't refuse. Secret keeper, so to speak. He wasn't worried about anyone forcing him to reveal the secret. With the decision made, Dewey began the ritual of keeping the secret. There were 8 people present: Gandalf, Elrond, Galadriel, Celeborn, Bilbo, Legolas, Arwen, and Dewey himself. Dewey had Bilbo place the ring on the ground. Then, with the ring at the center, they formed a circle and joined their hands. He then placed his wand on everyone's hand and began to chant the spell. As the spell was chanted, the tip of the wand trailed a silver-gray streak of light. It solidified upon landing, forming a circle cast from moonlight, enveloping everyone within it. "With my soul as a casket, I will hold this secret until the end." Dewey silently recited his name and oath. As soon as he finished speaking, a silver light emanated from everyone within the circle of light, converging and immersing directly into Dewey. Everyone felt a sudden emptiness within them, as if a secret had been taken away. At the same time, the circle of light surrounding them instantly contracted, transforming into a thin ring that penetrated Dewey's heart. Dewey felt something new in his soul, and only he possessed the key to unlock it. "Alright, that's it," Dewey said, retracting his wand. "Is that all?" Legolas asked in surprise. You can try telling someone else, I said with a smile. Legolas opened his mouth, trying to reveal the secret of the ring, but found that some kind of restriction seemed to be holding him back, preventing him from revealing a single secret. The others, curious, tried it too, but, like Legolas, none could reveal the ring's secret. Madam, how do you feel? Gandalf asked Galadriel with a smile. Galadriel smiled brightly, nodded, and praised, a truly unique and wondrous pact. It has sealed the secrets of the ring within us all, deep within the soul of Dwar. I doubt I will ever find a way to decipher it. The others were both surprised and relieved. With Lady Galadriel's high praise, the ring must be even safer. And what followed reassured them all. When Haldir arrived to announce the arrival of the feast, even though the ring was placed on the table before him, he simply ignored it. Even when Celeborn specifically asked him what he saw on the table, Haldir shook his head, indicating he saw nothing. With the hidden danger resolved, the atmosphere became relaxed and cheerful. For the rest of the day, everyone finally had time to immerse themselves in the beauty of Lorien. Here, there are evergreen trees and grasses, everlasting flowers, and golden Melan trees. Melan trees, besides Lorien, grow only in the western sacred land of Valinor and are said to be related to the golden tree, one of the two trees. Melan trees are not only tall and beautiful, but also imbued with magical powers. In the eyes of wandmaker Dui, they are simply the perfect material for wand making. If wand masters in the wizarding world were to see this entire forest of Melan trees, they would probably be as delighted as mice in a rice jar. Speaking of wand making, Dui has recently begun crafting wands for Arwen and the others. After all, debts must be repaid quickly to ensure peace of mind. Upon hearing that Dui was going to make a wand for Arwen, Galadriel directly sent a Melan core from the tallest and largest Melan tree where Galadriel and Celeborn lived. Dui's eyes lit up as he gazed at the 5-meter-long core. How many wands could be made from such a long core? Moreover, as the oldest maelstrom tree in Lorien, this core held immense magical power, ensuring a wand of immense power. Elrond had given Dui an even greater surprise, a branch from the white tree. According to Elrond, it was a branch he had cut from the first white tree in the southern kingdom of Gondor. The branch was a pure white, and it was unknown how Elrond had preserved it, maintaining its vitality even after so long. Dui was thrilled to have stumbled upon two top-tier wand-making materials. He decided that while making wands for Arwen and the others, he could also craft a few more, either for his own use or to share with others. He might even consider replicating Ollivander's, becoming the only wand shop in Middle-earth. Of course, obtaining his wands required more than just money. He would have to strike a deal that satisfied Dui. After all, he now received a handsome fee for every wand he agreed to make for someone. This was the value of monopoly. Making a single wand took much less time than crafting a batch of wands. While some steps required manual labor, the others could be performed simultaneously. Thus, the wands of Arwen, Elrondr, Elladan, and Legolas were crafted simultaneously. To this end, Dui summoned Elrondr and Elladan, who were staying in Rivendell, to Lorien to test their compatibility with the wand wood. For the next month, Dui worked tirelessly on their wands. During this time, Dui also asked Elrond to heal the dragon Smaug's injured wing. Of course, I'm curious about this dragon you've tamed, Elrond readily agreed with a smile. To prevent Smaug from alarming the elves of Lorien, Dui couldn't bring him into the forest. So, Dui and Elrond had to find Smaug outside the forest. Dui gave Elrond his broomstick and flew over, transforming into an animagus. Elrond was intrigued by this unique method of flying. After a brief explanation, he quickly mastered the technique and rode along, following Dui on his broomstick. Even with this less elegant method, Elrond was a delight to watch, his movements graceful. Dui could only sigh, elves truly deserve to be the most perfect race in the world, even riding a broomstick so gracefully. Flying over the golden forest, the two found the great dragon Smaug hunting outside. They watched as Smaug easily killed a bison and expertly roasted it with dragon flame. Elrond sighed deeply. I was worried that your trip to Lonely Mountain would anger the dragon, leading to even greater disaster, so I had always disapproved of Gandalf's plan. But I never imagined that a trip to Lonely Mountain would not only help the dwarves recapture the mountain, but also allow you to tame a dragon. Duir, you have made history. Elrond looked at Duir, his eyes full of admiration. Dragons are dark creatures created by Morgoth. They are cunning, violent, and vicious. In ancient times, they followed Morgoth, bringing misfortune and destruction. They were considered powerful and untamable, yet, Dwyer, you have successfully tamed the dragon, something even Soren could not do. Dwyer shook his head. Lord Elrond, you are too kind. I only managed to make the dragon submit with a little magic. The greatest of all was your father, Eärendil. His deeds in slaying the dragon and Callaghan are truly admirable and aspirational. The dragon and Callaghan was the first winged dragon created by Morgoth and the largest of them all. Legend has it that it was so large it could blot out the sun, making it the most powerful dragon ever. During the War of Wrath, Morgoth's armies were defeated by the armies of the Valar, so he unleashed his host of dragons, led by Callaghan, in a final stand. Callaghan led his dragons, breathing lightning, storms, and fire, briefly driving back the Valar's host. At this crucial moment, Eärendil, wearing the Silmaril, arrived in a flying ship and engaged Callaghan in battle. After a fierce battle that lasted a day and a night, he slew it before dawn. The sheer size of Callaghan was evident from its fall from the sky, crushing several mountains. Smaug was a mere shrew before it, a mere shrew. Hearing Dewey's praise, even though he knew it was meant as a compliment, Elrond's eyes flickered with a smile. Elrond's life was filled with trials and tribulations. When he and his twin brother, Elros, were children, enemies attacked and massacred their people. Their mother committed suicide by jumping into the sea, clutching the Silmaril. The two brothers were abducted and raised by the enemy. As they grew older, Elrond chose to become an elf, while his brother, Elros, chose to become a human, experiencing the pain of losing his loved ones once again. After finding his true love and starting a family with twins and a young daughter, his wife, Celebrian, was captured and tortured by orcs. Although she was eventually rescued, she was exhausted and forced to sail across the sea to Valinor to recuperate. Despite these hardships and separations, Elrond remained resilient and strong. Although his time with his father, Eärendil, was brief, he was deeply influenced by him and persevered in his fight against evil. Meanwhile, upon arriving with the dragon Smaug, Dewey and Elrond were immediately met by Smaug, who immediately launched into a tirade, complaining that Dewey, enjoying the good life in Lorien, had forgotten about his dragon. He was left to suffer the wind and rain while foraging for food. Seeing Elrond's expression of surprise and amusement, Dewey felt awkward and annoyed. Shut up. I've brought Lord Elrond to heal your wings. If you keep talking, we'll just go back. Upon hearing Dewey's words, Smaug's eyes lit up and he immediately shut up. He had endured the pain of not being able to fly. Ever since his wings were pierced by the divine spear, Aegis, the wound had been difficult to heal, and even flapping them was painful. Now that he knew they could be healed, he was naturally excited and dared not complain. Elrond, observing the dragon and Dewey's interactions, smiled and commented, "Your dragon is quite interesting, just a foolish dragon." "I'm sorry to have you laughing at me," Dewey said helplessly. Smaug protested, but Dewey glared at him and he immediately retreated into silence. End of this chapter. Thank you so much for reading until the end. Don't forget to give it a like. Looking for more exclusive content and immediate access? Subscribe to our Patreon. Remember, every like, subscription or donation encourages us to continue. Thank you all. See you in the next video.